behind-the-scenes trivia and stories, as well as my full written reviews for each movie discussed. You can find a link to the PDF in the description. Thank you for watching.
So who made this dossier anyway?
It was some guy, I don't know, just dropped it off. It's a very well-made dossier, I might say.
Yeah, it's
very well-researched.
Very nice.
And I would definitely pay $1 for it.
I would, too. All right. So here it says something about his early life.
Yes.
It says, Kubrick was born on July 26, 1928, to a Jewish family. Around the age of 12, his father, who was a physician, introduced Stanley to chess and
He
photography.
was very gifted at it. And he played for, like, the Marshall Chess Academy, which is a thing that I'm not familiar with. But apparently it means you're good at chess. And he played competitively. He was like, in his words, he said he was average among the good understanding of chess.
It speaks to his intelligence that he's good at chess at all.
Yeah, like because chess involves like spatial relation, which makes sense if you're making a movie and composite of the like the chemical changes like in coloring the film in terms of like color grading and stuff like that. They used to do it with chemicals back then.
Yeah.
Now we just press a dumb button that says.
And it was destructive to the film, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's like you had to be good at it.
Yeah, you had to get it right.
So that required a lot of skill. And you think since he was obviously smart, he'd be good at school, but he sucked. He had a 67 average. Probably had he had such a curious mind. He would always be asking people questions like, "How does this work? How does this work?" And then you get in an argument with him, and then he would somehow be right about literally everything. And then obviously high school, his prospects weren't great academically, but at the end of high school, he started doing freelance photography and was selling picture stories. There was one about Walter Cartier. He was a boxer who comes up later in his life. There was one about his English teacher or a English teacher and how that guy did his class. And then the most famous picture he took, maybe the most famous picture other than his movies, was the picture he took of the news vendor on the day FDR died. There's a picture of a news vendor. He's sitting there like, shit, gee. And there's a headline that just says FDR dead, get over it, this sucks. And then Harry
FDR dead, get over
get
it,
over
this
it,
sucks.
And then in the corner is Harry Truman to be sworn in, and everybody's like hates Truman. They're like, God damn it. And that was like a very and Look bought that, and Look gave him like a Peter Parker, like you said when we were talking about this earlier, like a Peter Parker job.
Yeah, he just was going around capturing more, which
Yeah.
probably gave him a good insight on, like, that's a good thing to do prior film because you have
capture the
to
moment.
capture the moment.
Yeah.
And if there's anything capturing that picture of the guy like, with FDR dead, that captured the moment. Like,
Oh yeah, definitely.
you
That
know.
captured the moment of a whole country in one photo.
Mm-hmm.
And also, it got him used to the hustle and bustle of being on a film set and getting yelled at. He probably had J. Jonah Jameson there going like, "Get me pictures of FDR dead."
Get me more pictures of people sad about FDR.
Yeah, I want them really sad. Anyway,
I want them really sad next
yeah.
time.
So he sold that to Look Magazine, and then Look Magazine subsequently gave him a staff position in 1947, and that kind of set his career straight after high school.
Day of the Fight, 1951. Still working for Look Magazine, Kubrick was compelled to make this film after a friend of his, Alexander Singer, who was working as an office boy at the March of Time, told him that they were producing their short documentaries for about $40,000 each.
Yeah, so that was like a big deal for Cooper because he was watching these things, and he was like, "All right, so if they're making 40,000, or if they're making them for 40,000, surely they're getting paid more than that. So I can make some money here." What he did is he calculated how much it would cost for him to make a short documentary. So he called up the, facilities of like sound, renting a camera, film, getting his own music, and he estimated that he could make it for about $3,500. And so he did. He rented everything and made a film about Walter Cartier, that boxer. He did the picture story on. He basically, him and Alex Singer basically did the whole thing. Like he went out with the camera and the audio. Alex Singer would carry stuff around for him and stuff. And basically, the whole thing is basically, it's here comes Walter Cartier. He's a big boy. He's a good boy. He's gonna win this fight. You better believe it. And it's like stuff like that.
Like World War II breakdown documentaries that you see that they're like,
exactly.
The planes are flying over now.
Yes,
they're doing very well.
Oh yes. Also, this is sponsored by Bosco chocolate. I stole that. I stole that from Conan. I feel bad about that. Anyway,
okay.
so
He's not gonna watch.
So basically, Walter Cartier, when he knocked out the guy at the end of the thing, Kubrick, he didn't get it on his camera because Kubrick was changing his film. Alex Singer ended up getting the knockout. And so anyway, they ended up putting it together. The budget was, again, $3,500. And then he started shopping it around to different studios or whatever. And they were giving him stuff like $1,500, we'll buy it from you, $2,000. And he's like, well, what the hell? If March of Time is making their movies for $40,000, like they're getting at least that. And he goes, what are you crazy? Well, we're not paying them that much. It turns out that the March of Time was making them for $40,000 and getting like $4,000.
Yeah.
And then the next year they went out of business. So he was like, oh shit.
Good learning moment for Stanley Kubrick.
Yeah, right. So he ended up selling it to RKO Pathé for like $3,400. He said, okay, so now if you look up the budget, people say he spent $4,000 and he got $4,100. But he himself in an interview in 1966 says that he sold it for $100 less than what he made it for. Mm-hmm. So $3,500, $3,400. Mm-hmm. There's some budget disputes there.
And him being smart, like I don't think he expected to make like a big payday off of it. So, yeah. I'm thinking like maybe in his mind he was thinking like this is partially I just want to get out there and make a film.
Yeah, exactly. He had an interest in photography and was
it's
like, I can make some money off of this.
It's funny to think he's changing the film while the knockout happens. He's like, he's like, I hate making films.
He's just like, this sucks. I'll never be good at this.
That brings us to Flying Padre 1952. Kubrick is still working at Look magazine. RKO Path gives him $1,500 to go film another short documentary.
Yeah, he says, they gave him $1,500, but he also spent his own money. So he said he lost money on that too. But that one was pretty cool. So basically it's this guy like Fred Stodmuller or whatever. He was a priest around New Mexico, and he would fly to all these parishes. He'd be like, "Oh, I'm 50 miles away. Let me get in my plane and just go fly so I can pray to this sick boy." And he'd go and drive and do all these like philanthropic things. And that was pretty cool. And there's a scene where he's like, just chilling, eating breakfast, and some girl's like, "This girl's bullying me." And then he goes out there. He's like, "Hey, pal." The kid, as they walk away, the bully puts his arm over or whatever. They take 5 steps, then he goes, "All right." He's like,
"Oh, you see it in the..."
Yeah, they're like, they address that in the documentary. Mm-hmm. So that one was pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. I wonder how he felt about doing stuff like that.
I'm sure at this point now he was being hired. I mean, this was a cool story, but the next one. Mm-hmm. We get to it was just work. It had to be.
Next one is The Seafarers, 1953. Kubrick's first movie made in color. Thought to be lost in history until a print was found by film scholar Frank Tomasulo, who arranged for it to be deposited into the permanent collection of the Library of Congress Motion Picture Division.
Yeah, that's the only reason it's going to be part of that is because it has Kubrick's name on it. If you watch, it's basically an advertisement for the Seafarers International Union. You know what it is? It's the episode of SpongeBob where they do the employee tutorial where he's like, "Wash those hands, SpongeBob." It's all like, this guy, he's in the Seafarers, and guess what? He gets a nice warm meal. It's like stuff like that.
He had no like creative control over it. Probably.
Yeah, it was basically like a 30-minute commercial for the Seafarers Union, so it's not that interesting.
Fear and Desire, 1953. Kubrick quits Look magazine and becomes interested in making feature films after calculating that he can make one for $10,000.
Yes, whoever wrote this dossier must be very, very well versed in the life of Kubrick.
Yeah.
I'm very impressed with the amount of detail.
Almost a weird obsession.
So he got into making features the same way he got into making shorts. Because he found out how much they're spending on feature movies in Hollywood, like hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars. And he's like, "Well, wait a minute, let me see how much I." So he did the same kind of calculations that he did for The Day of the Fight, where he said I can do this for $3,500, and he calculated that he can make a feature film for $10,000. So the first thing that he put together was a script by this guy Howard Sackler, who was I think he was a poet, but so the guy wrote the script. It was called Fear and Desire. And Kubrick's dad cashed out his life insurance so that Kubrick can make the movie. Yeah. Which is a beautiful thing until you realize that the movie sucked.
Yeah.
So they make it, and it comes out, and it premieres at the Venice Film Festival, and it's like an hour long, and you watch the movie and you know when like a film student will make a movie about suicide because that's like the first thing that the amateur brain like comes up with. I'm guilty of doing that. I did that in college.
Is that a common thing?
It's either every student film is suicide or walking into the woods.
Yeah.
Or both. I'm not going to say if I did both. So, but that's Fear and Desire is his version of that, where he's like, I wanted this to be a very poetic, serious, allegorical thing, you know?
Mm-hmm. Do you think that it? So, you like in your opinion, do you think it sucked?
He
thinks it sucks too.
Yeah.
But do you think it's like? Do you think he thinks it sucks, and you think it sucks because of like limitations with the budget, or just limitations with his technology, or just him developing?
It's a limitation of the writing and like his later in his career, he would break the rules consciously. Mm-hmm. But in this movie, when he breaks the rules, it's a matter of like ignorance. Mm-hmm. Basically, the main story is these 4 soldiers get trapped behind enemy lines. They crash their plane, and they're like, "Well, shit, we got to get home." And they run into the enemy, and the enemy is played by like the same actors. But then they find like this hot girl in the woods, one of the native girls. It's like this weird war. Nobody knows what the war is. Yeah. There's no country names, so they find the girl and they take her prisoner. And then there's one guy go crazy. This is an example. One guy goes crazy, and he goes crazy for like 3 minutes, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. And he's talking to the guy, and then he goes and jumps in a river. And then the main guy comes over and goes, "Hey, what just happened?" And then the guy he just told that to describes to us what we just saw, which feels even longer. He's like, "Well, I was sitting here, and he started saying crazy things." I'm like, "Oh my God, I'm going to sit through this again. Are you kidding me?"
Yeah. He just like recaps things that don't need to be recapped.
Exactly,
like,
yeah. Mm-hmm. So, it's...
How old was he when he made this?
He was born in 26 or 28.
Yeah.
So he filmed this in 52, 53. No, it premiered in 52. So he filmed it in 52, 51, around there. Yeah. I believe. That might be wrong. I don't know.
I'm not going to do the math in front of everybody.
So he wasn't even 30 yet.
Yeah.
He was 20. He was like our age.
20. Yeah. Our age.
So I guess I can't talk shit. Yeah, I'm better than him. Yeah, exactly.
I'm just kidding. And here it says, in 1993, it was screened at the Telluride Film Festival.
Oh, yeah. And Kubrick was like, "Please don't do that." And they were like, "We're going to do it."
He really didn't have any control over
if it was up to him, he would destroy everything.
I know. It's... I've heard that he took it out of circulation. Like he was just like, "This is trash. I don't want it."
He called it like an amateur film exercise. There was no bigger critic of the movie than Kubrick, and like you can recognize like because he was still good at like photographically. So there's some good compositions. Like I remember there's a scene near the end where they're in this raft going down the river and stuff. But I've seen it twice, and every time it's only an hour, and I'm like, "Oh my God!"
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But
it's clearly just him learning.
Yeah, exactly, and that's all it needs to be.
Killer's Kiss, 1955. After Fear and Desire, Kubrick re-teamed with Howard Sackler to write another script to keep the momentum. After 2 weeks, they wrote Killer's Kiss. Like Fear and Desire, the budget was raised privately through Kubrick's relatives.
Yeah, I don't know how he convinced them to do that. Especially after, like, Fear and Desire didn't make any money.
Yeah.
And he hated it, and everybody... They got a couple of good reviews, but, I don't know how... He must have been a master bargainer. But, yeah, so Killer's Kiss is basically what I think is his first actual movie. It's very by the numbers, and it's very simple, but it's, he's actually successful in making, like, a mediocre okay movie. And when they were filming it, obviously the budget was so low they didn't have permits to film in New York on the streets, so they'd be filming and then some cops would come up and be like, "What the hell?" And then Kubrick would hit him with a nice crisp 20. Keep walking, pal.
So there's probably no way to like come up with the number of the budget when you consider stuff like that. Like I'm sure he wasn't keeping
$75,000 plus $500 of $20 bills to pay off the cops.
Oh, I guess.
Yeah. And another thing is he didn't like the sound crew. Because he would have these compositions, and then I don't know why he wouldn't like the sound crew guys.
I'm a sound guy.
I don't know if you could tell. Is that why I don't like you?
Yeah, I guess so.
Because he would like set up a shot, and then they'd be like, "All right, we're gonna put our mics right there." And he's like, "No, you can't. What are you talking about?" So they would never be able to get like good audio. So he fired them, and then just did most of the audio, or at least most or all of the audio in post. Like everything's dubbed and stuff like that. So yeah.
Hmm. And who's this James B. Harris character that the movie attracted?
Oh, that was so the movie. So the movie comes out.
Mm-hmm.
It gets okay reviews. Doesn't make money, but it attracted the eye of James B. Harris, who was this guy who was like independently wealthy.
Okay.
Fortunately for Kubrick, and was like, "Hey, let's make some movies together." And I understand why seeing Killer, because Killer's Kiss is like the first, like I said before, it's the first movie where he actually does characters.
Yeah.
Where they're super thin and non-existent, the characters, but at least there's so basically the plot and the storyline is like, all right, there's this boxer, all right, and then he looks through his window of his apartment and he sees this guy beating the shit out of some lady, and he's like, "Lady, what happened?" He falls in love with her, and then the boss guy who was beating her up, like this mob boss dude, gets pissed that they're in love, and then goes to get get that guy killed, the boxer. And then he accidentally kills somebody else that wasn't the boxer, and then they have to whatever. And there's a great at the end. There's like two great scenes where the mob boss is chasing the boxer on the roof. That's really good. And then there's this final fight scene with an axe, like that's almost like the precursor to the axe in The Shining. And they're in this room full of mannequins. He's just swiping at this guy. It's it's awesome.
That's a cool like setup for a scene, you know.
Yeah, just with a bunch of
good
mannequins.
thought
The
of
mannequins are scary.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the one I remember the first time I watched it like 2 times. The first time I watched, there's a nightmare sequence where he's having a nightmare, and Kubrick takes like a helicopter shot of like the streets of New York City, and then reverses the images so it's like a negative, and that felt like the seed for like the Stargate sequence in 2001. I'm not saying that was, but it was like a precursor to that.
Shades of things that he would do in the future. Like,
yeah.
Very original with his titles. The next one is The Killing.
Yeah.
1956.
Killer's Kiss, The Killing.
Fortunately, James B. Harris was pretty wealthy, and he and Kubrick became producing partners. Harris Kubrick Productions. Harris reads a novel titled Clean Break by Lionel White.
Yeah, so basically The Killing is the first instance of Kubrick doing characters correctly, where everybody, like Killer's Kiss, I'm calling them the boxer. I'm calling them the girl, the mob boss.
You don't know? Is it because you don't know their names, or they just didn't have names?
Well, they're not good enough characters for me to remember their names.
Yeah, okay.
But like Johnny Clay, that's Sterling Hayden in The Killing. And Sterling Hayden talks about there's a great, like near the end of his life, he's living in the houseboat in Santa Monica, and somebody's just like filming him in this interview. And every question he goes, like he starts every sentence with, and he goes, I met, there's for The Killing, and they said the director was his genius, Kubrick. So I went and talked to him, and everything he says in the movie, he's just one of those people, like everything he says is just so, manipulating and enamoring to look at. Like he's just perplexing to look at as a person. And so he's Johnny Clay. Then there's, but also like he sets up the characters with actual problems in their lives. Like Johnny Clay, basically his girl is just like, "Hey, I'm not hot," even though she is. "Please don't leave me and go to jail." She's like, "I'm not beautiful enough to get a husband," which is whatever. And then there's a cop who's like, "Hey, I owe some debts." There's another guy who is like, "Oh shit, my wife is dying and she's really sick. I gotta get up some money to take care of her." And characters have motivation. And there's another guy, George, he's like a cuck basically. He's like this smarmy little dude who can't satisfy his wife, and she's cheating on him, and he wants to impress her by pulling off this big heist. This is why they all want to do the heist. So now they all have motivations. They're not just like these guys in suits being like, "We should do a heist."
Yeah. And then this movie also signifies bigger names wanting to work with him in terms of Lucien Ballard wanting to or being signed on to work on the film.
Oh,
right?
Lucien Ballard was like, he was a pretty prolific cinematographer at the time. I think he was nominated for Oscars afterwards, but I don't think before. But there was a funny story about one of the first days of shooting where Kubrick sets up like, okay, so you're going to put the camera here, and then it's going to dolly and follow him here. You put the 25 on there, the 25 millimeter lens, and the guy goes, "Got it." And then later Kubrick sees him he moves the dolly back, and then puts on a 50 millimeter lens, so it's like more zoomed in. And Kubrick goes, "What's going on here?" And the guy goes, "No, don't worry. It's easier for us. So it won't make a difference." And he goes, "Why wouldn't it make a difference?" He goes, "Don't worry about it. It's fine." And Kubrick's like, "All right, put the dolly back where I said, and put the lens on that I said, or else get off the set and I don't want to see you again." And then he was like, Lucien Ballard was like, "Oh fuck."
Yeah, he knows what he's talking about.
Yeah,
like,
Kubrick was 27, and he's just super calm on a film set, talking to like a veteran cinematographer, telling him like, "Hey, here's how it's gonna go." Blah,
yeah,
blah,
like,
blah.
and it shows that he knew, because I think the story too is that like the Lucien Ballard kind of changed it, thinking that he wouldn't realize that it
Yeah,
changes something very important, and he was just like, no, we have to keep it this way.
yeah.
Like,
Kubrick
I
basically
know
did the
what I'm talking about,
cinematography
too.
on that movie,
Mm-hmm.
which is how the story goes.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, but this one still didn't make much money.
well, it was so the movie, it got good reviews, but it was part of like a double feature. So like it didn't get released solo; it got released like along with another movie, and it didn't make money, but it was very critically acclaimed and people liked it. And I think because there's a movie called Rashomon, right? And that inspired this movie, where it's one of those things where they do a single event and then they tell it out of order from different perspectives, and then it all puzzle pieces together. And that took influence on this movie, The Killing, which is how they present the heist. It's all like it's out of order. And people look at that and they're like, "This is the greatest thing." It's like, I understand like mechanically how it works and it's fun. But for me, people like I've heard Louis C.K. be like, "The Killing is the greatest Stanley Kubrick movie," and I'm like, and it's a really good movie. I don't know why it's the greatest, because thematically it's not really about much. It's about some things thematically we'll get to later, but there are really funny scenes in it, like this guy Maurice, who's like this Russian guy, and I don't have any idea what he's saying throughout the entire movie. Like, he's talking, I have no idea what he's saying. But there's a scene where he has to cause like a diversion during the heist at the horse race, and he's like, "How about some services over here," or whatever. And then the guy's like, "Shut up!" And then he knocks him on the head with like a bottle, and then he starts getting in a fight with all these cops. And the cops like start like taking his arms, and then they rip his shirt down the middle. And he's the hairiest man of all time. Like, he's so, and then he starts like he's not like strong. He's like a fat guy today. He's not even fat today. He's just like a dad.
Yeah, he's just
But back then he was
bod.
like the biggest dude of all time. And then he fights them for like 5 minutes. It goes on for way too long. But he keeps doing he keeps hip tossing dudes and like doing these crazy moves. And it's like the funniest thing I've ever. His head slams back on the bar, and it's like one of the. I laugh out loud every time I see it.
Is he hairy by today's standards, or are you just?
He was wearing a sweater.
Yeah, he just super hairy.
Yeah,
it's like appalling. You're like,
yeah. It's like, oh shit, they have to fight him, dude.
Next one.
But well, yeah, I guess so.
Unless you have anything else.
Well, I do think like thematically, I was talking about it's not very thematically like. Thick, but I think it sort of like correlates to what Kubrick is doing in terms of making a movie where Johnny Clay has this plan. It's a foolproof plan. He's thought it down to the second. Like there's no fat on the plan. He knows everything that's going to go down. And then slowly and surely, like all this stuff like keeps happening that just slowly unravel it. Like the guy George lets his wife know that he's doing a heist, and then she comes over, involves her lover, and her lover's like, "Hey, I'm going to rob these guys after they rob the heist, after they rob the horse race. They're robbing a horse races." And then later, Johnny Clay, they do little things. Like Johnny Clay will just, like, he has the money, and then he goes into one of his hotel rooms that he, rented, and the door, somebody's in there. He's like, "What?" And then he looks, he's not the wrong one. It's like, oh, they didn't have to do that, but they're keeping us on our toes. He goes and buys a suitcase to put all the money in. One of the latches doesn't work, so now the suitcase may pop any second, and he goes to the airport at the end. And they're like, "Hey, you can't bring that on the plane." He's like, "Ugh." So then he's like, "Fine, put it through. Yep, all right, yeah. Like that's how he talks. That's literally how he talks. And then they put it on the plane, and then this lady's dog runs out on the runway. And the thing is like it's like the case is standing up on the side of like the baggage cart. It's like you literally wobbling, and the guy like goes out of the way of the dog, and then the money just like slams, goes all over the place, and the planes throw it up in a tornado. So yeah, that's so I think it's just all about no matter how you plan stuff, you'll never be able to think of everything, and something's always gonna crop up that's going to mess you up and trip you up.
Das war fürwahr ein treuer Husar, der liebt sein Mädchen ein ganzes Jahr.
Paths of Glory,
Not the
1957.
Paths of Glory,
Not
as
the Paths of... Take two. After critical success of The Killing, Harris and Kubrick picked the novel Paths of Glory as their next project. It was one of the few books Kubrick read while in high school, but how the project came to fruition is unclear.
Yeah, so like you said, Kubrick read the book in high school, and I think people like speculate like, oh, Lolita is the first Kubrick movie in quotes. Oh, The Killing is the first Kubrick movie in quotes. But I really think Paths of Glory is probably the first Kubrick, because if you look at the compositions, they look like a Kubrick movie just in black and white. He's doing the same wide angle stuff, and in terms of like the Killing, like I said, doesn't have a lot of big ideas. But Paths of Glory is the first Kubrick movie that has giant, big ideas that, you know, are on the same scale as his later movies, like The Shining or Full Metal Jacket, let's say. Basically, the story is Colonel Dax is in charge of this platoon, and then this general comes down. The general's about to get a promotion, so he wants to like take the anthill, this one enemy territory, the French soldiers, and then. And he knows like we cannot get this anthill, like we don't have enough men, they just fought, whatever. And he goes, nah, screw it, I want the promotion. So they go to the battle, and only two of the platoons get out of the trenches and charge. One platoon doesn't. Mm-hmm. So then the general orders his own artillery on the positions of his own men to get them out of the trenches, and that's like the big thing. And then they have to pick like 3 guys. For cowardice, they have to kill him, and then it's about Colonel Dax, Kirk Douglas's character, basically representing them in military court.
Mm-hmm. And this is one of the ones where I heard it's a lot about Kubrick showing how human beings really are. I mean, I feel like a lot of his movies has to do with that, but it's one of those things where it shows like the duality of humans, I guess you would say.
Right, or just I guess a pessimistic. It's it's basically his first anti-war movie.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of like the only anti-war one he did. Full Metal Jacket's not really anti-war so much as it is like here it is.
There's aspects to it that could be probably viewed as anti-war, but it's not as
well. That's
it's not fully anti-war.
That's kind of a dumb thing to say. What am I saying? Because there's that one scene where he's basically doing Strangelove in Full Metal Jacket, which we'll get to later.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe that was a dumb thing to say. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But like in Paths of Glory, it's basically his first anti-war movie, and one of the things, the ideas of it's basically you're just watching like these regular guys get caught up in, you know, the scheming of these generals to further their career and reputations. Like they're basically trading dead bodies for, you know, points.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, it's like Pokemon cards, but with real soldiers in World War I. And like World War I is the perfect movie to show like the banality and dumbness of war in that way, because it's not World War I wasn't about anything. It was a dumb political war. It wasn't like World War II, which is like the only justified war we had in the modern era, or like the clear-cut justified war in the modern era. But even World War I is just everything is all caught up in the bureaucracy, and at the end of the day, it's just like these regular guys who are getting caught in the machine. Like the 3 guys who get picked, you know, one of them charged, and then one of them was there was one guy who. Actually, his superior officer fled the scene and accidentally killed his own guy by throwing a grenade at the enemy, and then fled the scene as a coward. And then he got back, and then that guy's like, "I'm gonna who are they gonna believe, me or you? I'm an officer, pal." And then when it comes time to pick who's gonna be executed for cowardice, that officer picks the guy that saw him be a coward.
Mm-hmm.
So it's stuff like that, and I mean, it in the first 30 minutes, let's say, it works as a very innovative like war movie. There's all these dolly shots that he used, and there's a story that they were on the set, and Kubrick is doing like this big dolly shot through the trenches. They made the trenches wider in order to hold the cameras, because you know trenches back in historically were very, very tiny, but they had to get the camera down there, so they made them wider. And he goes, "I'm doing this dolly shot because Max Ophuls died today, who was like a director who was always using these dolly shots that were inspired Kubrick, but also like Paul Thomas Anderson and stuff like that."
Mm-hmm.
And then the second third is like this amazing courtroom drama. It's like this amazing, like economically shot. It's like it's so captivating. And then the third section is just like this tragedy where you're like, God damn it, dude!
Mm-hmm.
It's really not the best. No, not the best upper movie. You don't go to it to feel better.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's sort of what an anti-war film is. You're not supposed to leave being like Like, let's go to
I
battle.
love doing war, dude. Let's do another one.
Mhm.
Let's do War Part 2.
I don't know if he ever had any interviews about this, but was it meant to be an anti-war film, or was it just a story that he wanted to tell that ended up being an anti-war?
Well, I think it's definitely. I don't know if I haven't read the book, so it's hard to say if that was supposed to be anti-war. But in terms of like the movie itself, yeah, like there's the guy, the general, the one of the villain general, the guy who orders the artillery on his own men. After the execution, the three soldiers end up dying, like getting executed, and also the way Kubrick films that is like he films it very rigidly, where like he's filming them head on, where like they're not going to get out of this, they're caught up in this, this repressive and oppressive bureaucracy of the military, whatever, and I thought that was very interesting. But anyway, so after they get killed, they're having dinner. And it cuts to these generals just having like the best dinner in this nice ballroom and whatever. And the guy goes, "Yes, the men died wonderfully," which is like you can't have that line in your movie and then not say it's anti-war.
Yeah. And here it says Kubrick and veteran actor Adolphe Menjou.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, okay. Butted heads during filming.
Yeah, there was just obviously Kubrick did. I don't know how far in his career he went until he like did a lot of takes, but in Paths of Glory, he was doing a lot of takes of the scene, and the guy's like, "I'm the best actor of all time. What are you talking about?" And so they did like 19 takes, let's say, which by Kubrick standards isn't even that much.
Yeah, it's like
you do 20 takes, you're like, "Nice, dude, we got off early today." But he got like offended or whatever. He's like, "I'm a veteran actor and I'm an actor's actor and I don't believe this and this is whatever, blah blah blah." And then Kubrick just waited, like, all right, come on, let's go. And then after the guy was done with his outburst, Kubrick just went, "All right, let's do it again." And then he went, "All right."
Yeah. That's
and Kirk Douglas was like, he knew exactly how to handle it. He was so young too. He was 28.
That's a common. I feel like this is a common occurrence with him, where he just handles things so well.
Yeah,
like things like that so well that it's just there's nothing you can say to him.
Yeah, like he knows how to keep. Like very rarely would he like outburst on a set. Really, he pretty much he was too involved in like thinking about the movie to get involved in like. I'm sure that I'm sure there's problems he had with other people in his career that we don't know about, but there's never any stories about him yelling at people all the time on the set. I
mean, there is one, but we'll probably get to that.
Are you talking about The Shining?
Yeah.
We'll get to that.
Well, I think that was ends justify the means kind of there. Okay, yeah, and then this is what I'm a little confused about. The final scene wasn't in the script and was invented by Kubrick during filming.
So the final scene is like one of the best final scenes of all time. So basically, after the men get killed, Colonel Dax tells the Adolphe Menjou's character, the general, he's like he does this really big thing where he's like, "I'm not your boy, and you can go to hell." He does like one of those scenes like that they have in old movies where like everybody's calm for the whole movie, and at the end they just start yelling like really funny. But then so he leaves and he's like, "I fucking hate people. This sucks." And then there's a scene where he goes like and listens to this pub of the French soldiers who like didn't get killed, and they're all like drunk and like and then this hot girl goes on stage. She's like a prisoner of war almost. She's like the German, lady, and the guy brings her out the bar the bar worker, whatever. He comes out and he goes, "Step right up. We got a hot girl here. She can't dance. She can't do this. She can't, but she can sing." And she starts singing, and she goes, "I fork, like some German shit."
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden everybody quiets down and they just start like all crying and they all start going,
singing along with her.
What?
They're singing along.
They start
with
singing
her?
along with her, humming, and they're all crying. And dude, every time I see it, I cry. It's like it's absolutely phenomenal. And the woman, so the scene wasn't in the script. You're right. So what happened was Kubrick was watching like this television program and he saw this woman in there and he was like, "Who's that?" And they're like, "It's her." And he's like, "Nice, let me see her." So then he cast her in the scene because he didn't feel like the script had like a punctuation. He's like, "We needed like a punctuation for this." So then he had this woman go on stage. Her name was Christiane, and they ended up getting married and staying together until his death in 1999. Christiane Kubrick, and I think her uncles were like Nazis and stuff. But that's not. I mean, if you're German at that time, like everybody has a family member who is a Nazi. Much like today, you have a family member who's literally a Nazi.
Yeah, uh-huh.
In my case, it's my co-host on this podcast.
Whoa! Anyway,
So, but that's a fantastic scene, and it's not even just like a cheap throwaway thing to get, but it also serves Colonel Dax's character so well because now he's so like, oh, humanity sucks, and then he sees this glimmer of hope in humanity for him. He's like, oh, maybe we still are capable of something good, you know. I thought that was very good.
And so it opens to great reviews. But what
Yes.
about this movie stirred controversy?
It was so since it was the French army in the movie, they banned it in France for like 20 years. I think it was banned in France for maybe it was banned in France until the 90s or the 70s.
Interesting.
And what?
It's interesting how long it.
Yeah, they were like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, that's right. We're still
Yeah. They just didn't think about it
yeah. And then in Spain it was also banned. Box office wise, it did pretty good. It was the first Kubrick movie to like turn somewhat of a profit. It wasn't a hit or anything, but it did okay. And so yeah,
I would imagine like at that. So in '57, I mean, a lot of those people who served in World War One probably were. Some of them were probably the ones who were in charge of France and Spain at those times. You know, like,
yeah, like seeing the general, like being a general and seeing that movie and going, God damn it, they got it right.
They're just kind of like. Maybe he didn't mean to, but I could see if you were someone from France, you could be like pretty offended. Like they're making us look like some of us look like idiots.
Yeah.
you know?
Well, that's the thing about like basically from like every movie that it was his movie, like Spartacus we'll get to, but it wasn't his movie. But every movie that was his, like starting in Paths of Glory, was pushing some kind of boundary. Like every single one was controversial. Every single one was like, you can't do this.
yeah.
This sucks. But by doing that, you're pushing the fringes of our consciousness in terms of, like what is allowed in a movie. You're pushing the limits with every single one. And that's why I think that Paths of Glory is the first Kubrick movie.
Before Paths of Glory, Kubrick had written a script titled Burning Secret with Calder Willingham. It was an adaptation of the 1913 novella by Stefan Zweig. I'll just pretend I knew
Let's just pretend you said that name right.
MGM never made the movie, and the script was lost for 60 years until being found by Nathan Abrams, a film professor at Bangor University. Where do they find, like, how does something like that go missing and then they just find it somewhere? Like it wasn't just in.
Well, it's just like somebody puts it away. It's, that scene at the end of Indiana Jones where like they put the Ark of the Covenant in the box and it's like an entire warehouse. It's all But so that how that movie was described to me is basically this guy. It's like the reverse Lolita. So in Lolita, Humbert marries or gets in. He marries Charlotte Hayes because he wants to have sex with her 14-year-old daughter, right? But in this movie, it's about a guy who befriends a boy so he can have sex with his married mom. So it's like the reverse of Lolita. That's all I know about it basically. And then what was the other one? It was
One-Eyed Jacks.
Yes. He worked on that for like 6 months with Marlon Brando was gonna star in it or did star in it. But then like a week before filming, Kubrick was like, "Nah, not doing this." It could have been just creative, maybe because Brando and Kubrick are such giant personalities, and also Sam Peckinpah was writing the script, who's has his own thing going on. So I imagine like it was probably some creative stuff.
Around when was this that he was coming up with? Are these all in similar time periods?
Yeah, like Burning Secret was like before Paths of Glory, so around like let's say 56 and 57, and then One-Eyed Jacks was, I think it was pretty close to Spartacus. Because Spartacus, so he didn't want, and then he wrote the German Lieutenant, and that nobody wanted to. That basically is these guys who they had to like blow up a bridge or something like that, and it was a suicide mission. These German officers, and then they're like, we can't do this, and then it just shows them after the war living like normal lives, even though they were Nazis. Nobody was.
That
really
one was the German lieutenant. You said?
That was the German lieutenant. But then let's get to Spartacus.
Spartacus, 1960. A week into shooting Spartacus, actor-producer Kirk Douglas fires director Anthony Mann and replaces him with Kubrick. Kubrick has a creatively frustrating experience.
Yes, because like I said earlier, like Spartacus was never really a Kubrick movie because he came in so late. There was only so much that he can do. He talked about how he had all these notes about the script, And at first they were like, "Oh yeah, we agree," or whatever. And then the further they got into production, the more they were like, "Yeah, we're not going to change anything." So Kubrick didn't film. Anthony Mann filmed like all the stuff in the desert when they were like out in the salt mines and stuff. That was Anthony Mann, and then Kubrick basically was everything after that. And like the thing that's interesting about Spartacus is because it's not a Kubrick movie, but it thrusted him into this giant. Because Paths of Glory, the budget for that was like, $950,000, and then the budget for Spartacus was $12 million.
Yeah, that's just like
So
another.
and he was working
world
with
of
with Laurence Olivier. He was working with like Charles Lawton and all these giant actors. He already worked with Kirk Douglas, but it was this big giant cast with like these huge veteran actors. And he did clash with some of them, where like he didn't like the acting style of Charles Lawton. But again, he didn't have. It was frustrating because he wasn't in the position that he was in other movies, or he was later in other movies where he's like, "I'm Kubrick, shut up, do what I say." He goes the stuff in the because basically it starts Spartacus as a slave. He gets sent to like a gladiator academy, basically, where they train these slaves to be gladiators, and then he starts a rebellion, and then he leads this whole rebellion across the country, and then tries to and then he's basically killed. But that scene when that's a movie when they go, "I'm Spartacus," and they all stand up. I'll never understand who the real Spartacus is after seeing that. That's an Office quote for you.
Yeah. No, it's almost like him doing this movie was a calculated but frustrating move for him. Like he knew, in a sense, maybe hindsight's 20/20, but in a sense he knew it would help spark something.
Oh, definitely.
Like obviously,
it definitely. We'll get to that, but like it definitely gave him, because now he's a Hollywood director.
Yeah.
That can make a big, giant, successful movie.
So during production, he has 2 kids.
Oh yeah, it
I mean,
took so
makes-
long.
yeah.
When were they filming it? It should say there.
They were filming it January 27th, 1959 to July 12th, 1959.
All right. So this filming was was what, 7 months?
Yeah.
But then
2
editing
kids.
it took so long, and also the movie's like 3 hours and 17 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd imagine it would take a long time.
Yeah, was that were older movies like longer in that way, like 3 hours and so?
It's like if you go to like the 80s, you'll never find a 3-hour movie. It all depends. Like there's there's a Napoleon movie that's like 9 hours.
Mm-hmm.
It's
It's one movie.
It's one movie.
No intermission or
I
anything.
don't know. I'm sure there's a couple of intermissions.
I would hope so.
There's an intermission. There's a intermission too, and then there's an interthrition.
Oh my god. And then it's a cinematographer Richard Meddy talks shit on Kubrick. So there's more things that were giving him issues on set, I guess.
Oh yeah, I remember this story. What was it?
I don't know.
That's all it says.
It says, yeah, Richard Meddy was talking some smack on our boy Kubrick.
All right. I totally got that on the first try. I didn't have to look up what the Richard
yeah.
Meddy thing was. So what happened was, because Kubrick was just coming on set and being like, "This is what we're going to do." And basically Kubrick told Meddy to just like sit there and do nothing. And Meddy was like, "Fuck this guy." Whatever. And then the movie came out, and then he won Best Cinematography. So he was like, so Richard Meddy won Best Cinematography, even though Kubrick told him to do nothing. And he was like, actually, it was good.
Yeah,
I like
he's
Kubrick.
a
I
pretty
did
good
that.
guy.
Yeah, he's a good guy. I like him.
It's funny to think that he was like going around like, he's not letting me do anything. Like, I just want to work. And then once he wins that, he was like, I did it all.
He's like, I did it. I did every second of it.
I came up with all of
Kubrick is
it.
an absolute genius. He told me to do whatever I wanted.
So after it comes out, obviously they win a few Oscars. It's a critical hit.
Yeah. What did it win? 4?
4 Oscars, nominated for 6.
Yeah. And it was, I don't think he got nominated for director, right?
It doesn't. I'm not sure, to be honest.
But box office wise, it's the highest grossing movie of that year. Makes like $60 million, which is however many, and also $60 million given we don't really know reliable box office data until like the 90s, maybe the 80s, right?
Just a guesstimate.
Everything before, it's like guesswork, because sometimes you have the domestic numbers and sometimes you don't have the worldwide. So it makes 60 million, let's say, which is, I'm sure hundreds of millions of dollars today.
That's a lot of money today.
It's a shit ton of money. Yeah. So now,
I would take 60 million.
Yeah. But now Kubrick, basically, he was the Hollywood director, and he could have some power in choosing what stories he can tell,
Yeah.
and instead of telling the ones that he can get away with telling.
We have Lolita, 1962. With his new freedom in the industry, Kubrick chooses the super controversial novel Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov as his next film project. Kubrick ends up co-writing the script with Nabokov.
Yeah, I haven't read the book.
haven't
I know
either.
the movie. I never really felt I got it. I'm like, people like I see David Lynch being like, that's my favorite Kubrick film, and I'm like, I don't understand why. I don't understand what the gist is. I understand it's like a comedy, and it's just showing how pathetic Humbert is, and the fact that his name is Humbert is already dumb.
Yeah, that's the worst.
So
name
obviously
ever.
they're making fun of this guy, and I obviously haven't read the book, but what I can tell from watching the movie 2 times is they're not condemning this guy because the whole movie is a joke on that guy, and James Mason is like the perfect casting because he's really good in other movies. Like he's a very good stern guy in other movies, but in this movie he's such a pathetic loser, smarmy, whiny guy. He has this whiny accent, and whenever he says Beardsley College, he goes Beardsley College, and he says stuff like that, and it's like really funny.
Do you mind running down a bit of the story? I don't.
Yeah. So basically, Humbert is a French. Is a professor in French literature, and he gets a job somewhere in Ohio to teach at Beardsley College. And he takes a vacation in New Hampshire for the summer, and he's looking at houses. And this lady, Charlotte Hayes, is like, here's my house. Here's how good it is. Please stay here. And he's like, oh, I don't know. And then he finds some, 14-year-old girl sunbathing in the back, and he's like, nice. I want to stay here now. And that's Lolita, of course.
Okay.
And basically, the rest of that act is basically him like trying to get close to Lolita. He marries her mom, and so he becomes Lolita's stepdad. And then he's like, wait a minute, because he hates Charlotte. He's like, I cannot stand this woman. He's like, wait a minute, if I kill her, I can get custody of Lolita, and I can do whatever I want to her. But before he can kill her, she finds his journal. And I don't know why you would write this in a journal. Hey, I'm a pedophile. Here, read the journal now. But she reads that his feelings for Lolita, and she gets hysterical and goes, fuck you, and then runs outside. And then she gets hit by a car and dies.
Who, the mom?
The mom, yeah. So she dies, so he doesn't have to kill her. He's like, nice. Dude.
Oh my
Yeah,
god.
dude, so it's dumb. I mean, it's not. I'm not saying it's dumb like it's bad. It's dumb like it's funny.
Yeah. Well, at least he's not a hypocrite.
That's the worst part.
That's the worst part. No. But okay. Well, now I feel weird about saying it was a sexy book.
It came from ignorance. He didn't know what it was about.
Yeah.
And in the book, she's 12. In the movie, she's 14.
Oh my.
They had to people criticized it, saying she's not young enough. Dog,
Who's the
you're
first?
writing this down. You wrote down that she's not young enough.
Yeah. What? Yeah.
That's
like,
crazy. I mean,
Also, like, what did they think? Adding, she's 14 now. It's better. Like,
Yeah.
Who's the first guy who had to come up and say
he's like 12. They're like, no. And he's like, 14?
it'll do.
So, what do we got next for
I
Lolita?
mean, for some reason, the censors didn't like it.
Yeah, the people, they were like, you can't do. You weren't even allowed to show. At some point, like on TV, the first couple to be in bed together on TV was like in the 70s or 60s. It was crazy. So
That
imagine,
seems late.
yeah.
Really?
I don't know if it was that late, but
mean,
still,
I mean,
it's like this. The Hays
For the
Code
60s
was
and
so
stuff, though.
annoying. I don't know when it stopped. I don't know if Lita was in the Hays Code era, but censors for movies were always so annoying at the time. But I kind of liked what
What is the Hays Code? I don't know.
the Hays
what
Code
that
is. Just
either.
like the original, censorship rules for movies in
okay.
the golden age of Hollywood. So it's like obviously there's no homosexuality. So that there's that Norm story where he talks about there was like Red River, where John Wayne's character walks in and Montgomery's Clift is like, "You like women?" He goes, "Yeah, I like women." He goes, "Do you like guns?" And he goes, "Yeah, I like guns." He's polishing the barrel of the gun, all suggestively. He goes, "What you like better, guns or women?" And then the guy comes in and goes, "What the hell are we talking about here?" Like, that was the only gay stuff you're
That
allowed
was,
to
like,
have
the
in movies.
furthest
That was
you
the
could
Hays
go,
Code, yeah.
yeah.
But I kind of like in Lolita because obviously you can't explicitly show him being a pedophile on screen because that'd be crazy. But what Kubrick was forced to do because of the censorship, was basically he had to imply everything visually. So all you would see, instead of him like a narrator having, oh, I'm thinking about Lolita while having sex with my wife, it would be he's in bed with the wife, and then you see the back of his head, her face is like, oh, Humbert, hump me. and then you see, then you see the back of his head, and then on the other side of the screen, you see a picture of Lolita.
Yeah.
So it suggests that he's looking at the picture of Lolita while he, and also like people were like, you can't do. People were so pissed about.
Didn't
that.
they make him shorten that even?
Yeah,
Like,
I think
he had to
there was
shorten that.
he had to, they had the producer, I think it was still James B. Harris, maybe he had to convince the censors like, no, that's not what that is at all, or whatever.
Mhm.
So I kind of like the movie in that, in terms of, like, it kind of forces it to kind of be a little subversive in terms of the implications of stuff.
Mhm. And then I guess in the 60s, this is sort of a big crush to be condemned by the Catholic Church as well.
Oh yeah, the movie was condemned, which is kind of ironic in hindsight.
Oh yeah. I'm like,
You're like,
why? Why could it be?
I'm not one of those
ironic?
people who shits on the Catholic Church all the
Yeah,
time, but
yeah.
they dropped the ball on that one for sure.
Yeah, certain parts.
But they're like, yeah, you can't do Lolita. This is terrible. But I don't like, again, I don't know what it's like with, like, when I say like Kubrick is pushing the boundaries with certain movies. I always know, like, okay, with Clockwork Orange, he was pushing the boundary in this direction. With this, he was pushing it in this direction. With Lolita, I know that he had a handle on some kind of boundary. I just didn't know exactly what he was doing with it. Maybe I need to watch it again. Maybe I need to read the book. I just don't understand the whole gist of the movie.
Do you think that he was consciously saying, I want to take this boundary and push it, or he just ended up doing that by the stories and how he writes stories? Like maybe this is just in terms of his thinking that, because at the time it was a #1 selling book too, so maybe he just thought, #1 selling book, I'll just, that'll be a good successful movie too, so let's just do it. And then in turn, him doing that, it just pushes some boundary that, I mean, the boundary there is totally just like whatever that day's FCC use, the Hayes Code or whatever. I guess that's the similar, like that times FCC. That's like, I guess he's pushing that boundary. Like, what can I do here?
Yeah,
in terms of,
well, he said afterwards, like, if I knew how big the restrictions would have been, I wouldn't have made the movie.
yeah.
But I mean, you're probably right in terms of like stories he thought were worthwhile, or ones that he's like, I don't know where the boundary is here. I don't know what's going to happen, or maybe he just wanted to do that. He was doing it. I don't know, but it's just interesting to know that he did. But I do think, I think Lolita is his least successful movie. And I think in terms of getting as objective as possible in saying that, because obviously everything's subjective. If you look at The Shining is, it's not The Shining the book written by Stephen King. It's The Shining the movie by Stanley Kubrick. But when you say The Shining, they go, oh, the movie by Stanley Kubrick. They don't say the book.
Yeah.
When we say A Clockwork Orange, it's A Clockwork Orange by Stanley Kubrick rather than A Clockwork Orange by Anthony Burgess, right? But with Lolita, it's still Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov rather than by Stanley Kubrick. So I think, and there was a guy, I think there's a great thing on YouTube. It's like a 3-hour long thing called Kubrick's Books, and it's just this guy he read all the books that Kubrick based his movies off of, and then watched the movie and documented like how they're different. And that was one of the things he said, where like Lolita isn't in the same pantheon as the rest of his movies. Like, it never succeeded the level of the book.
So this is his last film that he does in the U.S.
Yeah, yes. So this was like parts of this were filmed in the UK and parts of it were filmed in the US. But the way he saw it was like, all right, there's 3 production centers in the world where I can make movies. Los Angeles is the best one, but I hate living there. New York, I like living there, but it's the worst one between
In terms
Los
of the
Angeles
work
and
that's
England.
there, right?
So he goes to London, and he's like, London is the best mix of I like living there, and they have the best in their production level. And also he talks about, like, I'm already there. By the time 2001 came around, he was done with that. He's like, I thought about moving back, but like I have dogs. They have to be in a 6-month quarantine if they go to another country. My kids have friends. They went to school, so he kind of just stayed here.
Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying, or Love the Bomb, 1964. Okay. After Lolita, it's the summer of 1963, the height of the Cold War. Kubrick Red Alert by Peter George and starts researching to adapt the book with the author. During pre-production, the Cuban Missile Crisis occurs in October of 1963.
Which is crazy to think about. Like, imagine writing a movie about nuclear war, and then like nuclear war almost happens as you're writing it. You're like, shit, I gotta write faster. Like, he probably was on TV. He probably was like writing, and then saw on TV, just went. He just like wrote. Oh, but yeah. But the interesting thing about that is because Red Alert was like they played it straight in the book. Basically, it's like just showing how nuclear war could happen accidentally, and in the book, it's very straight laced and like it's this horrible, horrific thriller. And Kubrick was originally going to adapt it for that. He hired the author, who was it? Peter George, and then he started co-writing the script with him. And then James B. Harris talks about. I think it was James B. Harris talks about. He goes, yeah, and all of a sudden we're like shooting shit late at night. We just start throwing out ideas, and one of us goes, "What if we just like." What if we did the scene comedically? Like, oh, they throw pies at each other or something like that. And they're like, no, but seriously, we got to keep it straight. And then, like, however many weeks later, James B. Harris goes off for a few weeks, and then he gets a call from Kubrick going, yeah, I think we should make it a comedy. And James B. Harris is like, God damn it. So, and it makes sense because Kubrick, he read everything on the spectrum in terms of nuclear, like the game theory of nuclear war and stuff like that, all the theories and stuff. And he was like, at the end of the day, like this mutually assured destruction, like when you get to the extremes of nuclear war, it's very, very funny. And he made a judgment call where he's like, all right, let's make it funny. And that's just very interesting how it started coming about as something. He couldn't express it straight. He just had to do it comedically. That's something that happens. Like, whereas like they write a movie and they're like, the third act is funny. What the hell is going on?
Yeah, it's just because maybe. Do you think that person saying the thing where we should just do it funny like sparked something in him, or he just realized later on?
Well, it's just I'm sure that was the moment where he was like, huh.
Yeah.
And then he started thinking about it more and more and more, and then until he couldn't see the movie as not a comedy.
Yeah, which is something he's known for doing. Like he was like a bit of a control freak, but he would listen to other people's ideas.
Yeah, people think he's like this, oppressive dictator on set who was like, no, we're going to go in the script. I wrote the script. It's perfect. Shut up about it. He would, if you had an idea, he would always be like, all right, let's try it. We're going to do 500 takes for everything anyway.
Yeah. Well, like, why not?
Yeah, exactly. He was very collaborative.
It would be fun if he like had done so many takes of this movie where there's like a serious version of it and just like a super funny movie.
Yeah, right. He has two cuts.
That would be funny.
The
that would be
Kubrick cut
crazy
and
to
then
do.
the funny Kubrick cut.
Like halfway through, all right, let's get funny with it.
Yeah, let's get funny with it.
I feel like that's something he would say
Yeah.
too, like based off other things he said,
Yeah.
to
I mean,
people, like,
yeah, like,
just give me magic, or
He would always do something crazy. Like he would just tell actors like do something brilliant. And then like on Full Metal Jacket, he was just asking Matthew Modine like, how do you think the movie should end? Like he just didn't care or like about what he wrote. He was just like, what do you think?
Which movie was that? Sorry,
Full Metal Jacket.
Okay, yeah. Just like you're just on the set, like, dude, I don't know.
We've been filming for 6 months.
I don't know. I haven't thought about it. Nobody's thought about it. Like, okay, this interests me. Peter Sellers was paid $1 million, which is more than half the budget. Kubrick is quoted saying, "I got 3 for the price of 6."
Yeah, that's correct. That's because, but also, Sellers did have 3 roles in the movie. He played Dr. Strangelove, and then he played President Muffley, and then he played Colonel Mandrake.
Okay, yeah.
So I mean, I guess he did earn his money, and he's really funny in the movie.
There was an ending that was cut, along with the throwaway line about Dallas that was redubbed.
Yeah, so Slim Pickens, because the movie was filmed in '63, and Slim Pickens, there was a line where, also he was in the movie. You know who Slim Pickens is?
No.
He was this guy. He was this guy back in the day who would, we're going down here and we're gonna fly this plane. If you look in your survival packs, we got lipstick, we got a Russian phrase Bible, and he would like, talk like that. So Kubrick was just like, just play it straight. He didn't even he barely knew it was a comedy. So, but anyway, so there's a line where he's going through the survival pack. And it's like, it starts off like, okay, we got, 500 rubles, we got $100, we got this, we got that. And then he goes, we got lipstick. He goes, we got 1 Russian phrases / Bible. And it's like this little thing. It's like he just starts naming funny stuff. And it's like a suitcase full of stuff in this little thing. But then he goes, hey, a fella can have, a good weekend in Vegas with all this stuff. And that was dubbed over because it was Dallas. a fellow could have good stuff in a good weekend in Dallas, and they filmed that before JFK got his head blown off in Dallas.
Oh my God.
So, and then there was a cut ending where, it ends with all the guys in the war room throwing pies at each other, and you can find footage of this, or not footage, but at least you could find the production stills of all of them just throwing pies at each other. And then Kubrick was like, "All right, we might be getting too, maybe less is more. This might be getting too obvious in
like
terms of the."
What? That there was a what?
That there was a like. All right, let me explain the story. So basically, this guy Jack Ripper, General Jack D. Ripper, basically just starts launching nukes at Russia, and then he just won't give it. He will not give them the codes to stop the nukes or stop the nukes, and then it's basically just all these people like scrambling and trying to figure it out. But what happens in the end is the code reader thing on the plane gets like shot by Russian planes, so they're still going. They're able to call off a bunch of planes, and they still go. And then they just drop the bomb on Russia, and then the world blows up because there's a doomsday device where as soon as the nuke launches and explodes, it just kills everybody on Earth.
Yeah.
So at the end, they explain, all the guys in the war room are like, well, we should live in the mine shafts. Like, we can actually live down there pretty well. And the half-life of this doomsday device is only 96 years. So in a generation or two, we'll be back or whatever. And they just start planning. And they're already getting in fights with Russia. It's like the Russians are going to be more ready than us during the mine shafts in 100 years. It's like that kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Because they talk about, like, we need, nuclear... that we cannot have a nuclear gap, like the technology gap. And then General Turgidson, George C. Scott, goes, we cannot have a mine gap. Like stuff like that. So
they just shifted over to the next thing, like.
And then that scene progresses into a giant pie fight, and Kubrick cut that. And I think that ending works better because this is the first Kubrick movie where, if you look at most of his movies, they're mostly partly talking about the relationship between sex and violence.
Mm-hmm.
And what something in Kubrick's movies, like, you think sex and violence would be at the two opposite ends of a spectrum, but what he shows in his movies is that it's like basically a circle where you have, like, I guess neutral territory over here, and then you have violence, then you have sex, and then they meet at the bottom, and they cross over, right? In Dr. Strangelove, the first instance of that is when the guys in the plane, they get the code to launch the nukes, and they go, all right, here it is, nuclear war, and like the last beat of that sequence is we're going to nuclear war, and then it immediately cuts to some hot girl on a bed, right? And General Turgidson is like, hey, I gotta go. He gets called in, right? And then he goes, hey, I gotta go, I'll be back or whatever. And he makes it a reference to the nukes and, like, sexual intercourse. He goes, before you can say blast off or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
And then later, when we find out why Jack D. Ripper launched the nukes, he goes, Mandrake's like, where did you find this theory about, the Russians and their conspiracy? And he goes, well, Mandrake, I came aware of it during the physical act of love.
Yeah.
And he goes, this extreme feeling of fatigue. And he goes, they interrupted my fluids with their fluoridation of their water. And he basically connects that to, I need to destroy the entire world or whatever. And then when the nukes go off at the end, that final scene when they're all in the war room, their first thing is like, all right, we'll go into the mine shafts. And then their first thing they're coming up with is, oh, well, we do need to keep the population going. And, certain breeding protocols are going to require that each man gets, 10 young, attractive, fertile women. Now, so it's like, dude,
their first thought is just, how can I get some?
Right, exactly. So you're seeing, like, you're seeing sex and violence overlap. There's like the most primitive form of it in Kubrick's movies in Dr. Strangelove. And then once we get to something like Clockwork Orange, it's like crazy. And then Full Metal Jacket does the same thing. So that's what mostly interests me about Dr. Strangelove.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's one of his best. Like, people say it's great. I think it's really, really good. There's something about it that doesn't resonate with me. There's another movie, Failsafe, that was coming out around the same time. You watch the two movies together, exact same thing. Beat for beat, it's like they had the same script and then just filmed it serious and then filmed it comedically. It's almost the same thing. And the Failsafe was directed by Sidney Lumet, and I actually like Failsafe better
than Dr. Strangelove.
Kubrick was like, all right. When he heard about Failsafe, he was like, all right, we got to make sure Doctor Strangelove releases before Failsafe. Doctor Strangelove becomes a big classic, and then Failsafe kind of fell into obscurity. But I actually like it better. I watched that going, holy shit,
Yeah,
that went
like, this
hard.
is-
That slapped. That went hard in the paint. And it was from 1964. But I'm sitting at home being like, oh my god, you know. But there's something about Doctor Strangelove that just hasn't connected with me as fully as it should. Like, I recognize that it's a great movie and on paper that it works. And there's lines that I like from it like a lot. Like my favorite line is the president's on the phone with the Russian prime minister or the premier, and that he's drunk, the Russian guy. He's like, Dmitry, well, my generals did something a little funny. He went a little funny in the head, and I'll tell you what he did. He ordered our planes to strike your cities. Well, let me finish, Dmitry.
As if the guy's supposed to be like,
Yeah, like, okay,
keep going, let me know.
Exactly. There's so many lines like that I'm like, that's great.
Uh-huh.
But as a whole, there's something stopping me from just enjoying
Mhm.
it more. I'm not sure what it is, but I recognize I appreciate, you know.
Yeah, it could just be partially the times, like, because when that movie came out, I mean, there might be a reason why the Failsafe faded into obscurity or relative obscurity, and then Strangelove, like, other than the fact that it's directed by Stanley Kubrick, it might have just been that that's what people needed
Yeah.
instead of like a serious like reminder, like you might actually die. Like
Yeah.
you get some sort of like a comedic value out of
Yeah.
it, or
That's a good point. Like
relief.
they spent they already spent all day going fuck. They don't
Yeah,
they don't need to
yeah,
go to the theater and
exactly.
pay to do that. They could just go to Strangelove and be like, well, laugh, but
it's
also
kind of
fuck.
funny. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of funny.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's a good point.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's
What?
sort of just like a natural thing to like find humor in like bad situations.
Oh, yeah,
I
Kubrick
guess.
was the best at finding humor in extreme situations,
Mhm.
especially like
So-
cynical and irreverent humor.
Yeah. So it releases. It's super controversial, as is any other movie that he released, and it's a critical hit and commercial hit.
Yes. So I made a lot of money. Domestically, it says on the internet 9.2 million off a budget of 1.8.
Mhm.
Again, it's 64. We don't know exactly how much money it made.
Yeah.
But commercially, it does well. Critically, it gets good reviews, but it's also another controversial thing where, like, obviously by today's standards, we're like, holy shit. Or no. By then standards, they were like, holy shit, you cannot do this. But by today, it seems a little bit tame. It's like, yeah, of course. Why? You know, we haven't thought about nuclear war in 30 years. The Soviet Union fell, dude. And then obviously now we're starting to get a little bit worried about it, especially with Oppenheimer.
Yeah, Oppenheimer came out, and they were all like, "Wait a second,
Wait a minute, I care about it again. So
insert that face."
yeah, but back then it's like you can't do this because like
Yeah,
people were
yeah.
like the world's at stake, and you're gonna play "We'll Meet Again" as the world blows up. That's crazy.
yeah, yeah.
Again, Kubrick is pushing the boundary.
Yeah, people. It's probably like a similar thing of when. What's the Seth Rogen movie that came out? No, not the Dictator. The one where they were like, "You might piss off North Korea with this."
Oh,
one."
the interview.
yeah. It's probably
yeah.
like similar to
Yeah,
that.
honestly,
where
yeah, that's actually a good
There was
comparison.
an interview with like Obama when that happened. And he was like, "I wish they would have like asked me if it was okay."
Yeah, like I really wanted the cameo.
Yeah. No, he wasn't. He's like, "I wish they would have asked me if I could be in
He's
the
like, God
movie."
damn it, you gave it to Eminem. I wanted to come out as gay.
That's funny. I'm not coming out though. So and also the studio lost the original film negative.
Yeah, Kubrick talked about it. I think there was like a 1987 interview with Tim Cahill. I think it was that one where he says, yeah, they lost the original negative, so I had to like go and help them put it together using like duplicate negatives that they got. So like the original, we're never seeing the original film negative. We're seeing the duplicates, the second generation films.
So there's no like I guess there's no digital copy. Obviously, I didn't even think about that.
What they do is
like-
they make digital copies from like with a lot of movies, especially like movies from like the 70s that were not lost to history. They would make the digital copies from the original negatives, but they only had the copies that they gave to theaters because they're not going to give theaters the original negative, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I don't know how they lost it. It's just something gets lost. People make a rounding error wrong in like in Excel, whatever Excel was back then, a
Yeah.
typewriter.
Yeah,
But
just a piece of paper.
yeah, exactly. There's too much fucking cigarette smoke in front of their faces. Is that a one?
Like,
Who cares? Ship it.
whatever.
Yeah.
It's got. You think they sent it somewhere? Or
No, I
like-
don't know. I was just making a joke.
Or somebody just ruined it and was like,
Yeah, somebody just stepped on it. It was like, I'm gonna make some high heels out of this bad boy. I'm gonna melt this down. make my wife some new stilettos. There's the big enchilada.
If you, if you want to say so. I mean,
I know it's the big enchilada because I got these notes in my hand.
yeah,
This is
you
the
got
big
the
one.
notes and everything.
I don't want to mess this one up.
I don't want to.
I don't want to
either.
mess this one up like we did with the killing.
and and every other movie before.
The rest of this podcast.
No, but these movies are, I guess, how would you say, a little bit bigger?
I feel like Kubrick's career is, like I said, Paths of Glory is the first Kubrick movie, but I think if you could split his career in two, it would be in between Doctor Strangelove and 2001. Some people may argue the Doctor Strangelove should be included on the latter half instead of the earlier one, but let's just say it's around 2001 to in between that and Doctor Strangelove.
So, you already said it, but 2001, A Space Odyssey, 1968. After reading the work of sci-fi author Arthur C. Clarke, Kubrick calls up Clarke and tells him that he wants to make the proverbial science fiction movie.
I will say this kind of started the first trend of Kubrick basically doing the complete opposite. Because obviously, Doctor Strangelove was like this irreverent, cynical comedy, right? And it just talked about how there's no hope for humans to survive this nuclear age. We're all going to die, blah, blah, blah. And in 2001, he completely pivots to this sort of, I guess, hopeful in the end, space odyssey giant thing where it's kind of humans have overcome the nuclear age and now they're just a commodity just like anything else. We've mastered our control over nukes. And I really think that's interesting. How he always, and then Clockwork Orange, he completely pivots to ultra violence, and this is, he would never do the same thing twice.
Mm-hmm.
He would make a movie and go, what's the farthest thing I can do from the one I just did?
Mm-hmm. And so the screenplay for 2001 was off a short story Clarke wrote called The Sentinel.
Yeah, The Sentinel was about, it was a short story about all these, this higher intelligence like leaving these objects on other planets and stuff like that. And Kubrick took that and was like, all right, let's make something off of this. And it was interesting because Clarke like co-wrote the screenplay, but while he was co-writing the screenplay, he was also writing the novel. So if you watch the movie, it's just based off the novel by Arthur C. Clarke. But the novel, it was like almost like a novelization of the movie. Like Kubrick was like, you can't put that in the novel. Like he was basically directing the book that Arthur C. Clarke wrote.
That's an interesting way to write
It's
a novel.
weird, yeah.
Like be like, and
So, yeah.
write something down and have Kubrick be like, no, I'm going to use that. Was it like that? Like he
Well-
would see it and be like, no, I'm going to
Well, he would write down an idea. Like it was sort of him writing the screenplay that was informing the novel. He's like, oh, we can't do that. Well, it's not in the screenplay. I can't do it. Like he would only be able to add stuff. He wasn't able to change stuff. Like one of the earlier things was originally the monolith was going to be like a pyramid, and it was going to have like a TV on it, just showing them how to use bones and stuff and like clank tools together. And they were like, that's kind of cheesy and dumb.
Oh, okay.
So then
yeah.
Kubrick, and then they moved to just the monolith, this weird ominous thing. You don't know how it's working.
It's just like, just zaps them into the next generation almost.
Yeah,
Like
it gives
the
them a
way-
big old zap, and then you can see their
Doesn't
skeleton.
it doesn't zap them, but there's definitely that moment where it seems as though it drives them towards the next thing.
Yeah, it's basically it's like it's influencing their evolution.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
for sure.
for sure.
Mm-hmm.
What else we got next?
Well, I wanted to talk about how like the beginning, like from my understanding of what I thought going into what I thought the movie was going to be, like where it starts, just
Yeah,
in the
the dawn of man.
yeah
20
literally
minutes of monkeys.
yeah, which is so cool. Like I loved all of that stuff.
Yeah.
I thought it was amazing.
And
like,
everything is so primordial, and like the cheetah, the big cat, just his eyes are just white and glowing. You're like, why is his eyes glowing? It's like I don't know, but it probably would have felt like that back then.
yeah,
If you're just in
exactly.
the in the Sahara Desert, just like shit, I need food. There's this thing trying to kill me. It depicts like such a simple and empty time in human history.
Mm-hmm. And it's just interesting because like it probably was like, you know, some things like this is the part where Joe Rogan would be like, "Yo, you ever heard the stoned ape theory?"
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it probably was like simple things like that. got a certain group ahead by just learning to use like a tool.
Oh yeah, definitely.
You know.
Well, that's the whole cut of when it cuts to the Dawn of Man to 2001. The cut of when he throws the bone. That's like the best edit of all time.
Mhm.
So when he throws the bone in the air, and then it cuts to the satellite up in space.
Yeah,
And
just
that's
like
actually a
that
nuke.
was-
It's in the book. You can tell it's a nuke. In the movie, there's not a lot of stuff to tell you that it is a nuke, but I think it is.
Hmm.
And so it's basically it's man going from his first weapon to his last.
Yeah,
nuke,
interesting. Yeah. I didn't catch that it was a nuke. That's an
Yeah.
interesting. That's an interesting little thing. And then so we get into the visual effects of the film, which
Yes.
just like hold up even today. And maybe not like 100%, but
Right.
it still
Well,
is pretty
In
cool.
the opening, like anytime you're seeing these giant planetoids like lining up, and it looks it still looks great. Like it
Mhm.
doesn't look fake. And this is all they also did it before they knew what Earth looked like from space. 68.
Yeah, so
Like they knew, like they went into space at that, but nobody was really sure. But I think some of the stuff of the spaceships orbiting look a little, they look a little outdated, except for the one of the space station that's spinning. When that thing looks 100% real.
Yeah.
It does not look fake at all, as opposed to like the ship that Haywood is riding in, that pointy-looking guy,
Mhm.
and that looks weird. But that ship looks fantastic. And then there's like a throwaway shot of the Discovery later in the movie, just floating through space, and you see these two asteroids go over the camera,
Mm.
and they look fantastic, and nobody ever talks about that. That's like exactly how an asteroid would look, you know. That's why like the budget was originally like $8 million. MGM was like, all right, we'll give you $8 million, and then it went to $12 million because they just the visual effects in this are so complicated, and the stuff they did, it was like a 12-step plan. Like every little screen you'd see, like every module in a ship or like a room had its own separate projector being lined up, and they all had to play in conjunction with each other. It was so unbelievably complicated, the visual effects.
It's incredible, like some of the effects done in that, like it's almost like the FaceTime that he has with his kid,
Oh, the Zoom call, yeah.
the Zoom call type of thing. Like that's incredible. That's like scarily accurate.
Prescient, yeah.
I mean, it's obviously like pretty obvious how it would end up, but it's pretty accurate on how it actually is now.
Yeah.
You know, like camera right there. Like obviously the camera's.
And you don't
gonna
even
go
have to
there, but,
pay it.
like,
You don't have to pay $1.75. It's just free.
Yeah,
on this
yeah.
little telephone.
Mm-hmm. But so
Well, how did you feel like the stuff in the Discovery sequences in terms of the visual effects, like the stuff where they're going around what is it called, the main room in the Discovery, the thing that's like a giant circle, and you see David Bowman come down through the ladder and the other guy's on the other side, and you see him walk up. You're like,
Yeah.
what the, like what was your thoughts on like all that stuff?
Well, see, that to me is incredible too, because I mean, I'm sure at the time when it was first released, like they take a lot of time to show all this stuff. Like it takes a long time, and you're
Right.
like, what is going on? I could see why in 1968 you're like, why, or like, wow, like this is incredible.
Right.
But now that we know how
Space, like, yeah,
space works a little bit more,
it seems slow.
I could see how it would seem slower, but I loved it because I was putting myself in that mind frame.
Yeah.
But also, it's pretty incredible to think that they kind of had an idea, like it would to be in space, you'd have to have something rotating to stay,
Yeah.
like have a gravitational, right? Like I'm
Yeah,
pretty
you
sure
have
that's
to have
how
it
it would
spin
work,
in order to have gravity or whatever.
which is incredible that
Yeah.
they knew that. I mean, I don't know, like
Well, they have a-
obviously he probably would have scientists like helping him
Right.
figure that kind of stuff out, but the concepts of it
all
weren't.
they had was just math equations.
Yeah.
They were like, all right, this is probably what it is. You know, same thing with like the lunar surface and stuff. Like, there was a lot of stuff that they had to just guess based off of the best science, and there's not a lot of stuff they got wrong, except for like the Stargate sequence. You know,
What's the Stargate sequence?
that's like
It's-
that's the crazy trip at the end,
yeah, but
which
that's
is obviously that's like the interstellar moment.
how do we even know if that's right?
Yeah,
Like,
who knows?
yeah.
I do it every
There-
night when I eat
there's-
those funny
there's
plants
things-
outside my house.
Wait, what'd you say?
I said I do that every night, every time I eat those funny plants outside my house.
That's just cow poop.
Cow poop with ergot on it.
Yeah. No, dude. I mean, there's things in the movie where it's like, even watching it recently, I'm like, that probably might be what it's like when we get to
Yeah.
take shuttles to the moon.
Yes.
Like that
And how
actually.
it's like this weird corporate. It's like taking the bus to go to the moon. Like no,
Yeah.
he's not looking out the window going.
like,
He's just like,
"Whoa."
all right, I'm just gonna read this dumb fucking
Mhm.
TV in my lap. You know,
Mhm.
I'm sleeping.
Yeah, there's just people sleeping. Like was. This is probably a stupid question. Velcro was developed in 1968, right?
Was it in or was it by 19? I don't know.
I don't know. Like I'm trying to remember it because in this movie they have like things that are like the way
Like
they
the grip
to the
shoes. Yeah,
ground.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
like, and obviously it's showing the way they're walking is showing that they're pulling the Velcro
Yeah.
or whatever it is off. So
Yeah, and it's like we don't, and just like the little throw, like we don't to understand this movie, we don't need to see that he can zoom his daughter on her dumb birthday and she wants a dumb bush baby. What's a bush baby? We never know.
yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah.
we don't need to see that, but it's like the perfect little
Mhm.
thing to just illustrate the world at that point.
Mhm.
You know, she's like, "Can I have a bush baby?" He's like, "Oh, let's see." Like, what the fuck is that?
There's one part of the movie where I wish for one more second he held off because they go. It's like it's a small thing, but it's just like cool to show how like used they are to living in it.
Yeah.
They're just mid conversation talking about like oh, we found this crazy thing. Who wants coffee?
Oh yeah.
And then he gets to the point where he's about to pour the coffee. And I'm like, how's the coffee gonna act in the spaceship? And then they just cut away. I'm like, no,
Yeah.
like I
well, they're on
wanted
the
to-
moon, so it would pour a little bit.
Yeah,
There is a thing where
slower, but,
they
like-
couldn't replicate. That's another. That's I guess one thing I got wrong is that they couldn't replicate how walking on the moon would be because they didn't know yet.
Yeah,
Like, they knew it would be less gravity, so they kind of try to act like
Mhm.
they kind of just pretend to be fat people. Like they're
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
just like whoa. Yeah, exactly. But you know, it's not. They're not like bouncing and skipping around.
Mhm.
You know. But I think all that stuff is great.
And the score, I mean, the score.
Oh
of
yeah,
the
well,
film is just
he
amazing.
actually there was a guy named Alex North, and Kubrick hired him to do the score, and Kubrick was like, "Nah." So he just used all the classical music from like Ligeti and shit like that. That
Mhm.
weird yelling of people going, "Oh!" And you're like, "Oh my god, that's so scary."
That was the most terrifying thing. I had to watch it with a
Yeah,
little
dude,
bit.
I remember
like,
the first time I watched
so
that movie, I
tense,
was like
like-
in a dark room, and I'm like, I was so close to turning on the lights, and I'm like, "Don't
Mhm.
do it."
yeah,
pussy.
yeah. Because you're thinking like I'm thinking in my head, I'm like I'm gonna go to sleep later and like hear this,
Yes.
and I'm gonna be like I can't sleep. Like it's just imagine waking up in a room and that noise is
Yeah.
going. Oh.
Oh! You're like, is that the wind or is that ghosts screaming?
How do you direct? How do you like when they're recording something like that? They're like, you scream,
Oh,
scream a little more.
Yeah, they just like pinch them on the. They just pinch them with tweezers on the butt. Oh!
That's what it sounds like. It's just so spooky. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, that's like that. Also, it's like something I don't think I've heard in many other, like in terms of a score.
Yeah, like other movies.
I've
like-
never heard any like screaming. Like maybe there
Yeah.
is, but not
there's
not to
like
that level.
Some movies have like the throat singing in Dune. I know the Godzilla used that same piece of music from 2001. They used it for the trailer.
hmm
Remember that? But you know,
They use the same one.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
interesting. Okay, so that brings us to I want to give some credit to Douglas Trumbull. He was the visual effects guy.
yeah, he was like the legendary
Mhm.
landmark guy.
Mhm.
And there was a story about him where he was basically just like playing around, you know, doing some visual effects stuff, and he did like a time lapse thing, like a long exposure on his camera. So the camera aperture's opened for long exposure, and then he moves stuff past the frame, and that's how you get that stretchy,
Yeah.
you know, effect. And then he called Kubrick in. He was like, "Hey, I think I figured it out." And then Kubrick looked at it, and he was like, "All right, keep going."
Yeah, just
Yeah, he
like
did.
where you're going with that.
And you know the thing that sucks though is that there was no visual effects like category. I guess at the Oscars for like the director would get it. Like Kubrick won the Oscar for best visual effects, not Douglas Trumbull.
Yeah, which is crazy.
And then I
but-
guess they updated it, which is nuts. That's the only Kubrick. The Oscar won. That was the only Oscar that Kubrick won.
for
The visual effects for 2001. Even though I guess Douglas Trumbull was like the head guy,
hmm
or at least one of them.
Mhm.
But
I mean, either way, like seeing that guy talk about it, I mean, he seems pretty proud. Obviously, like I would be super.
oh yeah,
proud
because
of that.
everybody knows he just like I'm sure everybody like he knows that everybody knows that he was the guy. Everybody like Kubrick and him were like the two guys who were like, all right, this is, and also like they have these projectors on the TVs, and then they have this thing spinning around in the background. There's like 14 layers to some shots. You're like, oh my god, that was probably a nightmare. to make, and that's why the budget went up, because there's just so many components. And then on top of having all these projections in the same spot, and then the background of the planets have to be moving, you have to make the entire set like turn and stuff, like the ladies walking and the whole set turns. Like, how do they do that? There's that scene when with Frank and David Bowman walk down the tunnel, and then they step into the thing, and then they start so the tunnel that they were walking in is steady, and then the tunnel that they're going to step into is spinning. The moment they both step into the spinning tunnel, that stops, and then the camera starts spinning, and you're like, oh my God, it's seamless.
Yeah.
So,
and who voiced the Hal?
I don't know.
You don't
Originally,
know?
it was like Martin Balsam, and then it was another guy.
Whoever did
I
it,
forget. Oh, dude,
amazing!
You got it.
Like
Let's look
that.
I'm gonna look that up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was.
Funny thing about that, if you go on ChatGPT and you type in "open the pod bay doors, Hal," ChatGPT goes, "I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that." Which is like, oh, that's funny. He gets that joke, or is it like, or is he?
Yeah.
Is
Oh,
this
that's
like
funny.
a sign?
Yeah, it's just Hal coming back. But yeah, like you can tell from the tone of the robot or of Hal, like right away. You're like, I don't trust this guy.
Oh yeah, it's like that perfect monotone, like Douglas Rain. That's who it was.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, okay, moving on.
Moving on.
No, not moving on
Oh.
from work. No,
I was like, I
we're
want to
staying-
talk about 2001. How dare you?
I still want to talk about. So there's an exhibitor screening.
Oh yeah, so the
2001.
yeah, so the movie's like taking forever, and there's an exhibitor screening where like big people in Hollywood are at the screening. I think Rock Hudson was there, and they start playing the movie, and 241 people walked out. And Kubrick apparently, Jack Nicholson goes, he told me that 241 walked out, and I know that he was at the door counting everybody who walked out because he needed to be sure. That night, Kubrick was like, "Oh my God, I am ruined." Like his wife Christiane said that like he lost his voice. He was just like, "Oh my God, what have I done?" And then the movie starts playing for like a week or two, and it's getting like bad reviews. And actually, no, the premiere. Yeah, so after that premiere, he cuts 19 minutes of footage, and then the movie starts playing for like a week or two, and it gets like mixed reviews, and the box office isn't doing well, and people are like, "Shit, theaters are ready to start pulling it. Like this was a giant bomb." And then suddenly, all these young people start showing up and seeing it, and some of them were like just getting high and going to see the movie, but a lot of them were just genuinely curious, and were like, "What is going on here?" And it ended. And again, people are seeing like this. There's never been a movie like 2001 done before or since.
Yeah.
Like it still feels like it has the biggest perspective and cosmic celestial it feels like it was made by the higher intelligences from the movie. The perspective of it is so giant. I don't know how he did it. Like the story shouldn't work. There's no protagonist. I guess Dave Bowman, but like it doesn't make any sense how it works. It was something that's never been done before.
And it's something that still people are like, what does that even like? What does the ending mean?
Yeah, there's multiple.
I couldn't tell you. I mean, I'm scared to even share what I thought, but like, it's like one of those things where I could see why there's probably a good portion of the crowd who saw it and was like, I hate it, and then they're like, I gotta see it again.
Exactly. Woody Allen talks about that in that documentary. He's like, I saw it, I didn't like it. Then I watched it again a few months later. I'm like, oh, that was actually really good. And then a couple years later, I saw it again. I was like, this is really a sensational movie. Every one of Sidney Pollack said that. He goes, every single one of Stanley's movies would come out, and people would go, oh, he's not good anymore. And then 10 years later, it would be a classic. His movies have a way of they have the ultimate staying power, where they always get better and better the more you watch them. And if you would allow me, I have what I think the movie is about on here.
Yes.
Not like a big theory, just like pointing out some of the, I guess, the metaphorical stuff in the movie.
I would love to hear what you have to say, and then maybe I'll say what I got my first thought was.
So I mentioned that Kubrick does the 180 turn, and basically what this story is basically, at least the AI part of it. I think this is the best interpretation of artificial intelligence in a movie ever. I don't think a movie has done it better since. But so David Bowman is named after the underdog from David and Goliath. The Discovery 1 mission sequence could be seen as an allegory for man's competition with artificial intelligence. HAL 9000 is the perfect computer that never makes a mistake. But when HAL is forbidden from revealing to David and Frank the true nature of the mission, his programming gets caught in a philosophical knot and manifests in him making a mistake. Realizing he's made this mistake causes him to deduce that he should blame it on human error, given that he has the confidence that the mission cannot succeed without him, because he is the supercomputer that doesn't make any mistakes. So once David and Frank
Slow down.
So once David and Frank agree to shut down Hal, Hal eavesdrops on their conversation by lip reading. His programming will not allow the humans to shut him off, given that he believes that this is the best way to complete the mission is his existence. Therefore, he decides to eliminate the humans from the mission. Hal thinking that the humans are obsolete for the mission speaks to how the possibility of greater AI, concluding that human beings are obsolete as a life form and not as productive members of society as an artificial intelligence would be. Therefore, Hal expels Frank from the mission and from the Discovery from Earth. David Bowman retrieves Frank's body, but when he returns, Hal has locked him out. The mission. He's locked him out of the mission. He's locked him out of an allegory for the greater society as a whole. So now Dave has to improvise his way back into the Discovery. As David disconnects Hal, Hal starts coping as a human would, saying that he's scared. I'm scared, Dave. He's scared of getting turned off. Hal sings Daisy, Daisy, that song, which is the first song sang by a computer, which is very interesting. And I just think, and one of the interesting thing is you're basically obviously watching man triumph over the machine. But if you look at 2001, I think it's a story about achieving different levels of existence, right? So the Dawn of Man sequence, right? What we see is they see the monolith, and then Moonwatcher gets the idea for the weapon. He starts using the weapon, and then we cut to the nuke in the sky, showing that man has mastered weaponry, right? And then we see Dave overcome the machine in space. We see men overcome artificial intelligence, and then we can get to Jupiter and ascend to the highest existence as like the star-born baby thing, right? Before we reach the monolith on Jupiter, and before we ascend to the next level of existence, we must first assert control and contain our creations like AI, just as the higher intelligences orchestrating our evolution have controlled us. That's my insight.
Yeah.
Sorry if that was a ramble. I got really excited there.
No, I mean that. I don't know. See, this is where it gets.
Well,
really
that's
hard
this
to
is
talk
when it
about
opens up for like giant.
I don't want
it
to
gets
get
super
like too
abstract
deep
and
where it's like.
well, what do you tell me what you told me?
Oh, I was thinking it's something of a loop, in where he goes back to being a baby at the
Right.
end, and it's like a loop where always he was the one to possibly like deliver that thing,
The monolith.
and wherever he's monolith to them and start the process over, which it might be showing like we should only get to a certain point, or we can only get to a certain point as human beings.
Right. Well, I kind of like that idea of Dave being the one because I haven't heard that before, and also they don't specify what era of in the novelization he says he destroys all the nukes, but Kubrick cut that because he didn't want it to be too similar to Dr. Strangelove. But I like that because then it kind of shows that if that's him goes back in a loop and places the first monolith, that shows that like human beings kind of have control over their own destiny. And again, it's a very hopeful message because it's basically us overcoming nuclear war and surviving in this giant cosmos. That's again the 180 turn from Dr. Strangelove. You know,
but also it also could be that it could not be a loop. It could be like he's a baby and he's going back to.
It's so funny to say that he's a baby.
He's like a starborn baby, but it could also be that because if you think about it, when you look at the Dawn of Man portion, it is very like Mad Max Fury Road looking too. Like it could have been that he's sent away to like hold human knowledge and has to go back and restart everything after a big nuclear fallout or something.
That's a good idea.
See, now we're just like rambling. Okay, so now we start with a movie that wasn't made, but I think both of us would have loved if it was made, and that's Napoleon. Napoleon. Okay. After the success of 2001, Kubrick wants to make the definitive Napoleon movie. The movie got as far as pre-production. It was shaping up to be the most expensive movie ever made, and then Waterloo released in October 1970 and bombed hard.
Yes, Napoleon was like somebody Kubrick was obsessed with. He knew like everything about him. The research that he put into that movie was insane. If you look at like in the Stanley Kubrick Museum, they have like all these drawers where in these drawers was like thousands of index cards, and on each index card was a day, and on that day is what Napoleon did. He basically had his entire life like mapped out, and he wrote the script. It was basically like a cradle to grave story, and birth to death. And the weird thing is, because in the Jan Harlan, who was Kubrick's producer and brother-in-law, I think he was Christian's brother. He says that once Waterloo bombed, they canceled the movie, but Kubrick started writing the script to Clockwork Orange before that movie came out. So I don't know if it was shaping up to be a bomb or whatever, or maybe he realized, they just did a movie for Waterloo. Let's delay this. But the moment of him switching from Napoleon into Clockwork Orange is a little squirrely. I don't know where it was. Maybe he was already writing the script before he started work on Napoleon. I don't know.
Maybe there was something in his research also that was like thinking, because as a history buff myself, maybe he found some things where he's like, I can't tell all this in one movie, and he was like, I don't want to do wrong by trying to fit it all into one movie, sort of like,
well, a lot of people say like that you need like a mini series for Napoleon's life. But I mean, if anybody could have done it in one movie, it could have been Kubrick.
I mean, I still would have loved to seen it.
It still would have been even people would still be like, it's not the definitive thing. It still would have been awesome. He was like talking with like the Romanian army about just getting like their soldiers as extras. He was gonna have like 50,000 extras in one scene. He developed these paper costumes for guys all the way in the back of the frame, instead of just like spending a shit ton of money on all these. He just had these pieces of paper that he had him wear.
I actually didn't know this. Jack Nicholson as Napoleon.
Yeah.
And Audrey Hepburn as Josephine. That would have been sick.
Imagine Jack Nicholson as Napoleon just being like,
doing
that crazy face. Josephine, darling, light of my life.
Do you think it would
I said I don't have a Napoleon complex. I don't know why everybody thinks I'm so short.
What
these
even
days.
does that
I'm
mean?
a completely normal height. Isn't that fun? Imagine if he came back to life and people are like, what, you got a Napoleon complex? He's like, what's that? It's like, it's when you're really short and you're like, you have a big temper. He's like, what? I wasn't short. Like a fucking...
How tall was he? I don't even know.
He was like 5'7", 5'6". He was like, I mean, short by today's standards, but I guess...
That's probably average size for that.
Yeah, he was like a normal dude.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. And then a lot of the pre-production resources, like costumes, were used for Barry Lyndon years later. Oh, that's all right. That's good.
A lot of that research went into Barry Lyndon because he's like, I need to make something from this time period.
A Clockwork Orange, 1971. After quitting on Napoleon, Kubrick chooses A Clockwork Orange by Anthony Burgess. Burgess or Burgess?
Burgessano.
Yeah. And again, enlists the author to help adapt the book. The book is already super controversial. Part of the reason he chooses it is to prove he can still make a cheap movie after 2001 and Napoleon.
Yeah, so he wrote he had Burgess write a script for the movie, and then he said he didn't like it, so Kubrick just finished the script on his own. And I think this might be like the fastest turnaround for a Kubrick movie.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know exactly when the writing happened, but like assuming that it started like in 1970, at least early 1970, then that's 2 years that he made, that he wrote, directed, and edited that movie and released it inside 2 years.
Well,
which is a crazy
the
turnaround
filming
time.
Started in September.
Yeah, so the writing had to have started, however many months before that. Probably like at the earliest, maybe January. I don't know. That's very interesting.
Maybe there wasn't. I mean, there's definitely writing, but maybe like in terms of, I know like this movie was partially like let the actor do or act like the actors do like random stuff, right?
Yeah.
There's probably parts of
Well,
it.
he was
I don't
always
know. It seems
he
like
was
that
always
kind of
open. Like
thing.
we said before, like he's always open to like just anybody's ideas. Like, all right, let's try it that way or whatever. I don't know if there was improvisation. There, the one thing that was improvised was Alex singing in the rain. Malcolm McDowell just did that, and then Kubrick was like, called up and was like, "Give me the rights to that song right now,
Yeah.
or else I'm gonna die."
Yeah.
He didn't say that. I made that part up.
Oh shit. Yeah. So this says it might have been the first time Kubrick destroyed all the copies of deleted scenes.
Yes, there was some deleted
Interesting.
scenes. There was also he read the American version of the novel, but for the European or I guess the English or European version, there was an extra chapter where Alex at the end is like, "Oh, I'm a family man now, and don't even worry about it." And Kubrick was like, "That's kind of shitty." So even after he realized that he was reading like the book without the ending in it, he was still like, "That's not good."
Mm-hmm.
But there was some deleted scenes, and there was like the first time that he just destroyed the copies of the scenes, and we don't have any record of them. He did that with The Shining. There was an ending of The Shining he destroyed. I don't know why he was so anxious about. He was also, I think, maybe he was just obsessed with like what's in the movie is what you should interpret, and not like maybe that's why he was so secretive around the productions. I don't know.
Yeah, I could see that being why he knew that like at that point, 2001, he'd probably been hearing like a bunch of people trying to tell him what the movie was about or something.
Yeah,
and then he just didn't want to hear it.
Yeah.
So like I felt maybe if he had like some deleted scenes and somebody got a hold of it, and then it implied something different.
Yeah.
Or was too
right. He doesn't
too
like
implying of
with
something.
with the Shining. We'll get to that. There was an ending that like really impacted.
Yeah.
But it's funny. It's the only time he ever explained what 2001 meant. There was a documentary for The Shining, and it was like this Asian guy going around Pinewood Studios and being like, "Hey, this is where we shot this. This is where we shot this." And then he gets on a call with Kubrick, and then Kubrick just explains 2001 to him. And the guy just goes, "Mr. Kubrick, what is the meaning of 2001?" And Kubrick just goes, "Oh yeah, so basically what happens is that he's in this alien zoo, and then they reincarnate him into this star baby, and then he just explains the whole thing, and then he just explains The Shining, and the guy's like, "Thank you," like he has no idea what he just got out of this man, like he just got like the most private, secretive director of all time just explain his two most highly debated movies.
Is there a recording of this?
Yes, it's a phone recording of Kubrick just spoiling everything. Yeah, and then the ghost of The Shining, and then this happens. It's crazy.
That's crazy.
And the guy just goes, "Yes, thank you,
Yeah,
bye."
cool word.
Yeah, nice.
He just doesn't even know what movie he's talking about.
Yeah, exactly. So, but I think Clockwork Orange to me is another movie where like the idea of it is like, oh, that's a good movie. But then when I watch it, I don't get that upset about the ultra violence in it, because it's like obviously by today's standards, like we've seen some crazy stuff. It's more about just like the substance of the violence happening. That's like very scary and horrifying, more than the actual like physical acts on screen. But I do think it's just too talky. I know Roger Ebert said the same thing. It's like a lot of talking a lot of times. And like that's true. Like there's a lot of scenes where it's like a 5-minute scene and Kubrick just holds on one shot, which I don't mind as long as it's interesting. But there's a lot of and also just like the language of like, "Oh, I've got trousers in me Gullivers," and I'm like, what does that mean? And then like somebody says brain like 2 scenes later, I'm like, oh, it meant the brain, which I guess it kind of keeps you on your toes. But I don't know. What you've seen it, right?
Yeah. There, in terms of the violence, like, yeah, by today's standards, it's not anything super crazy. But I always remember something that sticks with me is like the scene where they like kill like the homeless guy, or right?
They beat the shit out of him. Yeah.
Well, either way, like I always thought that was just like that stuck with me because I felt like so bad.
Yeah.
When the first time I saw it, I was like, that's so like horrible.
Yeah.
Like just thinking about something like that happening, because it does happen apparently, but like it's just.
And also like I remember when I first watched the movie, I'm like, nice, and then I wasn't
You said
nice.
nice one.
No, but I was like,
Wow.
all right, that's
Wow.
crazy. And then I realized that they're all like 16. I'm like, God damn,
Yeah.
they're not even out of school yet. That's like, that's crazy that they're basically these psychopaths or whatever. But
And it was also like confusing. Like, what was that club that they're like hanging out at in the beginning?
that's
like,
that was like, I like it as an opening shot because it's like, what is going on? I don't recognize anything in here.
Yeah.
Why is he wearing one mascara eyelash thing? Why is there milk coming out of these ladies' statue breasts?
Yeah.
It's crazy. I kind of like it. I do like this movie. I do think
Catches
it's
your
really good.
attention. That
Yes.
definitely catches your attention.
And it's just on his big face.
It's funny to think like if you walked onto a set that wasn't Stanley Kubrick directing that movie and you saw that, you'd be like,
You're just like, what the
what
hell
did I
is
get
this?
myself into? Like, what is this crap?
You're like,
Like,
God damn it, this
yeah,
movie
right.
sucks. I'm doing some weird shit.
What are these guys standing here with their crotches out, like just literally doing nothing in the scene,
Yeah.
just there? Like,
Yeah,
you'd probably be pretty concerned about it.
yeah.
And then, so Emilio de Alessandro.
Yes. So he wrote a book on Stanley Kubrick called Stanley Kubrick and Me, which is that book.
Oh,
with
that's that.
Stanley
Okay.
Kubrick's big black and white face on there. And it's excellent. He worked at, what are you thinking? I said big black and white.
Oh, keep
Um,
keep with
But
the
he
movies.
worked as Kubrick's assistant for like 30 years. He was basically, Kubrick had a bunch of assistants. But that book is amazing because it really gets into who Kubrick was and how he was at home. And he recounts like his first run-in with a Kubrick production is, you know the scene when he kills the cat lady? And there's that big giant like dick statue that's like bobbing back and forth or whatever. He had Emilio de Alessandro delivered that because he was like a driver. He was a race car driver, and then he was driving for like work. And then he delivered that, and then like a few months later, Hawk Films called him up. Was like, "Hey, do you want to work for us?" And then he kept working for Kubrick and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. So why this movie is the most controversial one of his career?
I think it is.
Yeah, I mean, I guess
I think this movie was the first Joker because the budget was like relatively. The budget was cheap. It was like what 2 point something million, but then it made 114 million worldwide, which by today's standards is like 800 million.
Mm-hmm.
It was the first Joker and it came out in the media. The way the media handled this movie, it was like the same thing as the Joker. Like, this is going to incite violence, and this is crazy. There was a kid. I think they called him the Clockwork Orange kid, and he said, "Oh, he committed crimes because of Clockwork Orange." And then, but it turned out, and then the media was like, "See, this movie's dangerous. You shouldn't watch it." And then it turned out that he hadn't seen the movie. He was talking about the book.
Yeah,
But the book was already controversial, of course. But they were claiming that there was all these copycat murders and shit like that, and it got crazy. Where there's a documentary which I have to see called A Forbidden Orange, and it talks about how it was like banned in the UK. It was pulled from the UK release at the request of Kubrick because Kubrick started to get death threats. People were like, "I'm going to come." Woody Allen talks about. He goes, I saw a review that says Stanley Kubrick should be physically harmed for making that movie. He goes, now that's a bad review.
Yeah.
So Kubrick went to Warner Brothers. Was like, look, can you pull this from this in? Like like I got a family dog.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
And so he made a shit ton of money. But that's I think definitely the most controversial. The fact that he had to stop the movie. That I don't
The fact that
think
someone like him would listen.
Somebody- yeah,
and be
some-
like,
somebody
okay,
who's
let's-
so obsessive and relentless was like,
Mhm.
all right, I'll take it out. But
Yeah.
you know, it's also he was a family man. People talk shit about him like, oh, he's this weird recluse. Nah, he was like a giant family guy. He loved not like Peter Griffin.
movies, movies.
Yeah. But in terms of like my like when I talked about Doctor Strangelove, when I talked about the relationship between sex and violence, I think this movie might be the most explicitly that.
Mm.
'Cause it's like if you take like the most extreme form of love, what do you get?
Strange love.
Sex.
Oh,
Right? If you get the most extreme form of
I
hate.
said strange love.
Strange love?
I was like, what?
But if you the most extreme manifestation, I guess, of hatred would be violence,
Yeah,
right? And then what's one act that is both of those things?
rape.
Yep. And that's all over this movie, dude. And these poor ladies, dude. Like every time a woman gets raped in this movie, it's like, God damn it, that's real.
Yeah.
That looks crazy. That was that imagery is what struck me the most in the movie. I'm like, that's crazy.
Mhm.
Like I haven't seen stuff like that even today.
I get that point. The like violence and all that stuff in this movie is like it hits you in a weird way where you're like, it makes me uncomfortable.
Like, and this is again, nobody had done this before. It's so ultra violent, and the reason why it causes so much controversy, I have written down here, is the whole idea of the movie is that when you take away a man's ability to choose, he ceases to be a man, right? And I saw this explained in that same thing, Kubrick's books, that same video, where the guy talks about if a lesser director wants to prove a point, like let's say he wants to talk about how the death penalty is wrong, a lesser director would say, okay, this man is innocent and he got killed because of the death penalty. See, it's wrong. But what Kubrick would say is, no, well, if the death penalty is really wrong, then we should show people why it's wrong to kill a guilty person instead. Alex, so that's basically what he's doing with Alex. Because Alex isn't a good boy who gets messed up into something and then they mess with his brain and then they take away his ability to choose. He's a terrible person who should be shot and killed and then reanimated and then shot and killed again, right? But what he does is take the hard route and go, no, this is why we cannot live in a totalitarian society where they control your behavior. if you step out of line. Like, people need the freedom to choose between bad or good, or else they cease to be a person. That's a super hard idea
Mm-hmm.
to communicate in a movie, and that's why it's so controversial. Is because it's such a difficult philosophical thing to deal with, and that's basically what he's doing in this with Alex.
Mm-hmm. I forget Alex in the movie. Alex is like the like he. What are his upbringings? I can't remember. He's like
All right, so
has a family and everything.
right,
like,
he lives with his mom and dad.
Yeah, yeah,
And his
he's
mom
like-
and dad
has
like,
a-
did you have fun at work? You see him rape a lady, and then it's like, hey, did you have fun at work? And he's like, shut up, mom.
Mm-hmm.
I like how he talks to how he's always like, even when there's people right next to him, it sounds like he's yelling it to them in another room.
Mm-hmm.
He's always like, yeah, bloody my Gulliver's hurting. But Malcolm McDowell is great in it too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
Is that it with
Yeah, I guess
Clockwork
so.
Orange? Do you have anything to say?
no, I feel like I said most of.
Also, there's like a thing about the media, like the way it wraps up when the media, the government teams up with Alex in order to and to salvage their image.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I like the government. They're doing a government and media thing. I don't know how how that relates to the rest of the movie. Like philosophically, I don't know what that's trying to say about the media. I know it's saying something. I've watched the movie like 3 or 4 times. Maybe I need to watch it again and think about it a little bit harder.
Mm-hmm.
But the whole thing about like the media's role in whatever's happening is kind of a little bit lost on me.
So that brings us.
Continue.
So that brings us to Barry Lyndon, 1975. Reportedly, for his next project, Kubrick wanted to repurpose the extensive research he put into Napoleon into his next movie. So he adapts The Luck of Barry Lyndon by William Makepeace Thackeray.
He's really piecing those Thackeray's, dude.
Is that like nickname or like?
I guess it's like
Okay.
it's like Ron Artest and renaming himself Meta World Peace.
Okay, okay.
Make peace.
I was like, what?
Just keep going.
Okay. The first time in his career, Kubrick writes the screenplay by himself.
Yeah, because the writer's dead, so he's like, well, shit. Barry Lyndon is interesting because that was like again. Like I said, 2001 to Clockwork Orange, total 180,
Mhm.
right? And Clockwork Orange to Barry Lyndon, total 180. In Clockwork Orange, we're seeing this incredibly open, socially open, disgusting, hedonistic, ultra-violent society, repugnant
Mhm.
society. And then Kubrick immediately goes to this extremely traditional, aristocratic, repressive society where everybody dresses up as dolls and they're all dumb and
Mhm.
ooh, fruity tooty. Not like in a
Yeah, yeah.
like a hateful way, I mean, but they're all
Yeah.
like ooh,
yeah,
you know.
just like proper,
Yeah, which is
and,
interesting.
And you said 180, and that's not meaning like he turned back around and went back towards like a 2001 direction. Like
yeah, he
he
just
went in a totally
again he
yeah,
did something he never did. He took
yeah, yeah.
he took it again. He would go to these genres and be like, I'm not just going to make like a costume piece. I'm going to try something nobody's ever done.
Mhm.
With The Shining, he went to horror. He's like, I'm not just going to do some dumb horror movie. I'm going to do something crazy. I'm going to
Mhm.
do my horror movie, and then he ends up changing horror forever.
Mhm.
Yeah. What do we got?
Okay. So this is one of those movies where he did some very interesting things with the filming of like the actual technical side of filming. I mean,
Yeah.
he does that in all of his films, but this is the first one that was lit only by candlelight
Yeah.
in
So
certain scenes.
yeah. So, what he did for that is he had to get lenses and or a camera as well. He had to get lenses that were developed by Zeiss for NASA for satellite photography, and the lenses were super fast. They were like a 0.7
Mhm.
f-stop, which is like super low.
It's faster than most things today still can get.
Yeah, like I have like I'm just an idiot, but my best lens that I have is like a 1.4,
Mhm.
so it's half of that, which is. But
And
the
you're
thing-
just an idiot.
yeah, I'm just an idiot. So actually, Kubrick's lenses were 0.7. Mine was double his. Mine were 1.4.
Oh,
What does that say? But the thing is that the depth of field is so
Mhm.
the amount of like space that's in
Yeah.
in focus is like an inch less. So it's super hard for the focus puller to make sure everybody's in focus for his job. It's super difficult, And also, when a lens is faster, like 0.7, it means the aperture is big. So the higher the number, the lower the aperture is. I know that's annoying as fuck, but that's just how it is. But you look at the candlelight scenes, and it's insane. And the determination that Kubrick had on these sets. There's a story about a guy where they're filming Barry Lyndon. There's like 1,000 candles on the set because it's this giant room only being lit by candles. They have a crazy NASA lens on the thing. There's a hurricane outside, and these guys have to stand and like hold these things up so they don't blow away. And then Kubrick's just in there talking about, well, what do you feel like your character would do in this scene? Because he's just like, no, we have to get it right. Like, don't you want to get it right? And just the incredible, and also the Kubrick and me, where they're on the set of Barry Lyndon, and it's super difficult to film because they would be filming outside, and they'd have to do an entire shot with when the clouds don't change. Because if a cloud comes into the frame during a shot, then it messes up the lighting and like the exposure.
Yeah.
So it's super hard to get out there and get a shot. And then all of a sudden they hear this music, and they're like, Stanley's like, "Where's that music coming from?" And everybody's like looking for a few minutes, like it's really delaying. And they're like, "Where the fuck? God damn it, where's that music?" And then some guy, I guess his like assistant director, goes and sees that it's his wife Christiane in her van in like somewhere else, like a few 100 meters away, and she's playing music and while she's painting. And they come back, and he goes, "All right, the music's off, Stanley." He goes, "Who was it?" He goes, "It doesn't matter." He goes, "No, who was it?" And he goes, "It was Christiane." And he just turns and goes, he rubs his beard, and then he just turns, and then he goes, "All right." And then he goes to the camera, and he goes, "Catchy tune, though."
He just
Like
pulls
he
a
knows that
180.
he can't talk shit about
Yeah,
Christiane.
yeah. It's funny. That's like one thing about him where it's like clear he's just so in love with that.
Oh,
with
dude,
his
he
wife.
loved
Yeah.
Christiane, dude. He would. We'll talk about how much like he loved her, like when we get to the Aryan Papers.
Mm-hmm.
But like his daughter, like he loved his family
Yeah, yeah.
so much.
Mhm. Yeah, good dude. Very good dude in that regard.
Yes.
Like, And then, so, yeah, I guess this goes along with another point I wanted to make. I think it was Steven Spielberg in that documentary. He says, like, the lower depth of field actually caused the compositions to look like they were, like, classically painted
Oh yeah.
thing. You know what I'm saying?
And because the way, and and Kubrick would he would buy art books and like cut out all these paintings.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the one scene where there's a scene near the end where Lord Bullington finally confronts Barry Lyndon. He's like, "I want to duel you, son of a bitch."
Mm-hmm.
And
Son of a bitch.
and he walks into the room, and Barry's lying like this. He's like sleeping, and the shot, it's like it literally looks like you're looking at a
painting.
painting. The
Yeah,
way
yeah.
the lighting hits and everything, like the whole movie is filled with stuff like that. It's known as like one of the best looking movies of all time.
Mm-hmm.
And whether that translates to a good movie, well, I think this might be maybe one of Kubrick's most challenging movies to watch.
Mm-hmm.
I still think it's very good. Again, there's something like with Doctor Strangelove and Clockwork Orange where like I feel like I haven't hit the full effect of it. Like I get it in terms of what it's saying about, the impregnable class divisions. You can't join these people in this society and stuff like that. I do think there's a weird there's a weird abstraction between you and Barry Lyndon. In the Luck of Barry Lyndon, it's like a memoir almost. It's like from the first person. But Kubrick decides to have like this omniscient narrator in it. And whenever you're not so much, the camera isn't tied to Barry Lyndon's perspective so much as the narrator is following Barry Lyndon. So like when you see a lot of these scenes, like the painting scenes, the scenes aren't from Barry's perspective. You're picking Barry out from these shots, right? You're following him. So, but for example, there's not like people say like the movie's cold and it feels like detached from the characters, and I think that's partly true, but I think the movie does that. It withholds that emotional attachment until the moments like where it matters. So basically the story is Barry Lyndon, or Redmond Barry, he lives in Ireland. He's like sort of like a poor lower class family. And this captain in the British Army comes to marry his Barry's cousin, who he's in love with. And so he duels the captain, and he's like, "This is my girl. Get the hell out of here, fella." And he kills him. And then he leaves to go to Dublin because he has to hire army for England. And then he joins the Prussian army, and then he finds this, whatever. But then he learns that they faked the captain's death and that she's married to the captain. His cousin's married to the captain, because they're like, we can't sacrifice 1,500 quid a year, guineas a year, because he would bring money to the family. So then Barry Lyndon ends. It's kind of like the first Parasite. You remember Parasite of 2019? It's like the Korean movie about this family just infiltrating this rich family, and you're just seeing these people like take over this family's life, and it's so satisfying. And seeing Barry climb the ranks from like a poor guy to just like this giant aristocrat is satisfying, but it's not as satisfying as something like Parasite, which is not, it's not fair to compare the movies. But there's one thing that the movie does in terms of its camera where like Barry's son dies, and it's a very emotional scene. Like it gets me every time. And that's like the only scene in the movie that has any sort of like raw emotion, but everything else is so detached from the characters. For example, the ending. It ends with Lord Bullington, who's Barry Lyndon marries this woman, Honoria Lyndon. Her husband dies. Barry Lyndon steps in. He's like, oh, shit, I can, now I'm good. I'm part of this family. But then if she dies, all the money goes to Lord Bullington, who hates her son, Lord Bullington, who hates Barry Lyndon. So he's trying to become a lord, but it ends up he can't, and Lord Bullington challenges him to a duel. He shoots Bullington in the leg, or Bullington shoots him in the leg, and then Barry fades into obscurity and dies like a poor and lonely guy. And at the end, Lady Honoria is signing his annual allowance of like 500 guineas, and it cuts to a close-up of her looking at his name, and her face is blank. It tells you nothing, and you're like, does she feel love for him? Does she hate? Like, what is happening? There's another scene where the reason why Lord Bullington shoots him in the leg is that I know I'm going on, but I'm sure this is good.
No.
There's when they duel at the end, Lord Bullington, Lord Bullington, you have the first shot, and Lord Bullington misfires. Like he's like, oh fuck. He goes, this thing's faulty. Can I get another one? They're like, no, that counts as your shot. And he's like, shit, I'm gonna die. And so you see a close up of Barry. Lord Bullington fires the gun. It goes back to the guys. Barry's in the background. They go, that was your shot. And Lord Bullington's like, shit. And then during this time, in between shots, Barry is kept in the background. He's never presented into the foreground until you see him in the background of the shot fire into the ground, being like, oh, this has to like, do you have satisfaction? Let's end this duel.
Yeah.
And then Lord Bullington goes, I do not have satisfaction. And then it cuts to a close-up of Barry, right? So Kubrick deliberately doesn't cut to a close-up of Barry in between. We don't see the decision of Barry going, I'm going to shoot into the ground. So we don't get to feel, or at least we don't get a hint of what Barry feels in that moment. Because him and Lord Bullington hate each other. So it's like, what is he, does he feel bad for Lord Bullington? What does he do? Like, we don't know. And that's a certain thing that Kubrick does that kind of affects the movie in a way. And I'm not sure exactly how. I don't know exactly the. That's just something I've noticed. I don't have a full theory on why the movie works the way it does.
A lot is left up to interpretation, but it's like
a lot, yeah.
But it's like part of it's you're like wishing that some of it wasn't.
Yeah,
you're saying.
Yeah,
basically, like you wish you got more out of. Like, there's moments where maybe there could be more. More emotion shown on the screen, like where she's looking at his name and her face shows no emotion. It's
but
like,
again,
what are you thinking?
Yeah, but that's like it's an intentional choice by Kubrick.
I wasn't saying it wasn't.
Yeah,
I know
so
it
I'm
was,
just wondering.
but I'm saying,
I'm just wondering why. It's not. I guess I just have to watch it more. That's in Kubrick. Guys like Kubrick, you give the benefit of the doubt.
A lot of his movies, like I feel like a lot of people would say, I have to watch it again.
Well, that's all. Yeah. It's like you're like, that was weird, but I want to watch it again. You always want to like. I don't know, like the general audience might see like Eyes Wide Shut and be like, "What the fuck?"
Yeah.
But every time I see one of his movies, I'm like, "Damn, I can't wait to watch it again."
2001. Some people were probably like, "Fuck that shit." I'm never watching.
Yeah. Well, I said Rock Hudson was at the premiere for 2001, or the exhibitor screening. He walked out. He's like, "Fuck this."
Yeah.
This is dumb. All these monkeys here. I'm here to see space, dog.
Yeah. Oh, imagine walking out like in the first scene, like you don't even get to the space shit. Yeah. So, well, I guess we didn't get to a lot of the points on this.
No, keep going.
Okay. All right. Well, so the budget ballooned. They had to move from Ireland to England after threats from the IRA. I wonder.
Yeah. Well, they were filming They were in Ireland filming scenes of British soldiers,
Okay.
and Ireland was like, "I hate the Britain people."
Yeah, yeah. The IRA was for
The IRA. Did I say Ireland?
Well, IRA is.
Yeah, the IRA was like, "I can't stand these bloody." Well, that's not Irish.
I
Can't stand these bloody British.
I could do a good one when I went to Ireland for a little while, but I can't do it anymore. I came back with a solid one. I lost it in like a week.
I just do Brad Pitt from Snatch. All right, I'll do a movie for you, but I want one thing. I want you to get out of my fucking country.
Yeah, it's
It's
something
not great,
like that.
but it's like it's
It's something like that.
So, yeah, so they had to move. They had to move. And that in the book, that's like a big thing. Was especially getting the guns across the border, the muskets. That was a big deal for Emilio because he was like in charge of all of that. And yeah, the production shut down twice. And again, like what I said about the weather and the clouds would like affect filming. They would maybe get like a scene a day. They filmed for 300 days, I think, maybe 300. I don't, that might be The Shining. Anyway.
Okay, and then first time Kubrick collaborated with Leon Vitali, who became Kubrick's personal assistant after production ended.
Yes. Do you know who Leon Vitali is?
I've heard the name. I don't know exactly.
So
who he
he played Lord Bullington in the movie. He played he was an actor, but then he was like, wait a minute, I don't know how exactly he got to start working with Kubrick as an assistant, but he like basically dedicated his life to be like, this guy's a genius. I need to help him make his movies. And then he was Danny, Danny Lloyd from The Shining. He was the kid.
Yeah,
Danny,
yeah.
Danny in The Shining. He was basically like his acting coach. In that
That's
movie.
cool.
But he was also like a production assistant for Kubrick and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
He was like his personal. Again, Kubrick had like a million assistants,
Yeah, I'm sure.
but
yeah.
he's a very important guy in Kubrick's life.
Seemed like Kubrick was like very good at categorizing his work and sending it off to other people who he knew could get the job done.
He was
really
very good
well.
at delegating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so it is released in December 1975 and gets okay reviews in America and great reviews in Europe.
Yeah, that's how the story goes.
I thought, I mean, based off, I thought in the documentary it was like it was bombed, like everybody hated it.
Well, the movie, financially it didn't do good. It made like the budget was what, 12 million or 11,
11 million,
and it made like 9 million in the U.S., which isn't good.
Okay.
It did very well in Europe, so it would have been profitable. It made 31 million worldwide. So obviously, it's by today's standards, it's made a profit.
Yeah.
Since then, but it was still disappointing, especially for the studio who put a lot of money into it and a lot of faith in Kubrick and choosing this kind of obscure subject matter. Especially a costume drama for like that budget at the time was a pretty big deal. But how many movies are like Americans are like, oh, and then the French just eat it up. Kubrick. There was a shot on The Shining because this speaks to why Europe loved it a lot. Kubrick, there was a shot. People always think like everything is calculated or whatever. He would do a shot on The Shining and then turn to his crew and goes, let's see what the French critics think about that one. Basically being like they're all just like they kind of eat this shit up.
Oh yeah, he just knows that they love
he knows
it.
that they're gonna read into it and stuff. You know?
Very yeah, that makes sense. And I guess, but still, Warner Brothers and Kubrick were disappointed by the box office. Did you say that? already?
Yeah, they were disappointed. Kubrick was definitely disappointed, and that's why. And then obviously The Shining's up next, and that's why I think he went to The Shining, because he went to the biggest book at the time, like the Shining was like a big book, and he was like, all right, I want to, and he went to horror, which is like a good genre to make money in, and he was like, I think I need to give them a movie that makes money. So I think The Shining, again, 180 was a reaction to Barry Lyndon being like, all right, let me get something more pulpy.
The Shining, 1980. The same way he pivoted from A Clockwork Orange to Barry Lyndon, Kubrick pivots from the obscure source material of Barry Lyndon to Stephen King's mega hit, The Shining. However, he does not hire Stephen King to write the screenplay with him as usual. Instead, he hires the novelist and professor Diane Johnson.
Yeah, so Kubrick did read a script by Stephen King that King wrote, and Kubrick didn't like it because it was just like the book, but the movie, And I did hear a story of Stephen King being like an anti-intellectual, and there are streaks of intellectual isms in Kubrick's movies. I think he is sort of like a highbrow guy who does have like mass audience appeal, and people say that's why Kubrick didn't go with Stephen King because Stephen King is sort of an anti-intellectual, and Diane Johnson is like a professor
Mm-hmm.
and sort of a highbrow lady. Kubrick was impressed with a book that she wrote called The Shadow Knows, and he was actually going to adapt that at one point. And then once he read The Shining, and the story about Kubrick finding The Shining is his assistant used to say that he would read books constantly, because if you look, it's the longest gap in between Kubrick movies at this point, like 5 years. And in terms of like the longest gap between him finishing a movie and then writing the next one, because he couldn't find a book. His wife talked about that all the time. Like, he couldn't find the source material that was worth, doing a movie on. So he'd be in his office just like reading books all day sometimes, and he would just throw them against the wall. He was so pissed, his assistant said. And then finally she gave him The Shining, and then she didn't hear
Any books being
any
thrown?
books being thrown. She was like, nice, dude.
Yeah.
He said he called it compulsive reading. Like, he loved the book.
Mm.
But of course, like, just because he changes something in the book doesn't mean he didn't like it. It's just,
Mm-hmm.
it's not suitable for film.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And this is one where, I mean, I feel like, did Stephen King like this or no?
Stephen King fucking hates it
Really?
so much. I don't know if, let's just get to it now. Screw it. Who cares about chronologics? So the movie comes out. Kubrick hates it. He always says, like, oh, it's like a Cadillac without an engine in it. It's well made, but there's no story. They made all these changes, blah, blah, blah. I don't like it. He goes, my book is very warm and Kubrick's movie is very cold. And out of all the stuff that like people say in the movie, like, oh, they if you look at this frame in this corner, the floor is a different color, and that means this about this character. It's like, okay, people definitely read into The Shining and Kubrick's movies too much.
Yeah.
But there is a scene that Kubrick just deliberately puts in the movie, which is like, I think, obvious, because in the book it's like a red buggy that they're riding down the road in the beginning, and in the movie it's yellow, I believe. Yes. And then at one point, Halloran is, if you know the movie, you know what I'm talking about. Halloran is driving back to the Overlook Hotel, and he just sees a car accident on his way over. Has nothing to do with the movie. And you just see a red buggy crushed by like an 18-wheeler.
Mm.
That's basically Kubrick saying, like, fuck you. This is my movie, pal.
Yeah.
Which is, I don't know how vocal Stephen King was against the movie at that point, but Stephen King really doesn't like the movie at all.
Yeah,
He's probably sick of talking about it at this point,
Mm-hmm. How does that work? Like, I guess I'm just not as knowledgeable on this part of it, but so Stephen King buys the rights to the movie, or to
Yeah.
Kubrick buys the rights from Stephen King, and he's like, cool, go make the movie, but then he doesn't have any like say
Right.
over.
Once I think it's probably Warner Brothers got the
got
the rights, and then once Warner Brothers has the rights, like, Stephen King can't do anything on the movie version because now it's up to Kubrick.
Yeah.
So Kubrick can just do whatever he wants with the script,
Mhm.
and also like you can't like I said before, a book is a book. You can't. If you film a book, it's gonna feel like you're watching a book rather than watching a movie. You have
Yeah.
to make certain things, and there's other things like the maze. Kubrick put in the maze instead of originally it was like the hedge. There was like these hedge garden things of like animals in the book that were at the hotel, and they come to life and they move, and it's like, well, the CGI that would look terrible in the 1980s.
Yeah.
Kubrick's
just
like, yeah, we're
wouldn't.
not going to do that. Let's just do the maze instead, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's just interesting that he doesn't like it. Like, I didn't know they didn't like it like that much. He hates it that much.
so much.
Wow.
He's not like, Stanley Kubrick should be shot. Like, he likes Kubrick's movies, but he's just like, I don't like,
Did they have a weird relationship after that, or any relationship?
I don't know if
after
they
that?
talked at all. I just think
Yeah, that's
it
funny.
happens. There's a lot of
Either way, so Kubrick hires Steadicam inventor Garrett Brown to be a camera operator on The Shining.
Yes, there's
This
a
is-
very, very good story about that. Because Garrett Brown, so you know why in Rocky, when he goes up the steps, the reason why that shot's in the movie is because in the original demo footage for the Steadicam, Garrett Brown did that with his girlfriend, his girlfriend, now wife. He filmed her going up those steps. And then he sent this out to Hollywood being like, I got this shit, no dolly. This is crazy. And all these studios were like, how is he doing this?
Mm-hmm.
And then Kubrick got his hands on the demo tape and was like, he wrote to Garrett Brown, was like, congratulations on whatever. I would like to hire you for my next movie, blah, blah, blah. But it must be mentioned that to the careful observer, in frame 247, the shadow of your device can be seen at the bottom left corner of the screen. and somebody who's has a detective mindset could easily deduce that this is how it works based off of the shadow. And of course, Garrett Brown was like, "Oh, of course, Stanley Kubrick figured out how part of this works because he saw the shadow in one of the frames."
Oh wow!
Like Kubrick caught that.
Yeah,
Like, that's how good he was.
yeah. That's cool.
Which is a funny story. But Garrett Brown was like so Kubrick hired him, but he had to do Rocky 2 during the production. So after like 6 months, he had to teach this other guy how to do the Steadicam. But Garrett Brown said, he goes, I knew how to. I did the Steadicam for like other movies, but I really learned how to do the Steadicam on Kubrick's movie. Like it would get. We were doing so many takes. It would get to the point where if I was like, oh, if I take one extra inch in my last step, I'll actually end up with her right nostril on this side of the cross. Like Kubrick would be like, her nostril has to be on this crosshair. The crosshair has to be on this nostril. If it's not, it doesn't mess up. He was so good at holding it still that Kubrick would just use it as a tripod. They come stand over here. You're using it. Just hold it still.
Yeah,
and he would hold it still on the Steadicam.
Is it like he'd use him as a tripod,
Yeah.
basically? Yeah. Yeah, that's funny. That's like, I'm sure Kubrick, being himself, probably understood it a little better than him by the end of the film, too.
Yeah, Garrett
Right.
was like, in the commentary for Garrett was like, Garrett Brown was like, also Garrett Brown, who sounds like exactly like James Cameron, which is weird. I just picture him as James Cameron in my head. But he talks about like he wanted, Kubrick was like, oh, let me see that thing. And then Garrett Brown was like, you want to try it on? And Kubrick was like, no. Like he was very shy. He was like shy about stuff like that all the time. Like he didn't like being touched and stuff. And people would be like, hey, try this. And he'd be like, no, I have to do this.
Yeah. He didn't want to like try it.
No,
out?
he was just like scared and shy or whatever. I don't know. But yeah. And also, of course, Kubrick innovated with he innovated the use of Steadicam more than anybody else in The Shining.
Just in the first time using it.
Well, Rocky used it, and I think in one more other.
I mean, in his first time.
Yeah,
using
his
it.
first time using it, he just like that completely changed because he was able to use the camera and like just use the camera as the spooky ghost that was just following the characters around. Never been done before. What's next on the agenda?
So Shelley Duvall is cast as Wendy,
Yes.
which was seen as a weird choice at the time.
Yes, and people like I think it's good because I think it's more interesting to have somebody incredibly unique like Shelley Duvall rather than just like some hot awesome lady. I still think Shelley Duvall is attractive. People were like, "Oh, she's ugly." I'm like, "What are you talking about? She's a cute lady. Come on, give her a break."
You also can't judge it of how she looks like in that
She's
movie.
supposed to look crazy.
She's supposed to look like she's
supposed to
losing
look like
her
she's
mind.
having
Yeah.
the most terrible time.
Uh-huh.
And I do think people like say like, "Oh, this is why she's mentally ill because Stanley Kubrick was horrible to her." The rumors of Stanley Kubrick abusing her on set are most likely false or exaggerated.
Yeah.
Because like there's a rumor about Jack Nicholson on the set of The Shining, how he comes home, he was only allowed to eat cheese sandwiches because Kubrick wanted him to be like angry on camera. It's like that's not true. But why it's the cheese sandwich thing is because he came home one day after doing the takes where his character has to take a bite of a cheese sandwich, and he would come home and be like, "Oh, I was eating cheese sandwiches all day." And that person tells another person, and that person says that he's been making him eat cheese sandwiches on the set all the time. Same thing with Shelley Duvall. Like you can see the Kubrick's daughter Vivian made a great making of The Shining. It's like 30 minutes. It's absolutely amazing. You just get to see Kubrick like talking and you get to see Jack Nicholson walking around the set, and Kubrick is just like, watching Kubrick just move and talk is so fascinating because you think he had like a very like scholarly voice, but he just sounds like he's from the Bronx. Like he has like a like I don't like he talks like muffly in Doctor Strangelove, like Dimitri, like he kind of has that weird like to his voice, But what was I getting to? You could see him arguing with Shelley Duvall on the set. Like, come on, what do you mean roll camera? We're killing ourselves out here, and you got to look desperate when you come out of the door, Shelley. And like Shelley says, he was doing it on purpose, but he was never like he would get in arguments with her, but that was pretty much it. She obviously it was stressful for everybody on the set. Like she was there for a long time. Jack Nicholson was there for a long time. There's a scene where she goes, "Look at this, hunks of hair are coming out of my hair." And there's like 5 hairs. And Kubrick takes it and goes, hunks of hair. Okay. I don't sympathize with Shelley. He just says that. But there's that I would recommend watching. That's so fast. I watched that like a million times.
I've seen little clips of that.
Yeah.
And it's like they do play up that one, like there's the one specific thing where he's like, we're killing ourselves out here, and it's all your fault, kind of like he doesn't
I
say
can't even
that.
get out of the door. He's like, we got to look desperate, Shelley. Otherwise, you're just wasting our time.
Yeah. And I mean, Like, I'm sure that a little bit of that was him, like, prodding her to.
Yeah,
like,
exactly. Yeah.
But I mean, even hearing her talk about it, she doesn't seem like it was the worst experience. She says like, I would have like. I think what she says is like, I wouldn't do it again, but like I'm grateful for that experience because I got to work with Stanley Kubrick.
Right.
She didn't say like Stanley Kubrick's a fucking asshole.
Yeah,
like,
she
he
was like, I
ruined
learned
my
so
life.
much.
And I was like,
Yeah, Shelley Duvall up until that point only worked with Robert Altman, I believe, who's
Mhm.
another director, who's another amazing director. Hopefully, we'll do him. Not do him, but hopefully we'll talk about his movies.
yeah.
But so she went off and did The Shining, and then her next movie was Popeye with Robert Altman again, and she came back, and he just goes, "Oh, you're a different actor now.
Mhm.
Like you changed."
Yeah,
'Cause
yeah.
She learned so much on The Shining. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very valuable experience to
Oh,
like.
definitely.
Because
Especially
also, like, if you make it through an experience like that, like, I'm sure there's nothing else that can really
Yeah.
phase you,
yeah.
But it still seemed like she. I think people probably overplay that because it's like one of those things where, obviously, her character needed that,
Yeah.
so they think like he was abusing her, so it would get in the role, and it was
Yeah.
probably a little bit, but probably not as much as
And
people
Kubrick
think.
and Kubrick was that guy where all of his life, like we'll get to this in a later section of this, but he was always like the media was always after him, being like, oh, he's this weird recluse. They would always exaggerate things about him and just make up rumors and stuff because he would sort of like deny the press the proper attention that they expected because he was a very private guy. So there was anytime you hear a story about Stanley Kubrick that is about his negative character, it's probably exaggerated. Just like probably some of the stories about how smart he was and how people think that everything in The Shining is the most exact, planned out, intricate thing of all time, which is like partly it is, but he's just a human being, dude.
It's like one of those things because he never like really went to bat for himself. Almost like he never felt the need to defend himself
Yeah.
until like later on, maybe when he
Yeah, there's
finally
one
did.
interview. He did one interview in '87 with Tim Cahill where he was like, "That's not true."
Yeah.
That's
But
it.
even still, I've never seen the interview, but I'm sure he didn't go
Yeah.
too far into it to being like, this is,
Yeah, he wasn't really. Yeah.
So even though shooting was scheduled for 17 weeks, it ended up taking about a year. Other movies had to be delayed so that The Shining could finish filming at Elstree Studios.
Yeah, Steven Spielberg was going to shoot Indiana Jones. He had to wait.
Mm.
Warren Beatty was shooting Reds. He had to wait. And Kubrick would just that was probably the most takes he did. Maybe Eyes Wide Shut more. But like, there's that scene apparently, but also it's exaggerated. Like Kubrick talks about like, this is a passage from that interview where he goes, actors are sometimes undisciplined enough to go home and learn their lines. Instead, they want to go out partying or whatever. They don't want to get proper sleep. And then they come to the set and they don't know the lines. So I make them do a bunch of takes. I make them do 40. And then suddenly 40 becomes 100 and then the press runs with it or whatever and stuff like that. Because you cannot act if you have to think about the lines. They should just become second nature,
Mm-hmm.
But also like the part of the set was like burnt and caught on fire, and they had to rebuild it, so that delayed stuff a little bit more. And Jack Nicholson and Shelley Duvall were in contracts where they couldn't leave. They couldn't go to another production unless they were done with The Shining. Like Kubrick had them for as long as he wanted.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do you think that? I mean, that wouldn't cause him to like extend the.
No, but like
Filming,
now
but-
he can just do.
He knew he didn't have to rush or anything.
Yeah. And there's an entire book that Lee Unkrich, who's like a Pixar director, he wrote a book. It's like this. It's like a collector's edition book where it's like $2,000, but it's just about the production of The Shining.
Mm.
Yeah. So if you have extra pocket change lying around, you can buy that book for $2,000.
Which book?
It's Lee Unkrish's Making of The Shining.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm.
He has like all his production notes and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. So The Shining releases. The critics hate it,
Yes,
and Kubrick recalls all copies of the film and cuts the ending.
which is a crazy thing to do. A movie's already out, and you go, wait, let me change the ending.
Yeah.
Because people, like critics especially, like hated it. They were like, "What? This is the worst, dumbest." Again, because they never because you think horror. Kubrick would take horror and go, "No, I'm not going to make like a director would go, oh, my horror movie is going to be darker and grittier and scarier than any other movie it's been." But it's like, no, my movie's going to be scarier, but it's going to be brightly lit and not gritty, but just like there's going to be this invisible horror instead of some guy, Michael Myers just slowly walking towards you. It's going to be something different. And so like again, the movie was like ahead of its time because again, 10 years later it passes and then everybody loves it or whatever. People still hate it today, but like Stephen King. But one of the reasons Stephen King didn't like the movie is because he goes, it's misogynistic to Wendy. But it's like Wendy is like the best person in the movie. Like she's doing all the work in the like when Jack is at the hotel. When they're at the hotel, Jack is always typing away or sleeping or whatever, doing God knows what. Wendy's like doing all the chores and she's hanging out with Danny all the time. She's being like a great mom.
Yeah.
And it's like, so how is that like in his movie? They made a TV series. Oh yeah, I didn't tell you about that. They made a TV miniseries, Stephen King's The Shining, where it was like faithful to the book, and it sucked. It's bad.
Yeah.
It's bad. I've seen clips. I mean, I shouldn't say it's bad because I haven't seen it.
Yeah.
But it's bad.
Yeah.
No. Yeah, it's mid. No,
It's
I haven't
mid.
seen it. Like, it looks terrible. Jesus Christ, that wasn't me. That was the ghost. So critics hate it. So Kubrick, there was an ending, right? So basically, let me give you the rundown of the story. They go to the Jack Nicholson's character, Jack Torrance. He needs a job, and he gets hired to be the caretaker of a hotel. Him and his family go into the hotel, and I don't know why I'm saying that. Anybody who's this far deep into it knows what The Shining is. But
Yeah.
Anyway, he starts to go insane with his family because of the isolation, and then there's ghosts and stuff like that, and then. Obviously, Jack goes into the maze and chases Danny. Jack gets stuck in the maze. Danny and Wendy drive off in the Snowcat, and then the movie ends, and then it cuts to the picture of Jack in the picture in the hallway. And that's the ending. But originally, and only if people like, if you've seen somebody who's seen The Shining, if you know somebody who's seen The Shining when it first came out, they've seen this ending. Is Wendy and Danny are in the hospital, and Ullman, the guy who the manager of the hotel. He's wearing this big fur coat, and he walks in and sees Danny. He goes, hey, we checked out the place, and there's no sign of anything that you like. We can't find Jack's body. The hotel's fine. There's no blood anywhere, or whatever. And then when he's like, oh, and then Ullman turns around and shows a ball to Danny, and then tosses him the ball, and Danny catches it. And like Kubrick was very intent that it bounces 3 times. And that's like leaving this ominous thing that like maybe Ullman had something to do with it. And people saw the ending. You cannot find the ending in it. There's production stills of it. You can find like a script around, but Kubrick destroyed the footage. He took it out. He recalled all the prints and then took it out, destroyed all the footage, and then sent it back in. And then it did better, and people liked it a little because the ending, it left that ambiguity that makes the Shining so scary. One of the reasons The Shining is so scary is because it's at the end of the day, out of all the theories you have, and we'll go through all the theories, it's completely unknowable. You'll never know. There's this invisible horror to not knowing what's going on. You know.
So that other ending gave more of a conclusive thing to it, which
it
made
added
less...
just a little bit too much of a knot, like a bow at the end of like, oh, Ullman has something to do with this. Because just leaving that out makes it a lot more scary.
Definitely, yeah. I don't know if I have a theory on how that movie ends or any like.
Well, you're unique because everybody does.
Yeah,
it's sometimes it's tiring the amount of, especially the ones that aren't good. We'll get to them. But what do we got next on there?
So this says that there are 2 separate cuts of The Shining
Yes.
still in circulation today.
My sister-in-law is British. And I told her there's a European cut of The Shining, and then there's an American cut. The European cut is about 2 hours. There's 20 minutes cut out, and the American cut is 2 hours and 29 minutes. So I guess the European cut's 2 hours and 9 minutes. I've seen both of them because I was like, what? Kubrick cuts out some of the allusions to like the Native American stuff, which makes sense, I guess, if you're releasing a movie in Europe. The Native American stuff might not like resonate as much. But somebody says that Kubrick said that he likes the European cut, but I don't think the European cut's as good. I've watched it. I'm like, this isn't working the same. There's some stuff cut out, and there's only one scene that I believe should have been cut out, and it's a scene where with Dick Halloran when he goes to like this gas station and he talks to. But everything else I think should have been left in. But I think the main cut of The Shining is better. People say, oh, the European cut's better because it moves faster. It's like, who cares? Times doesn't make any sense when a movie becomes as timeless as The Shining, you know. And yeah. So if you want to watch The Shining again, don't watch the European cut. I asked for the American cut on Blu-ray for Christmas.
You can just like buy
because this box set I have, The Shining is
okay.
the European cut. I watched it. I
Oh.
saw it. I'm like, 2 hours. So I looked it up. I'm like, oh shit, there's a European cut.
Mhm.
Cut. My voice didn't crack when
Why
I said
did
that to
it?
myself.
Why did that one come with the?
I don't know. I guess it just depends on the manufacturer who made it.
Oh, okay.
It's weird.
Mhm.
I don't know.
Is that the only one of his movies that has two separate?
I'm pretty
Cuts
sure
in
like there's an
circulation?
unrated version of Eyes Wide Shut that has some of the nudity that was cut out of the theatrical.
Mhm.
I think that's pretty much. I think like the cut was the cut for a lot of his movies.
Mhm.
But let me get into my thoughts a little bit about like what I think about The Shining. I think of The Shining as an abyss of interpretation. Again, you'll never know what the movie is really about because even if you figure out something, there's another theory where you go, oh yeah, that makes sense too, or whatever. I believe The Shining is about the horrors of the foundation of America and how America is built on tragedies that are basically going to haunt us forever and ever. Because if you look at the Native American stuff, there's the allusions to Native American genocide. There's some allusions. There's some allusions that I think are valid to the U.S.'s history with gold, right? And there's a lot of other things that we'll get to. But at the end, the picture, it's dated July 4th, 1921. The U.S.'s Independence Day.
Mhm.
That's not a coincidence. Like that's
Yeah,
a very intended
intentional date
thing to put
Yeah,
July
You don't
4th.
pick that day if
Right.
it's not intentional.
And we'll get to some of the more stuff about it being the foundations of America, but it's mainly the Native American genocide, mainly the theory about the gold standard that is propagated by this guy Rob Ager on YouTube, who's pretty good. Most of the stuff he has to say about that is good. There's some other stuff I'm like, you're reaching, dude. But
Mhm.
yeah. So let's get into the theories about The Shining.
Okay. Years later, fans can't stop analyzing the movie and formulating their own theories. One is the movie is an allegory for Native American genocide.
Yeah, so like in terms of the allusions to that, there's Ullman says that it was built on an ancient burial ground, and if I'm correct, they had to fend off some Indian attacks when they were making the thing, and then there's a ton of like Native American imagery in the in the direct decorations of the halls. There's some paintings that Jack throws the bouncy ball. The bouncy ball significant because of that cut ending with Ullman, but also we can't use that ending as a interpretation because Cooper cut it out. But Jack is throwing the ball against like these Native American figures, like these totems or whatever. There's the Calumet can with the Native American guy on it next to Dick Halloran's head when he goes, "How about some ice cream, Doc?" And then also the blood that comes out of the elevator. In the context of the Native American genocide, that can also represent the blood of the Native Americans.
And is it is the carpet like a Native American type of design, or that carpet is something that people always bring up, like the design on the carpet?
The carpet that looks that it's like an octagon with a.
It's just all
I
patterns.
don't know if the carpet is a design, but if you look at also Jack throws the ball at another. There's like all the wall hangings are all Native American designs. Yeah, there's a lot of allusions to that.
Yeah, which
How it's basically an allegory for the Native American genocide.
which would be a sort of an ironic thing to put all over a hotel that's like they had to fight off Native Americans.
on an
to-
Indian burial ground. Are you kidding me? Obviously, that place is cursed.
yeah, yeah,
you know?
and then just to have all their decorations all over the wall, it's like
Yeah.
oh, okay, and then allusions to America switching off the gold standard.
Yeah, so this is a theory I half buy into. So there's a thing with like the gold room. So originally Kubrick had the gold room painted silver, and then after they were done with it, he's like, actually no, make it gold, right? And then when Jack goes into the gold room for the first time, where Wendy confronts him for hurting Danny, he goes to Lloyd, and it's just them two, and he hands him a bill, and it works, and he gets his drink. But then when Jack travels back in time, the guy goes, your money is no good here. And he goes, well, how's my credit? He goes, your credit's fine. Because America switched off the gold standard sometime in between 1921 and, whenever The Shining came out. So now money was no longer tied to the price of gold. It was, tied to whatever. Not like the federal and the creation of the I don't know about the economics behind it. So when he goes back in time and tries to use his present day money, he goes, it's no good here because it's not backed by gold, right? And there's another thing where, Kubrick was big into gold. He was like, this is like he had a bunch of his money in gold, like in banks and shit like that. And at the end, the gold room, after the movie ends, like when they push in to the frame of Jack in the crowd in 1921, that frame's in another gold room. Like that sign just says the gold room, but there's no gold anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
It's just this weird hallway or whatever. And he tries to do this thing where like in the picture are people who started the Federal Reserve, like FDR's like daughter, and there's a lot of people in like the FDR administration who were responsible for the Federal Reserve and getting off of gold. He says they were in the frame, but it's like I think he's really reaching with like this person kind of looks like a young this person. It's like, dude, where are you getting that from?
Mm-hmm.
What's the next theory?
Jack is in hell.
Yeah, so basically the premise of this theory is that in the real world, Jack already killed Wendy and Danny in the hotel, and now this is his punishment for eternity over and over again. And this is supported by when Grady says, "You've always been the caretaker. You've always been here." And Jack is in the bedroom, and when Wendy brings him breakfast, and he's eating the breakfast, and he goes, "You know, when I came here, I had the feeling like a familiarity, like I've been here before." And basically the idea is he's just cursed to go through this over and over and over and over again. And that's the thing about these theories is like, just because one theory, like that theory has credence. Is credence the right word?
Yeah.
Credence. I think the Native American theory has credence. I think those can both be true.
Yeah, definitely.
Because it's all about like a prism. Like, the movies are like basically like prisms of interpretation.
Mm-hmm.
Like depending on what angle you look at it. Like if one day I look at it through the Native American thing, I go, "Oh, that's right."
Yeah.
One day I look at it through that, and I go, "That's also right."
They're all cool ways
Yeah.
of looking at it.
Yeah.
I like either one of those. It's like certain movies where there's like a sort of a definite reason for it or whatever,
Yeah.
or even if someone comes out and says what it's about, it like blocks it into that one thought, which isn't bad.
You'll never
for
see it
certain
in
things.
that context.
Yeah, that's like one thing when I listen to a song. If someone tells me like the real reason for it, I hate that
Yeah.
because I'm thinking of it in multiple different ways. Like for this, like you're telling me different reasons, and none of them are like concrete to actually be the thing, but they're all
Right.
cool ways of thinking.
I mean,
about
but
it.
also they don't sound concrete. If they don't sound concrete, I'm also just an idiot who's like half remembering.
I didn't mean
Yeah.
I didn't mean
Yeah, I
it
know what
like
you mean.
that. I meant it like
Yeah.
they're just like all different ways of looking at it,
Yeah.
basically.
And I'm also more interested in an audience interpretation of a movie rather than the director.
Yeah.
Like again, like
Mhm.
when I talked about Kubrick on the phone with that guy, there's nothing more uninteresting than a director talking about what his movie means.
Yeah, exactly.
Nolan did that on Memento, where he was like, "Oh, so this is what happened at the end," and then his brother was like, "Don't ever do that again." He was like, "Oh shit, you're right."
Yeah,
then-
like stop.
Because then it would just cut off all the conversation. We wouldn't be having 30 years of the Shining conversations being
Mhm.
like, "Oh, what's it this about?" Whatever, you know.
Mhm. That's why after I watched 2001, I texted you and I was like, I want to look up on YouTube like
Don't do it.
ending explained.
Yeah, you could actually.
Well, I just don't want. I don't like
Yeah.
want to. I don't want to
You-
someone to tell me like a definitive ending.
Yeah.
To
I
it.
mean, I don't mind watching videos like that as long as it's like not the first thing I watch after the movie.
yeah.
I think you should sit on the movie and be like, "All right, let me chew
Yeah,
on
that's
this,"
why
you know?
I'm glad I did.
Yeah. What's
Mhm.
the next one?
The ghosts don't exist outside the Torrance's psyches. Yeah.
I think this theory is like coupled with another theory by that Rob Iger guy, where the ghosts don't exist outside the Torrance's psyches, because Kubrick described this movie as a family going insane together, and then there's another theory that Jack is sexually abusing Danny, and I'll try to get through that as fast as possible. So, in the movie, right? There's if you look at it through the context of Jack is sexually abusing Danny, there's a scene where basically the sequence starts at Danny watching TV with his mom, and Jack is upstairs. So this is like this is the biggest intersection of the movie. It's right in the center, and the killing and Rashomon are important to think about, and I'll explain why. So we're in the TV room, and then he goes, "Mom, can I go get my fire truck from the room?" She goes, "Yeah, but your dad's sleeping. Just be careful." That scene was cut out in the European cut. Then he goes up there and he's acting all careful, and he sees his dad with the bathroom behind him, and he's sitting on the bed, and Jack is just staring
Mm-hmm.
out the window, and then he goes, "Come here," and he moves his arm like this, and Danny comes over there, and then they have this weird, creepy conversation of Jack going, I'll never do anything to hurt you.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't do that, right? And he's like, yeah, Dad, you won't do it. And the music ramps up, and you get the sense that like something bad is going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And then it cuts to Wednesday, right? Then the next thing we see is the scene with Danny's wearing the Apollo 11 shirt, and the ball rolls up to him, and he goes, Mom? And then he sees that the door to room 237 is open. He goes in, and then it cuts to black.
Mm-hmm.
The next scene we see is Wendy in the boiler room, and there's like a first aid sign talking about like the dangers of choking and what to do if somebody's choking. That's significant. She hears Jack. Then at that moment, she hears Jack yelling at his typewriter in the big lobby. He's going, oh! He wakes up and he's like, what the fuck? She's like, Jack, what happened? And he thinks for a second, and he goes, I had a dream that I killed you and Danny. And then all of a sudden, Danny walks over, and he has bruises on his neck from getting choked. And when he's like, you did this to him, didn't you? And Jack's like, what the fuck? And then she runs away. Jack goes to down the hall into the gold room, and Lloyd's there, and he buys the drink. And he's like, that bitch. He calls her the old sperm bank upstairs. He's like being really misogynistic or whatever. And he's like all guilty when he's walking down. Every time he passes a mirror, he goes, "Arr, arr." He does like a weird thing. And then Wendy, after that scene, at the end of that scene, walks in, runs in. He goes, Jack, there's a crazy woman in one of the rooms. She tried to strangle Danny. And he goes, are you out of your fucking mind? And then he goes, no, she tried to strangle me. He goes, all right, I'll go look. The next thing we see is him walking into room 237. He walks in, and he goes into the bathroom, and there's a naked lady, and she opens the curtain like this, the same way that he signaled Danny to come over here earlier. And then he walks in and starts kissing her. And then in the mirror, a mirror which is significant, which I'll try to get to, is he sees the mirror, and then he sees that she's all covered in boils and open wounds, and she's all gross, and she's just this gross old lady. And he's like, oh, and then it cuts with Danny going like that. And you see pictures of Danny, and then I think Halloran sees this as well. Halloran's like, what the fuck? And it's this big giant sequence, and then Jack runs out of room 237 and locks the door, and then creeps away. And then the next time we see him in the next scene, Wendy opens the door to the apartment, and she goes, did you find her? And he goes, no, I didn't see a goddamn thing. I know I'm rambling. Let me finish, please. This is good.
No,
he's
keep
super.
going.
He's super calm.
I'm getting spooked out, honestly.
He's super calm, right? So if we view this from the perspective of Jack is sexually abusing Danny, somewhere between him going, I would never do anything to hurt you, which suggests that something bad is going to happen. If we assume that he sexually abused Danny, right? He lures Danny into the room 237 with the ball. Danny goes into the room. He blacks out. Children who've been molested when they were young tend to black experiences that, which is very scary to think because you black it out. You don't have memory of it, which makes me think, wait, what the hell? Did I black something out?
Yeah, oh, God.
Anyway, not important. So he goes in there. He blacks out. Then we cut to Jack, right? And he's screaming. If we assume that his nightmare is the scene where he goes into room 237 and he's having that nightmare while he's sleeping, so that scene takes place while Wendy is running over going, Jack, what's wrong? You understand? You're following the crime.
Yeah.
And so, because that scene represents what he's just done. Like, he just sexually abused his son. At first, it seemed like a good idea, and then he looks in the mirror and sees that what he did was disgusting.
Yeah,
and then he's horrified.
Yeah,
and Danny's also associated with that scene because he's going like that because he has The Shining. That's important that Danny's associated with that, right? And then he comes in, Danny comes in with the chokes on his neck, and she correctly assumes like, you did this, didn't you, or whatever. And then she walks out, and then he's like, fuck, I did it. She's right, whatever. He walks into the gold room, and when she comes in and goes, there's a crazy woman in one of the rooms. She tried to strangle Danny. He's genuinely, are you out of your fucking mind? Because he knows it was him.
Yeah. It's like...
So he goes to look, and when he goes to look, that isn't when he goes into room 237. 237, when he goes in there, was his dream.
Yeah.
So he goes to look, and then, or pretends to, and then he comes back the next scene and just goes, I didn't see a goddamn thing, and he's all calm. So if you take the killing where everything's out of order a little bit and apply that to that scene, that's significant. And then the bear in that the guy in the bear costume,
I can't now. My brain is just trying to
All right,
think.
sorry.
No, that was.
One
I
last thing.
totally get
This goes
all
into
of what you
this
just
goes
said,
into the
though.
psyches being the ghosts, and,
Mhm.
and then we'll move on because I know we're getting out of hand here. So, and this I can't be incredible. Like this isn't any original thoughts. These are just what people think of the internet. That guy Robert Gier is very helpful in terms of. But in this the hallucination or the ghost being the psyches of the characters. So Danny, when he's being talked about to the doctor about like he had this like event at home where he like passed out or whatever, he has this bear pillow behind him and the eyes are cut and it looks very similar to the elevator. And also you can see faces all over the Overlook Hotel. Kubrick made it spatially impossible. There's like faces everywhere. The elevator, the screaming elevator, the elevator with the blood coming out, you could see it's a screaming face. The eyes are like a semicircle, and it looks like it's going like that. So the bear's behind him when she's like, is Tony your friend? Like, what happened? Like, there's this weird psychological thing going on with Danny, and he's covering his like genitals when the doctor's there, and this bear's right behind him. And then later in the movie, where Wendy's running around trying to find Jack and Danny, while Jack is getting chased by, or Danny's getting chased by Jack with the axe. She runs upstairs. Wendy runs upstairs, and she sees a guy in a bear costume giving a guy in a suit head. And if you interpret that as her finally realizing what's going on in her family, that this is what Jack has been doing, because the bear is very important, because the bear is associated with Danny because it was right in the frame, right behind his head, and it's really, really spooky.
Damn, that one seems like, with all the information that you just told me, like that seems like it could be real. Like, I don't know.
Yeah,
there's so many interpretations, but that one
Again,
seems, after visualizing all that, like that's like gonna be, next time I watch the movie, it's gonna be stuck in my mind.
Yeah.
That specific one.
Also, take what I say with a grain of salt, because I watched the Room 237 documentary, and I was like, this is so true. And the way people present information, it could be very true. And last thing to nail it in, there's a scene where Jack is reading a magazine before he gets interviewed for the job at the Overlook, and he's reading a Playgirl magazine. And if you look up that magazine, there's an article on it that says incest in families, why parents sleep with their children.
Oh, so he's like doing research, like, why do I want to do this?
I don't know if he's doing research, but it's just weird that he's reading a Playgirl magazine at a job interview.
Yeah.
So I guess that was it could be an incidental thing, but anyway.
The next one. Do you want to keep going with these?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead. I don't care.
The Overlook is a CIA mind control operation.
Yeah, I think this is like there's literally one piece of evidence for this, and that's it. Like people
this
think,
sounds like, compared to the last one that we were just talking about, this sounds like it's gonna be like a drop off.
I mean, it gets me excited when people say it, because I know a lot about the MK Ultra thing.
Yeah.
So basically, when Danny first sees the two twins in the game room, there's a poster that says Monarch. There was a Project Monarch in the CIA MK Ultra thing. It was like a sub project, and that's it. So people are like, it must be the CIA. People say like the Ullman's right hand man, I forget the guy's name. He's like running the operation where they're experimenting on mind control on the Torrance family in an isolated area, making them see things. It's like, yeah, that's fun, but like other than just that one poster, it's like, okay.
Okay, Wendy is the villain.
Yeah, the Wendy theory. So this guy, I think his name was like Evan Navarro or whatever. He had a theory that every time something bad happens, like every time Jack's doing something bad, it's Wendy like hallucinating that she didn't do it and that Jack did. So he says like every time there's a continuity error, like anytime a scene like a chair moves, like a light switch like suddenly appears or whatever, it means that the scene is from Wendy's perspective, and it's really her who's the villain. She's like hallucinating that she's a good mother, and she's like making Jack the villain or whatever. I don't think it holds up, because some continuity errors are just continuity errors. Even if but intentional or not, they still should be interpreted, because it kind of makes all these things that Kubrick changes. Like there are things that are intentional. Like when the ball rolls up to Danny, the pattern on the carpet is, let's say, north to south, and then when Danny stands up, the pattern on the carpet switched and it's south to north, and that's something like that should be intentional. Or is intentional. Because it gives you this feeling that the hotel is moving around you, and it's weird, but also you just watched a movie about the nicest lady ever trying to save her son from this maniac, and this guy may be sexually abusing his son, and then you're going to say that no, she's the villain because, you're going to blame all the bad stuff that happens on her because she reads Catcher in the Rye. She reads Catcher in the Rye, so they're like, oh, she's crazy. These are her hallucinations. It's like, all right, I don't know.
Yeah,
about
that's that one seems like the least.
that. Yeah,
I mean, other than the CIA one, just because there's one thing, but like,
yeah.
moon landing confession.
Yeah, people think so. Like we talked about the lenses that NASA made or Zeiss made for NASA, and Kubrick used those. People think that Kubrick on 2001 was basically like doing research to fake the moon landing because of the front projection. If you look at the moon landing footage, it does look like front projection. So what front projection is that he used on 2001, especially with the Dawn of Man sequence, is you have a set, and then you have like a blank, a very highly reflective canvas, and then you have a front projection of an image going through a piece of like a one-way mirror that's like tilted at a 45-degree angle. So that image goes through the mirror and onto the canvas, and then the image bounces back onto the mirror side of the one-way mirror into the camera. So it's like a real-time analog green screen, right? And the thing about that is you can sometimes see the separation between the background and the set, and some of the moon landing footage does have that effect, where like you can see the foreground, and then at some point there's like a separation, and then it looks like a background, right? So that's why people think Kubrick directed the moon landing. There's also the moon room sequence, the sequence where Danny gets raped in that other theory. This guy Jay Widener describes that if you look at room number, you have room and then N-O. The only words you can make out of those are moon and room. And 237 is the amount of miles that the moon is away from Earth, right? But also you can get moron from those letters. And if you look at a lot of it's like 238 is the average length sometimes from the sun or from the moon to the Earth. So like that number's a little bit squirrely, like more, whatever. But in that scene also, Danny's wearing the Apollo 11 shirt. It's like, all right, I'll give you that.
Yeah,
that's pretty funny.
But that's also probably just to disprove that, that's also like a very common shirt that was probably going around at the time.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, and it was in the 80s.
Yeah.
Like, the moon landing was awesome.
Yeah.
But also, it could have been Kubrick like knowing those theories and being like,
Playing
let me just
into 'em.
like throw that in. That's funny.
Yeah,
What
yeah,
shirt
why
should we
not?
wear? Yeah, is that the last one?
No, an allegory for the Holocaust.
Oh yeah, people think I don't think this one is that. Holy shit, we're about to do an hour just on The Shining alone.
That's
Fuck.
fine. Maybe release just a Shining episode or something. I don't
Yeah,
know.
right. So people think there's some guy who thinks that it's the Holocaust because the number 42 keeps propping up, which is apparently has relations to the Holocaust. There's the typewriter that Jack uses is like a certain brand that like has Nazi I don't know exactly. I think all the revelation, all the allusions to the Holocaust that they're talking about is probably the Native American stuff. He talks about how Danny retracing his steps in the maze when Jack is chasing him is basically like retracing your steps behind, like looking at that back at history and using history to not repeat itself and stuff like that. I don't know. I'm not doing a great job of explaining it, but I read and listened to all like some of the stuff that describes it, and like that's not very convincing. That's not a lot because 40. That's just you're looking at numbers. That's just like all right, that could be. I mean, you use like weird. Whenever you use weird math to like make a connection, like you get these numbers. You get 8 and fucking what's something divisible by what is 42 divisible by?
I don't want to say 7.
Like 7.
Yeah, 7.
So it's like 7. Oh, you get 7 times 5, or 7 times 6. 7, 6. You times those together, you get 42. It's like, okay, if you do that with another number and multiply by 17 and then subtract by 100, you get 40, whatever. So I don't think that's very. Anyway.
Stanley's home life. Up until 1979, Kubrick and his family lived in Abbott's Mead Manor, which was sold to him by Simon Cowell's father. In 1978, Kubrick had bought Childwickbury Manor in Hertfordshire, England. Especially later in his career, tabloids tried to paint Kubrick as a crazy recluse when in reality he was a very present family man with a tight circle of friends.
Yeah, like especially in that book, you realize that Kubrick's Kubrick's like home was like the nucleus for his entire movie productions, and he always had his friends and family like circling around, like involved in production. Like Vivian was, his family was always on the sets of his movies. Like they're always just hanging out, and there's all this great video of Kubrick on YouTube that you can find, where it's just like him. It's in 1983. He's like sitting in one of his offices or whatever, and they're playing with a video camera. That's like a new thing at the time. And Kubrick's just sitting there. He's all shy. He goes, "What do you want for Christmas, Stanley?" And he's like, "I want a Fortune computer." And he goes, "Why?" He goes, "Because it has the best chip architecture and the best operating system."
Yeah,
And he's like, "Well, what's it called?" And he goes, "It's called Unix." And he's just like being a weird. He's just like they're talking. How does he know so much about manuals to computers?
Mm-hmm.
He's just going through a manual, going, "Yeah, the Berkshire one isn't that good, but this one's very good." It's like, you've read that manual?
Yeah, he just
Like, what? And he loved animals, dude. There's also in those videos you could just see his cats lying around, and he had a bunch of cats all the time. There was one story that his one of his daughters told, where he left when they were leaving to go somewhere, he left a note for the people who were taking care of his cats.
yeah.
I think the names was like, it was like Freddie. It was Freddie and Tommy. Let's say
Doesn't matter. Yeah.
they were like a father and son tomcat, and it was like an 18-step thing of like, if Tommy and Freddie start fighting, the first thing to do would be to pour water on them, and if that doesn't work, you should open the door because Tommy can outrun Freddie. And if there's no way to get him out the door, then you just keep screaming and throwing water on them until they stop, whatever.
wave shirts around.
Yeah, wave shirts around.
It's
and just
like
picturing Kubrick doing that is so
do
funny.
not grab Tommy. You can grab the other one, but do not grab. Like he's so specific about just like interaction between two cats.
Yeah, exactly. Like, how does he know? Like,
imagine how everything else was. Like,
yeah, but also there was another story where he was talking about his cat was like sick or whatever. He's like, I don't know if he's drinking enough water. And he goes, well, how much water is he drinking? He's like, I don't know. He goes, there's no way to really tell how much water they're drinking. He goes, all right. And then he hangs up the phone, and then Kubrick calls him back and goes, well, how much water do they drink up every like lap, like every time they lick the water? And he goes, I don't know. I'll check it out. So the guy calls like a vet or whatever, and then he gets back to Kubrick, and then Kubrick sits there and counts the amount of licks that the cat's taking to see how much water he's drinking. Like he was that kind of guy where he was still obsessed with chess. Every time somebody would play, he learned somebody would play chess. He goes, "You play chess?" And he would play them.
I saw a funny thing actually about him and ping pong too.
Oh yeah.
With on
Malcolm McDowell.
Yeah, that he would just like make them play ping pong every time they were on set. Like a lot of their hanging out was on playing ping pong, and I think something about him wanting to get the actor wanting to get paid and being like not paying him enough because he was like, we played ping pong most of the time.
They did like 2 weeks of recording for the narration, and he goes, a week was that was ping pong. I'll pay you for 1 week.
Yeah.
That was good. But I would definitely recommend that book, Stanley Kubrick and Me. The stories that Emilio, and he was like but he was so demanding of people who worked for him too. Like Emilio would go home at night. He would drive like an hour home, and then Kubrick would call him and be like, Emilio, one more thing. Because he was so good at Kubrick wasn't lazy. Like he wasn't sitting going, hey, get this book for me.
Yeah,
he never slept. He slept so little. His wife talked about that. Like he died when he was 70. Like he slept so little and he worked so hard on these movies. It was insane.
And it says in 1985 his mother and father died 6 months apart.
That's nuts. Yeah. He
that-
died they talk about that in the book where Emilio, his assistant, after his father died. I think his father died first. After his father died, he had a dream that Jack or Jock, it was Jacques was his dad, but they called him Jack. His Stanley's father came to Emilio in a dream, was like, tell Stanley I'm all right. And then the next day, Emilio didn't tell him. He was like, I don't know if I should, like messing with a guy's emotions like that. And then the next night he had like the same dream of his dad going like, no, seriously, tell him.
Please tell him that's
so
crazy.
then he told Kubrick, and Kubrick was like, thank you a lot.
Wow. Imagine like having that dream, like, and then the next night it's like a reassuring dream where it's like, nah,
you better tell this guy. So yeah, he was like, learning about his home life in that book is just so like it paints such a human portrait of Kubrick because he's just this untouchable genius. It's like no, but he was still like a guy who was very funny. He loved having people over for dinner. Anytime he was always inviting people over. He loved having company at his house.
Yeah, and especially, I mean, obviously for someone like you who like knows pretty much not everything, but
A good amount.
close to everything about him. Like, for you to learn that he is like not just some like recluse,
Yeah, he's just
You
a
know,
nice guy.
some I guess you would call him a martyr now that he's
Yeah, I guess sort of. I mean,
like
I don't know. Well, he didn't
not
do
martyr. No,
yeah,
he's not like
something like that.
yeah, something of a god in a sense. Not
He's become like a myth ever since he died.
yeah,
but when you
yeah.
get to
he
know-
was
he-
already
He's sort of a myth
myth.
in the lexicon, the culture of movies,
Mhm,
but
mhm.
and
I
also
guess
in conspiracy culture, he's like the conspiracy director.
yeah.
People always associate him with conspiracies. Him and
Mhm.
Spielberg.
So he's just like has some air to him, and to learn that he's more human than a lot of people think is
Yeah.
very nice, sort of a nice touch. You know?
Oh yeah, definitely. I
Mhm.
definitely appreciated that when learning about. it.
Yeah. Full Metal Jacket, 1987. Pre-production on Full Metal Jacket took longer than usual. Kubrick read The Short Timers by Gustav Hasford in 1982, and his production team finally started filming in August 1985.
It was funny because it sounded like he said it was The Short Timers written by the Goose.
Yeah, I stumbled on Gustav.
Are we getting too far to the podcast where our tired brains are just thinking that's really funny?
Yeah, nothing. Yeah.
And also, as you can see, Danny's crisscross applesauce in his chair because he's afraid to let his feet touch the floor after all that shining talk. The
Yeah,
monsters are
yeah,
gonna get him.
I can't. I'm thinking about things in the corner and
Yeah.
stuff.
So, Full Metal Jacket, the pre-production for it was people say he was in pre-production for Full Metal Jacket since 1980, and I think it's not the short time like he read the novel in 1980. He was spent like 5 years developing it. I think it was he knew he was going to make a movie about Vietnam, and he was just looking for he was looking for the material, the source material. Like it was really hard for him to find that. Christian talks about that. Like it killed him that he couldn't find more stuff to make movies about. And then he read The Short Timers in 1982. That's 3 years of pre-production because they started filming in 85, right? So that's a long time. Gustav Hasford originally he was writing with him, and then he fired him, and then got Michael Herr who wrote Dispatches. Both of those guys Michael Herr and Gustav Hasford were Vietnam vets. I believe Gustav Hasford was a Vietnam vet, and Michael Herr wrote a book called Dispatches, which is like the best book ever written about Vietnam. It's like It was a report book. I don't think it was fiction. It was nonfiction. So they started writing the script. I think, and we'll talk about during the production. I think Full Metal Jacket is probably my favorite Kubrick movie because it's the one movie where it feels like Kubrick just like hanging with the boys. Like he's just working with like all these hot young, not hot hot physically, but hot like they're young and they're actors that are getting very much in demand, and he just has them for as long as he wants, and they're just chilling on the set, hanging out. I know it wasn't like that; it was extremely grueling to film, but he's hanging out with the young boys, the young bulls,
The fellas.
Yeah, with the fellas.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
What do we got?
Kubrick originally started writing the script with Gustav Hasford,
Oh, I
but
already said
fired
that.
him. Okay. Becton Gas Works in
Yes.
England was chosen as the location of the film sequence in the city of Hue in Hue in Vietnam.
That's crazy.
Hue.
Want to hear something crazy? Kubrick filmed all of Full Metal Jacket inside a 30-mile radius of his home in Chadwick-Berry.
Mm-hmm.
Because he was just like, I don't want to go anywhere. He's like, why just not do it here?
Yeah.
He found Becton Gas Works was like an industrial plant that had basically the same architecture as the city of Hue did in Vietnam. And he heard some music videos were shot there beforehand, but he heard that it was going to be demolished, and he went to the company. He was like, wait, can I film a movie here maybe? And they were like, yes.
Oh, yeah.
So then they spent a long time. They were there scouting it in like 1983, 1984. There's a picture of Emilio and Stanley Kubrick and me, where it's him scouting the location and stuff like that, and they had wrecking balls coming in. And also Kubrick talked about that he learned making movies is he liked the fact that they weren't building a set of a destroyed city. They were taking like this gasworks and destroying it.
Yeah.
He goes, it's much better when you destroy because there's a logic in how something gets destroyed. And he goes, when you take a rock, when you make a fake rock for a movie, what the production designers always do is they replicate a real rock, because subconsciously in your mind you know that there's there's a logic to each rock, like they've been bumping around like a certain time. When you make like a fake rock, it just doesn't work right.
Mm-hmm.
He applied that same logic to the Becton Gas Works.
Yeah.
And I do think some of I don't know how much of it is intentional, but I do think like sometimes when there's just like something constantly on fire and it's like that looks like a movie set a little bit. But I do think the Gas Works works as the city of Hue in Vietnam a lot. There's a lot of character to the movie.
When castings got underway, Tim Colseri was originally cast as Gunnery Sergeant Hartman, but Kubrick eventually casted Lee Ermey, who was the technical advisor on the movie, in the role.
Yeah, so Lee Ermey was actually a drill sergeant during Vietnam, and he wasn't. He was in another movie, Vietnam. I forget the name of it. It was like C Company or whatever. But so Lee Ermey, he was hired as the technical supervisor to basically train the actors, so they felt and looked and moved like Marines. And Tim Colseri was originally going to be the drill sergeant, and Lee Ermey was like rehearsing with the actors, and he would just say all this stuff, and he like basically auditioned to Kubrick. He's like, "Look, let me
just
I think I can do this. Let me do this." And Kubrick was like, "Shit, he's right." And the Tim Colseri did like a one-man show about like how that sucked. Kubrick still gave him like a credit in the credits, like his own title card. And he made him the door gunner, if you remember that scene, where he's going, get some. And he goes, how can you kill women and children? He goes, easy. You just don't lead them so much. Leading, like, you don't aim in front of them so much when they're running.
Still give him a pretty legendary.
Drops the hardest line in the movie, probably. But that sucks. And Kubrick sent out a giant cat. He was like, anybody who wants to audition can. And then he literally looked at everybody. Matthew Modine was cast as Joker. And Vincent D'Onofrio was friends with him, and Matthew Modine was like, you should send in an audition tape. D'Onofrio gets the part, gains 80 pounds. And which sucks. He gained like 40 pounds, and Kubrick was like, all right, now you look just like you can kill somebody. I need you to look like you're a big baby. So he gains more weight.
He's the one who ends up blowing his own
Private Pilot, yeah. He plays Private. And he's so good in that role. He adds like the perfect innocence. Like the scene. Do you remember the scene where they're smacking him with the soap in the towels? And Kubrick was like, "We have that. That is great." Kubrick, like, he rarely showed like enthusiasm when like a take went well, but in the commentary, D'Onofrio says like he did that, and Kubrick's like, "We have it," because the thing he does is like that's like so hard. It's so heart wrenching because not only is like obviously you feel bad for him because he just got like beat up by all these these by his like.
People
his fellow
team.
bunk,
his
team, whatever, his platoon, and then he starts crying and he goes, "Ow!"
Yeah,
he says "ow," and it really like makes him like an infant. It makes you feel really, really bad for him. The innocence of saying "ow," you're like, "Oh my god, this poor guy."
He would never, You would think like in a moment like that, someone would try to like hold it in.
Yeah,
he was just like,
yeah. That was really good. He was great in that role.
And honestly, like that's one of those that the scene where he's in the bathroom and he ends up dead, and like his face in that like is just so gripping. I feel like that's one of those like one of the most iconic scenes ever in terms of just movies in general. I mean, a lot of Stanley Kubrick's scenes are that way. But that's like one of the ones that you see on YouTube Reels.
Yeah. Exactly.
And you still watch it.
It's like
all
the ones
way.
that you see on YouTube and like I gotta watch. That.
Yeah.
And that face that he does, he was talking about that with Kubrick, where, they were talking about what he goes. Kubrick's like, Kubrick goes, "Do you know what you're gonna do tomorrow?" And he goes, "Yes." He goes, "All right, do something brilliant." And then he walks away, and then Kubrick like clears his throat. Vincent D'Onofrio says he turns around and goes, "Make sure it's big." Lon Chaney big, and Lon Chaney was like played like monsters and stuff back in the day. I don't know much about him, but that's where he got that face. Was from watching old Lon Chaney movies.
But also that scene signifies like a stark change in the tone of the film.
Oh
too,
yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Well, right after that,
a stark change in the because that's obviously it's the most tragic part of the first half. And then as soon as that happens, Kubrick just hits you with "These boots are made for walking," like the super upbeat scene. And that contrast works so well, and I love it.
So Vivian Kubrick made a making of documentary for Full Metal Jacket as well.
Yeah, she made that. She made another one, which is also awesome. There's some great stories from the if you look at the commentaries, like there's one where Adam Baldwin, who plays Animal Mother in the movie, was doing a scene, and Kubrick was just like, do it again, and Adam Baldwin got fed up, and Adam Baldwin turns around and goes, "What does this guy want?" And then Kubrick just turns. He just like pokes out from behind the camera and he goes, "How about some better acting?"
Damn.
Totally lights him the fuck up. Everybody on set like starts laughing. And if I was Adam Baldwin, I'd like to think that I would go like, "Oh damn, that was pretty."
Yeah, yeah.
But, you know.
Mhm.
But Kubrick was insane. Like he would just walk around and be like, "How do you think the movie?" Like we said before, how do you think the movie should end?
Mhm.
And he was like, him and Matthew Modine were pissed one time, and he goes, "You know how it should end, man?" Matthew Modine just goes, "You know how the fucking movie should end? Joker should just live. He should just live and have to live with what he did." And Kubrick goes,
Okay. Yeah.
made at the end.
Yeah, that's so funny that I mean, I feel like even though he's walking around saying that, like he probably had something in mind, obviously. But
Yeah.
like he just wanted people to give him ideas
Yeah.
anyway, which was cool. That's like one of the things I heard he would just have meetings with like really long meetings with the actors and just be like,
Yeah.
What do you guys think? Like,
There's
what
no
should
such
you
thing
do?
as a stupid idea.
Ah.
Just tell me.
Yeah, that's really cool that
Yeah.
someone who was like sort of a control freak would just,
Yeah,
have.
he was a control freak in terms of composition, but he wasn't a control freak in terms of what other people had to bring to the movie. You know,
Mm-hmm. So, after Vincent
D'Onofrio,
D'Onofrio, it said, after Vincent what?
D'Onofrio.
D'Onofrio was cast as Private Pile. He gained 80 pounds for the. We already said
Yeah, we
this.
said
Okay.
that. I did a typo.
Oh, you typed it
I
wrong?
might have typed it wrong.
Okay.
Onofrio. I mean, I didn't type that. Some guy gave it to me.
Oh yeah, some random
Yeah,
guy.
yeah,
Yeah. Dude, it's like I'm thinking like, what are these names coming from? Is there not a normal like? What about there's nobody named like Jack Johnson or something? I don't know.
Nobody with a normal name. It's always the hardest name to pronounce.
Okay, Arlie Emery was involved in 2 car crashes while
Yeah.
filming.
Arlie Ermy. Did you say Emery?
Emery.
Ermy? Damn, dude, we can't catch a
E-M-E-R-Y.
break. All right, so that's so the first car crash is kind of fun, or I don't know when it occurred, but
Funny.
yes, this car crash is funny because I don't know if this is true because Arlie Ermy may have lied sometimes. We'll get to that later, but he goes, we were in the car, me, Christian, and Stanley was driving, and he was looking out on the out on the field, and he goes, "Oh, we can do the shot there, and we can do this." And he's looking out; he's not looking where he's going, and he drives off the road, and the car tips over onto its side and rolls over.
Oh, okay.
And he said, without breaking a sweat, like without breaking stride or speech, like Kubrick just like climbs out of the door and goes, and then like he just crashed, and he was just like, and then we could put the camera there, like he was still locked into it.
Yeah, he was too focused.
Yeah, and then the second car crash that Ermy was in was crazy. He broke 4 ribs. He almost died.
Oh shit.
He was on this road where like people are known for getting murdered, and he crashed his car, and he was flashing his lights. He wasn't doing that, but he was
Yeah.
flashing his lights. And somebody stopped and helped him, which is like crazy because that's like a very infamous road where people just get murdered apparently.
Mm.
And that saved his life. He almost died. Production was delayed for 4 months, or at least his scenes were delayed for 4 months. He couldn't do the barrack scenes, which is pretty crazy.
Mm-hmm. Even though it was a critical and box office success, Kubrick was disappointed that it was released 6 months after Platoon, which made $138 million at the U.S. box office alone.
Yeah. So Full Metal Jacket made like 40-something million in the U.S. box office, and they made 120 worldwide, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Platoon outgrossed its worldwide total domestically, and Platoon was released first. So Kubrick really felt burned by shit. Like we got this out a little bit sooner because it was in development forever. Like Platoon was conceived, shot, and released in the same span they were like shooting. That's maybe an exaggeration, but so Kubrick was really burned by. And Platoon's a good movie. Apparently, I haven't seen it, but people say it's a good movie. That was just an instance where Kubrick was kind of too late, but it's still. I think Full Metal Jacket is remembered better than Platoon, or at least more. But I think people talk about how Full Metal Jacket is. It's about the dehumanizing effects of war, and it's basically like watching these guys turn into killers. The movie opens with "Hello Vietnam," used ironically. It's like this. It's like the opening song 200 years from Nashville.
Mm-hmm.
Nashville. Where it's like so patriotic that the movie's using it ironically, like
Yeah,
satirically. like, we must stop communism, and all the guys are getting their heads shaved, and that's basically like a microcosm for how these guys are going through boot camp, and they're getting stripped of their personality and becoming killers and stuff like that. I think the themes of that are pretty interesting. Like, they're not the thing I'm most interested in the movie. The thing I'm most interested in is, again, this is something that I should probably credit to that guy Rob Ager or whatever his name is we talked about the relationship between sex and violence in Kubrick's movies. Also, that pops up in The Shining with Jack abusing Danny. In Full Metal Jacket, what he does is he constantly associates guns and penises. So, like, Sergeant Hartman gives the recruits the guns, and he goes, you will give your guns, your rifles, a girl's name, because these weapons are the only pussy that you people are going to get. So immediately associates the guns with like sexual pleasure, stuff like that. And Pyle names his gun Charlene, gives it like a female name. There's another scene where they're marching around. He goes, "This is my rifle, this is my gun." And they go, "This is my rifle, this is my gun." And then "This is for fighting, and this is for fun." Mm-hmm. The gun, associating the penis and the gun, the same thing. The gun is already like a phallic symbol. And then later, the first woman, there's 3 women we see in the movie. The first one is a prostitute who wants to have sex with Joker, and Joker doesn't have sex with her. And then the second woman we see, at least who's a character, is another prostitute at the end of Act 2. And the pimp describes it as like, "No boom boom for you." Boom boom is how they describe sex. Yeah. Which is also how you would describe a bullet firing. Which is also interesting. And then that scene ends with Animal Mother going like, "Go ahead, I'll skip the foreplay," when he goes and takes the girl into the movie theater. And, Animal Mother's like, he's probably the kind of guy who would rape a Vietnamese prostitute, because he's not a very nice person. Mm-hmm. He's basically what Hartman wanted Pyle to become. Like the born again hard, you're, the perfect killing machine or whatever. And so you can deduce from that he could have been raping her, and all those guys are going to have sex with her, right? And because they're all like, they're like, "What's the batting order? Like, who's going to have sex with her?" And then it fades to black, and then we see the squad leader get killed by a mine. Cowboy becomes the squad leader. He's fucking up. He can't do it properly. And then 8-Ball goes and gets shot by a sniper when he looks for a way through the city. Another guy goes and gets shot. Mm-hmm. They go to save them. They're dead. And then Cowboy gets shot by the sniper. And so this whole platoon is getting pinned down by one sniper. They get into the building, and Joker gets up there, and he goes to shoot, but his gun jams, and he can't shoot her. And then the sniper turns around. It's a 14-year-old girl. It's like a little girl, and she starts shooting at him. And then Rafter Man, who's been at Joker's side this whole movie, he's like another war correspondent journalist, kills her, or shoots her at least, incapacitates her. And Rafter Man goes, "I fucking blew her away." He goes, "Am I a life taker? Am I a heartbreaker?" Basically, like, am I a killer or a lover? Like that kind of thing. Yeah. And then Joker goes, and she's breathing on the ground. Very, like, if you listen to her breathing, it obviously is her dying. But you can listen. If you listen to it in another context, it's you can see how it can be construed as like a sexual thing. She's on her back. Yeah. Right. And he goes, Joker goes, "We can't just leave her like this." And then Animal Mother goes, "Fuck her." He goes, "Let her rot," or whatever. And they have and then he ends up killing her with a gun, which with Kubrick is already associated with a phallic imagery. Mm-hmm. So I think that scene is partly like a metaphor for what happened in the movie theater when they all had sex with that prostitute, but also that thing of them having sex with a prostitute, which the final battle is a metaphor of, is also a microcosm of the American involvement in Vietnam as a whole. Like, Joker is finally, like, when he kills her, he's finally taking part in the war. He's finally becoming a killer. He's taking part in the rape of Vietnam. Yeah. Because the only 3 women, 2 of them are prostitutes, and then one of them is in the sequence where she's acting as the metaphor for the prostitute. So basically, all 3 women are prostitutes. Yeah. So that's what I think about it is really interesting. And also, Joker has this amazing. His character is good because he has this amazing perspective on the whole thing. Like, he's sort of like an outsider. Like, he's very conscious of himself. Like, he's always walking around. Like, the best line of the movie is he goes they're talking about why are you in Vietnam or whatever, and all these guys are like, I don't know why I belong in Vietnam, like I kill him, whatever. They're all saying their things, and the Joker goes, I wanted to see exotic Vietnam, the crown jewel of Southeast Asia. I wanted to come meet an ancient and stimulating culture and stimulating people and kill them.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to be the first kid on my block with a confirmed kill. Like he has that. He's smart enough to realize the sarcasm and the irony of what's happening and stuff. Yeah, Joker's a great character.
Yeah. Do you want to keep going, or should we?
Do you have any thoughts? I have one more thought if you don't have any.
You can go.
So I talked about the ending with Kubrick. His original ending was where Joker was going to get shot, and then he was going to freeze frame, and then it was going to flash back to Joker playing as a soldier when he was a kid. Basically, highlight these are just kids too.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Because that was you can also sort of see that's still in the movie at the end because he has them singing the Mickey Mouse song. It ends with all the going MICKEYMOUSC Mickey Mouse, and people are like, "What is that's weird? That leaves a bad taste in my mouth." But he's basically saying like these are still just kids.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's a strange
Yeah,
way to end the movie.
you kind of lose that throughout the movie, like the fact that they are. I mean, you don't lose it, but it's like one of those things during like any war film. I feel like you kind of forget that they're like
Right.
some of them are in their teens still, like
I'm
just based off what's going on.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm basically 25. You're 25. We were probably older than 80% of the guys who died in Vietnam.
And World War
II, they were all 16 to 24. Like it's
yeah. Mm-hmm.
they were just kids. So
Yeah, it's like, and it's like easy to forget that unless you're given like a sort of a reminder towards the end. So now we're gonna get into some more films that were never made,
sadly,
and I think we would have loved to see them. The first one is The Aryan Papers. In the early 90s, Kubrick wanted to make the definitive movie on the Holocaust. Eventually, he chose to adapt Wartime Lies by Louis Begley.
a nice pronounceable name. I love to see it.
Finally.
Like I said, I think we were
Jeez.
talking about The Shrine. Like Kubrick always wanted to make a movie about the Holocaust, and he did a lot of. It got really far into pre-production. This movie, like they casted it. They were about to shoot it. They were getting the permits to like hang Nazi flags in certain towns in like Poland, Slovakia. I think Poland and Slovakia, and they were going to have tram cars that come out of the museums to use in the movie. And yeah, so in Wartime Lies, the guy Louis Begley was like, "Holy shit, Stanley Kubrick is going to direct my book. This is insane." And I don't know if he collaborated on the script. Did it say? Does it say if he collaborated on the script with them?
It doesn't say anything about
Unlike
that.
Napoleon, we don't have a script for Wartime Lies or the Aryan Papers.
Oh, there's no
no
script
script.
for it.
Yeah.
Oh, do you think he got? Do you think he ever had one? And
Definitely a completed, at least a draft, because they were in pre-production.
Mhm.
You know,
But
They-
there's
and,
no-
and the guy Joseph Mazzello, who was cast, the kid,
Mhm.
his mom had to read the script.
Oh wow, yeah.
So
But there's just not one in circulation. You mean?
yeah, you can't find one.
Mm-hmm. So the filming was to take place all over Europe and mostly Slovakia,
Mm-hmm.
and then the Aryan Papers was deep into pre-production when the movie was canceled after Schindler's List started filming, but it wasn't the only reason the movie was canceled.
Yeah. So the reason why he was like, all right, because he got kind of burned a little bit on Full Metal Jacket, where Platoon came out, and he was like, do I really want to do this again
Yeah.
with Schindler's List? You know, but there's two other reasons why. That's like the official reason. Like, oh, Schindler's List, it's already been done, whatever. According to, I think it was Ken Adam, was the production designer. Whoever was production designer at that time, his daughter, I think Anya, Kubrick's daughter Anya, got pregnant, and Kubrick was going to travel to another country to film. He hadn't done that in a while. He's been in England for like 20 years at this point. And Anya got pregnant, and the guy said, well, that's the end of this movie. And they go, what are you talking about? He goes, if Anya's pregnant, Christiane's not going to leave England. And if Christiane's not going to leave England, Kubrick's not going to leave England.
Mm-hmm.
And then, according to Christian, there was another reason where she goes, there was another reason where, like, he read everything. He knew everything about, he knew everything that happened. And he struggled over, like, how could I film what I know happened?
Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's like, how could I even prepare to film it?
Yeah, like why?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, like, I'm glad that he stopped because he was just getting so depressed.
Learning more and more about
Yeah, like having to do this movie.
what happened. Yeah.
And I'm sure like it would have been, and again, a Holocaust movie from Kubrick, who's known for pushing these, like, I don't know what we would have seen
Yeah, yeah.
from
And
that.
it's, I mean, even like Schindler's List, like
It's heavy.
I can't imagine what that was like filming that. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, so, yeah, I could see why that would be something that would, for someone like Stanley Kubrick, to have to push himself to learn so much about something like that.
Yeah.
With knowing how obsessive he is, he probably
Like the worst thing to
Ended
be
up-
obsessed about.
Mhm.
Like the most depressing thing.
obsessively learning about like what took place is just
Yeah.
you know, there's a limit to what you really want to know.
Yeah.
And he probably pushed past that limit of what what you
Yeah.
really what you would want to know.
Like past the limit of what the general population knows happened. Like we know
Which is
concentration
already
camps, but
so terrible.
there's details of like, and also, he talked about. I think this is true. He talked about Schindler's List, and it was like Schindler's List not about the Holocaust. That's about saving people. Schindler's List. The Holocaust is about not saving people,
Mm-hmm.
which gives insight into what his movie would have been the most depressing thing ever, probably.
Yeah.
So what's next up?
AI, artificial intelligence.
Yes.
After the Aryan Papers was canceled, Kubrick saw Jurassic Park and decided that technology had advanced enough for him to make AI.
Yeah, you think AI is like the perfect thing for Kubrick because you see like what he did with 2001. I'm curious to what he would have done with it because 2001 I think like he got AI, but
Yeah.
I was always curious of what he would have done. I know that there was the relationship between a boy who has a mother that doesn't want to love him, and he's like because that was like a big part of I think the original short story was that since he wasn't real, the mother like didn't love him, but he was so devoted to the mother. And for some reason, Kubrick was like, "God damn, that's good. That's good."
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah, it says the original seed was a short story called Super Toys, last all summer long,
Yeah.
published in 1969.
Yeah,
That's what you were just
Mhm.
talking about.
I think that's the one. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then Kubrick went through many writers on the project: Brian Aldiss, Bob Shaw, and Ian Watson.
Some nice names.
And Brain.
I said Brain. Damn it.
I was like, no way.
Yeah, he was. The funny thing about that is Emilio talks about that, where he was driving all those writers around at one point, and they would always talk to him, and they were always trying to figure out what was Stanley, because Stanley would never tell them anything.
Yeah.
He had them all writing at the same time and didn't tell them about each other, and wouldn't let them see each other's work.
Mhm.
And one day, I think it was Ian Watson was in the car with Emilio, and Emilio brought up like, I don't know, Stanley mentioned something about Pinocchio, and the guy goes, Pinocchio. That's exactly what it is. Like Kubrick wouldn't let him know what he was thinking.
Mhm.
He was so like guarded in that, and then Emilio says Pinocchio, and he was like, I got it.
What do you mean?
He got a clue to what he was writing, because Kubrick would keep him in the dark. Like Kubrick didn't want him he was weird. Like he didn't want them to know what was going on in his own head. He just wanted to see what was going on in theirs.
Mhm.
And then he pitched it to Spielberg, the AI, and he was like a Stanley Kubrick production, a film by Steven Spielberg, like a title card, and he was going to produce it, and Spielberg would direct. He showed him all these storyboards. He was like, Stanley, or he was like, Steven, get over here. He's like, when can you be here? He goes, tomorrow. So he flew over and went in his kitchen, and he pitched him 2001 and showed them all these awesome storyboards. And then Spielberg made the movie in 2001, and I don't think it's good. Because it's like, okay, the first act is like, cool, this sort of seems like a futuristic Kubrick type thing.
Mhm.
And then the middle act is like this weird syrupy E.T., Hook-like
Mhm.
movie with like it's this weird robot Holocaust in the middle. It's weird. And then the end is like Kubrick again. It's straight, I don't like it. But yeah.
Eyes Wide Shut is their next one, 1999. After postponing AI, Kubrick returned to another project 30 years in the making. Eyes Wide Shut was adapted from Dream Story by Arthur Schnitzler.
Got it.
Got that name.
Zing!
down. Boom.
Is that it?
That's it. Yeah.
All right. So Dream Story is interesting because he wanted to make that for a long time. originally, like in the 80s, I think he wanted Steve Martin. He thought of it as like a sex comedy.
Mhm.
He wanted Steve Martin to play the main guy. There was at one point it was Woody Allen, some other actors and stuff. But then over the years, like it sort of just morphed into what became Eyes Wide Shut.
Mm-hmm.
And the story is basically this guy. In the book, it takes place in Vienna in the early 20th century. And it's this guy who's him and his wife have a conversation, and his wife tells him like, "Oh, I had an attraction to another man today," and then he feels like kind of cucked and frustrated, so he goes out and tries to get some.
Mm-hmm.
And then he ends up going into this, accidentally stumbling into the secret society thing, and he's like, "What did I just see?" And it's sort of like this one night journey through like this of self discovery type thing, which is like it's very strange. And so yeah, that's what Kubrick
Mm-hmm.
adapted.
Yeah, I saw the thing about Tom Cruise talking about his character and that how he like brought his character home by accident a little bit, and it made him like a little insecure.
Yeah.
Like the character is
yeah, it's funny because you bring that up because like in the documentary, everybody's like so earnest in talking about Kubrick's movies, and then you can tell Tom Cruise is doing like his Tom Cruise like, I brought that character Bill home with me, you know. He's like doing a performance even in the documentary that he's also narrating.
Yeah. I was wondering like when they get to that part, is Tom Cruise just gonna be narrating it? Like
Tom Cruise had a funny story when he met Kubrick. He called him up because Tom was in England because Nicole was filming a movie there, and so Tom Cruise comes on a helicopter. He says he was driving he goes, I landed the helicopter, but I like Tom Cruise.
Mm-hmm.
He probably said like, hey, land the helicopter. I don't know if he was piloting helicopters at the point. Anyway, he lands the helicopter on Stanley's like yard, and Stanley's just in the garden chilling, just sitting there on his own.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a funny story, just Stanley Kubrick sitting there. Like, you'd think he'd have like an entourage. He's just like, oh, look at Tom Cruise on a helicopter.
Yeah, Tom Cruise coming
it's
on
a funny
his
story.
Tom Cruise landing his own. It's also funny just to think that Tom Cruise landed was flying the helicopter.
Yeah, like he took the reins out of the pilot's hands. It was like Stanley Kubrick's watching. Let me do this. Just let me have this.
We're gonna land this helicopter.
Let's go make a great movie.
So the same way Kubrick created Vietnam within 30 miles of his home, he recreated New York City at Pinewood Studios in England.
Yes, he had
to build cities.
He just built like
crazy.
Greenwich Village a couple blocks. There was a woman I saw an interview with where she was talking about how Kubrick would call her and just be like, take a picture of like a garbage can, taxi. How about this? Can you send some stuff over? He was like basically her scout his scout in like for New York. And that was like a big production. And if you look at the street names, like none of the street names are anything. Like it's James Street. Like, there's no James Street. Like, Scorsese talked about that.
He just made up the street names.
And like Scorsese talks about, it was probably like intentional that it was the street was sort of like made to like feel like a dream, because the title of the book is called Dream Story, and I do think this movie is supposed to feel like a dream a lot. Like it's much more subtle than stuff in The Shining, but like you don't really know. And like I said, like a dream, you don't really realize Eyes Wide Shut's effect on you until it's over. And you wake up, and you're like, oh shit, I was dreaming that whole time. You know, it's a very strange effect, and it might just be reading too much into it because it's Kubrick, but.
Is it as, because this is one that I haven't seen, but is it as dreamy feel, or I guess how would you say airy feeling as like something
Eerie?
like 2000? No, airy, like just out there as like something like 2001, or
No, it's definitely not.
anywhere.
It's definitely not out there.
Mm-hmm.
If anything, it's just. I will say this, like in The Shining, when I say a certain theory, it's like, yeah, there's probably a theory there, right?
Mm-hmm.
But since Eyes Wide Shut is so subtle, that the line between coincidence and intention is so thin that any interpretation of the movie borders on the schizophrenic. If that makes sense.
Yeah, like it's harder. You're saying it's harder to.
It's so subtle.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the stuff that's going on, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And sorry, I skipped over this point. The Warner Brothers president asked Kubrick to cast a movie star like in The Shining, which led to Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman.
Yeah, and they were a couple. They were married at the time, and Kubrick was like excellent, and they were giant. Tom Cruise is the biggest movie star on the planet at this point, and he makes him sign a contract that says you can't do another movie until we're done with Eyes Wide Shut.
Yeah,
and then they subsequently spent 18 months on the set of Eyes Wide Shut.
That's crazy.
They worked 400 days. It holds the Guinness World Record for the longest production. 400 consecutive days of filming.
Wait, Nicole Kidman and Tom Cruise were married at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Did they get divorced like right after the movie or something?
I don't know if it was right after the movie, but it was like sometime after.
Really?
Yeah,
It's like
She
I
was
wouldn't be
33.
surprised if that was
could have been. It was a crazy experience. Their
played
children,
like a-
their children develop English accents from living over there for so long.
Yeah, that's weird. Like you just sign a contract. Like they didn't think that it would probably take that long.
Right. But also it's Stanley Kubrick, and they realized like Stanley Kubrick.
Yeah, got to
He's-
work with him.
It's to be in his body of work is like becoming a piece. Your presence is going to be timeless.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
And in that vein, Harvey Keitel.
Keitel.
I was going to say that. And Jennifer Jason Leigh were originally cast but dropped out during filming.
Yeah, Harvey Keitel's from The Irishman. He was also in Taxi Driver and Mean Streets. He was like
Mhm.
Martin. He's done a lot with Martin Scorsese, but he originally was cast as Sidney Pollack's character, Victor Ziegler. And then there was a scene where like Kubrick made him walk through a door 60 times, and he's like, "I'm not doing this," and just walked off set.
Really?
Yeah. So then they recasted him,
Mhm.
and then Jennifer Jason Leigh filmed this. I forget what scene she was filming, but she filmed, and then Kubrick wanted to reshoot it, and she wasn't available, so they cast somebody else.
For the whole you're
she was
weren't
in one scene.
Okay.
Victor Siegler's like a supporting character.
Mm-hmm. And then Emilio de Alessandro makes a cameo.
Yeah, he was a news vendor when Bill's getting followed,
Mm-hmm.
which is funny. You could see him; he's just sitting there. It's in the book. He was having a great time.
Mm-hmm.
And also at this point, he wasn't Kubrick's assistant, so he wasn't dog tired all the time.
Yeah, he was just
He was just like,
happy
"Oh, I
to
don't
be.
have to do any work. I can just
Yeah.
sit here."
It was probably
earmuffs
interesting
on.
being on set, like after probably seeing how everybody was on a 400-day
Yeah.
set.
Yeah, yeah.
I wonder
He
what that's
probably walked
like.
in like day 300. Was like, "Thank, I do not miss this." at
Yeah,
all."
yeah. Was he retired at that point, or he just was on to new things?
He was retired. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So Kubrick showed the movie to Cruise and Kidman on March 1st, 1999, and showed Warner Brothers execs on March 3rd, 4 days later. Stanley Kubrick died of a heart attack in his sleep on March 7th, 1999. He was 70 years old.
And that's just like what I said earlier. Like, he never slept.
Mm-hmm.
He was so dog tired on the set of Eyes Wide Shut. He worked so hard.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a story that Emilio has in his book where the night, I guess March 6th, the night of March 6th, he drove Stanley back from the set, or back from showing somebody something, and Kubrick like couldn't get out of the car. He was just exhausted, and he brings him up, and just puts him in bed. He just couldn't stand up, and he goes, "Thanks, Emilio." And then Emilio leaves, and then in the morning he gets a call like Stanley's dead,
Mm.
and it's like the saddest. Everybody comes to the house and stuff. And it sucks. He wasn't. Emilio's was like almost like his best friend. Like we knew him for like almost 30 years,
Mm-hmm.
and he wasn't. They didn't pick him as a pallbearer at his wedding or at his funeral.
Really?
Yeah, which kind of sucks.
I guess. I mean, that might not have been something Stanley Kubrick like picked him. Like
Yeah, I
you
know, but
Yeah.
Stanley didn't pick it, of course. But they were
Yeah,
like, there was a
obviously
little
didn't
bit
pick
of
it, but, like-
animosity there, but it was really sad.
Yeah.
And people talked about like what he thought of the movie before he died. Jan Harlan and Christian said he thought it was great and it was his best movie. But Lee Ermey, who said that story about Kubrick jumping out of the car and going, yeah, and then the shot here when the car crashed, he said that Kubrick called him and I said, "How's the movie going?" And he said, "It's a piece of shit. It's the worst thing I've ever done."
Really?
Yeah. So either he's lying, like somebody's lying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that doesn't seem like something that you would lie about.
Yeah.
You know, especially after
Yeah, it's it's a weird thing.
for someone to say that. Like,
I think that's true. That could be wrong. I don't know.
mm,
I think that's true.
mm-hmm. I will say at the
I don't
beginning-
think it's true that Kubrick thought it was. I think Lee Ermey saying that was true. I'm pretty
Mhm.
sure.
I will say at the begining of that bullet point, I was not expecting him to die by the end of the bullet.
Yeah, well, I was
Could
looking
you
at your
see
reaction.
My face? I was like, "Oh shit!"
Yeah, you were smiling when you got into it. And you're like, "Oh,
I
fuck."
feel bad for smiling, but it caught me like way off
Yeah.
guard.
It's sad, dude. It caught everybody
Yeah.
off. It was so sudden.
Yeah, yeah. The beginning of that sentence does not sound
Yeah,
like he's gonna die at the you
Yeah.
know, which is just like it shows. I mean, it shows how much he worked.
yeah,
Like to be doing that kind of like he's doing viewings of the film that he just finished right before he passed away.
and it wasn't even finished. They like some of the music wasn't
Yeah.
done. They had to do something to get the R rating where they had to CGI people standing in front of some of the nudity,
Mm-hmm.
which is like not that big of a deal.
Yeah, yeah.
But it was all supervised by Jan Harlan and Christiana
Hmm.
or Christiane.
All people who had probably been involved for 400 days, so they're like, yeah.
Yeah, right. They're like, please just get this fucking thing done.
Hmm. Okay. And then Eyes Wide Shut is released and receives generally positive reviews from critics. Does okay at the box office, but gets a terrible D- rating on CinemaScore.
Yeah, if you
likely
don't-
due to misleading marketing.
Yeah. Do you know the Cinema Score?
No.
If you get an F on Cinema Score, that's like your movie getting a 0 on Rotten Tomatoes.
Oh, okay.
Except for it's like the audience. So it's pulling the audience. So if your movie gets an F, it's like only a few movies have done that. D- is bad.
Yeah.
And if you look at the marketing for that movie, they were pitching it as like this erotic thriller, and like the two sexiest people ever, Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman, they were gonna be having sex the whole
Yeah,
time or whatever.
yeah.
It's not that at all. It's this weird, dreamy, eerie, secret society conspiracy movie. It's so strange,
Hmm.
and it's like it's in. And so the audience goes into it like thinking it's gonna be that, and then they get that. It's like all right, and then all the trailers are like, I did a bad thing.
Mhm.
It's all Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman being sexy in the mirror
Yeah.
and stuff. But critics thought it was like it was generally positive reviews. The $65 million budget made like 167 worldwide. It's like okay. The first time I watched it, I'm like, okay, it's fine. I guess I don't know. Third time, I'm like, that's good. Third time, I'm like, that's great.
Hmm. You mean, yeah. You said third time.
So one of the things that I think, and this is another thing by that guy Rob Ager, whatever his name is, he talks about like one of the subtle things I was telling you about, this like the subtle effects that Kubrick uses in the movie is like with Christmas lights because it takes place during Christmas. So in the book, the book is in Vienna in the 1920s, let's say, and the guy is Jewish. He's like secretly Jewish or whatever, and it takes place during like a carnival, not Christmas. There's an epidemic going around, right?
Hmm.
Kubrick swaps the epidemic for the AIDS epidemic. He swaps the Jewish stuff for like some gay stuff, and he switches Vienna to New York City
Just the way.
for gay stuff. I'll explain that. So in the book, after Bill is frustrated, he's Fridolin in the book, but after Bill's frustrated in the book, he goes out because his wife's like, I want to have sex with somebody else. And he goes out and he feels like emasculated, and then all these guys in the street in the movie, they call him like, hey, they call him a bunch of gay slurs and stuff like that. And he's like, God damn it,
Yeah.
not gay. And then in the book, they call him like a Jew boy and stuff like that. Like they call him like Jewish slurs and
He
shit
goes,
like
I'm
that.
not Jewish.
He's like, I am Jewish, but damn it.
I was gonna say,
yeah.
like, what does he say? I'm not Jewish.
Right. And then
Like,
there was an aspect in the book like where he's Jewish, so he can't get up into the higher classes. But so those were some changes, some interesting changes. And the AIDS epidemic comes up because like he has a near miss with AIDS in the movie.
Mm.
And but one of the things that I'll try to explain is with Christmas lights, the Christmas lights always suggest a sexual arousal.
I'm sorry, I'm just
What?
thinking about near miss with AIDS, like him like
Dodging
dodging,
like
like,
Neo.
like a AIDS. Like,
The
oh.
bullets just say AIDS on them. But with Christmas lights, the first instance of Christmas lights, this could be incidental because it's just setting up Christmas.
Mm.
Is Bill? The first words in the movie are, honey, have you seen my wallet?" And then they go out into the living room, Bill and Alice, and their daughter is like chilling with the babysitter, and the babysitter is like a young girl. And the first time we see Christmas lights is when Bill walks into the room and sees the girl. And it's not like it's framed so that you could just see it. It's not emphasizing Bill's looking at her, but that's the first time we see Christmas lights. And then we go to a party by Victor Ziegler, all these rich people who Bill's like trying to get into. It
Mm.
seems like and the whole thing's decorated in Christmas lights, and everybody's all dressed up in suits, and everybody in the party wants to have sex with each other. Victor Ziegler's like, she's the most beautiful woman ever. It's like, oh well, your wife's beautiful too. There's this Swiss guy who's trying to have sex with Alice the whole time. He's like flirting with her, and they're dancing. Bill goes off on his own thing and walks arm in arm with these two models. And again, there's Christmas lights everywhere. Everybody wants to have sex with each other.
Mhm.
Then Ziegler calls up Bill because Bill's a doctor. He calls him up to the bathroom where Ziegler's getting changed after just having sex with a girl, and the girl is like passed out. She OD'd. There's no Christmas lights in the bathroom because he got his fit. He just got off. He's not aroused anymore.
Mhm.
This girl might be dead, and he's into some he's into some trouble. Bill wakes her up, and he's like, all right, whatever. Then we go back to the party. Then later, the movie is coated with so many instances of Christmas lights. Like there's this one woman after Bill and Alice have their argument about, I just wanted to have sex with him, and he's like, God damn it, I don't want you to have sex with him. I want you to have sex with me.
Mm-hmm.
He gets a call, and it's like, this lady's dad just died, like a patient. He gets there. As soon as he walks into the room, he's framed with Christmas lights behind him. And then this lady, like, I was like, oh, Bill, thank you for coming, like this hot daughter. And they start talking, and the Christmas lights are there. And then the husband, she confesses to him, like, I love you, Bill. And he's like, we barely know each other.
Yeah, yeah.
And I don't think we had a conversation ever. She's like, but I love you or whatever. And then the husband walks into the room, her husband, and he's framed so that there's no Christmas lights behind him. And he's like a comically like a lookalike of Tom Cruise's character. Basically, like maybe she is in love with him, and like that's why her husband looks like him.
Yeah, yeah.
And this guy has no sexual energy at all or whatever. And then Bill leaves.
Like, hiya, Bill.
He's like, yeah. Hey, Bill.
Oh, hey, Bill. That's so good.
And then later, in between some of the scenes where the Christmas lights occur, obviously he's just walking in the city, so some of the Christmas lights might be incidental just to have the effect that it's Christmas, you know. But then he gets to he needs to rent a costume. I can't explain every single one. I'll be going through the whole movie.
Yeah.
But he goes to rent a costume, and he wakes up this guy in the middle of the night, and he goes in and goes, I need a costume. So he lets him in. They go down the hall, and you see Christmas lights are reflected in the glass displays of all like the costumes, and you're like, this is weird. It's just him talking to this guy. I guess the theory is out of here. There's no sexual arousal here. This is just some old Russian guy or whatever. And then you hear a noise. The guy goes, what is going on? He goes into like this office where the Christmas lights are coming from, and he sees he pulls down like a door, like a curtain, and there's like this old Chinese guy who's like a cross-dresser, and he's like, ah! And there's another Chinese guy, and then there's his underage daughter with the cross-dressing Chinese guys.
Oh, fuck.
And that's like, holy shit. And that's a big thing. He goes, get the hell out of here. He locks in the room. He goes, I'm calling the police. So that's where the Christmas lights were coming from. When he gets to the party, he finally gets to the secret society party.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's wearing masks, right? It's a complete mirror image of the party we saw in the beginning of the movie with all the rich people. There's no Christmas decorations in the mansion. Everybody's naked and wearing a mask, and they're all having sex with each other, right?
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to they all want to have sex with each other, and there's Christmas lights everywhere. Now we don't need the Christmas lights because they are having sex with each other.
Yeah.
Right? This is like like the masks were who they were at the party. Now that they're wearing their masks,
They are just...
now that they're wearing masks, they can be their true selves.
Yeah.
Essentially, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like a reverse image. And then later in the movie, Bill wants to have sex again, and the Christmas lights disappear for a while. And then the first time we see them again after that is outside of Bill's office, right outside his door. There's a Christmas light on. There's a Christmas tree that's lit up.
Mm-hmm.
And then he makes a call, and you're like, oh, who's he making a call to? He makes a call to the house of the lady who was like, I love you. And her husband answers, and he goes, hello? Hello? And he just hangs up. You're like, oh, he's trying to get some.
Yeah.
So and that's another. And then finally, after the whole thing, Victor Zugo explains the whole thing to him. He's like, this is what you saw, blah, blah, blah. Bill goes home, finally, and he shuts the Christmas lights off. And he's like, I'm done trying to get laid. This is crazy.
Yeah.
It is a comedic premise.
Mm-hmm.
I understand why Kubrick thought of it as a sex comedy. And that's a thing that's so subtle. It's not like in The Shining where like this big, you don't even notice it happening. It never calls attention to itself.
Mm-hmm.
And I think with Eyes Wide Shut, there's this weird feeling he was able to get from the movie. Like
Weird dreamy feeling, you're saying?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
At the end, the last word, the last words of the movie are the word "fuck." Right? You go in the Christmas store. There's like no Christmas lights in the store. The only time the Christmas lights pop up again, Bill tells Alice what happened. They go to the store to buy their daughter Christmas presents, and the Christmas lights only show up when Bill goes, so what do we do now? And then they have a talk about like, we're awake now. It was all just a dream or whatever. Like, and you're like, wait, did anything what we just saw, was that all a dream, or was that like a weird dream story? And she goes, there's one thing that we have to do. And he goes, what's that? And she goes, fuck. And then the movie ends. And when he says, so what do we do now? That moment, the Christmas lights pop up. The answer to that question that we learn is fuck.
Damn. I feel like I know the whole movie now. Like I don't.
No, it's a good movie. You should watch it. It's
No, I will.
I
will, yeah.
understand why like a general audience is like, this is weird. I'm giving it a D+, especially when they think that they're seeing another movie.
Mm-hmm.
But Bill, it's so and Bill, like Tom Cruise in it is just so when you watch like American Psycho, you're like, oh, he's doing this. He's doing Tom Cruise in this movie. You know, Tom Cruise in The Firm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just people wanted to go see like 50 Shades of Grey with
Yes,
Tom
that's what
Cruise
they thought
and
they were
Nicole
getting. They
Kidman.
thought they were getting 50 Shades of Grey.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, they got 50 Shades of Kubrick, which is not as sexy.
Hey, he's a sexy man. Is that how we end the podcast?
Yeah. Kubrick is a sexy man. That's how we end. Dude.
So if we've learned one thing, that Stanley Kubrick is
That's a good note to end on. If there's anything we learned about Stanley Kubrick, it's that his movies are timeless. They're cultural. The artifacts of movie history, and they will only get more relevant. His ideas were so big in each movie that's what makes them timeless. Is that every idea he was doing the idea of war. It's like that's a crazy big idea. Clockwork Orange, the idea of totalitarianism, don't take away the people's ability to choose. Like these were such giant, big ideas, and he was always looking for an intersection of subject matter in order to get the most interesting. That's why his search for subject matter was so difficult, because he was looking for the perfect intersection of I can do so many things here.
Mm-hmm.
And also, he was a very sexy man.
And also, he's very controversial. I mean, everything
pushing the boundaries.
Yeah, everything he did was controversial and pushed a boundary, and he never quite went to bat like until later on to really push back against some of the things that were said about him. But at the end, it didn't seem like he really cared either way. There were certain things.
I doubt that his image was very important to him.
He was
It seems like his family and his friends were very in his movies.
Family, friends, and his art.
Yeah, exactly.
Came down to that.
And also, you know, like you said, he pushed the boundaries. A lot of directors they get kind of snooty and tooty, and they try to I'm making a movie for other directors, and you know, I'm making art here. And they get very pretentious. But he was able to do those things operating within the appeal of the general audience, which is very, very difficult to do.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think that concludes our discussion on Stanley Kubrick. We're going to take a very long nap, and by nap I mean a night's sleep. And how did you think about this? Did you like this?
It was fun.
Yeah?
Yeah. I'm excited to do more.
Yeah?
Very satisfying to just cover everything.
Yeah, I feel like I got it all out.
Yeah, it's fun. Like, obviously, you're the expert on, or
I'm the expert compared to normal people. Compared to historians, I'm a normal person.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I felt very satisfied.
Excellent. Let's do it for real this time. If you like this, let us know. Let us know what we can change. What you want us to discuss. If you have any ideas of a premise for a podcast, it doesn't always have to be a director's filmography. It could be a certain sect of their filmography. It can be like one idea is the westerns of Clint Eastwood.
Yeah,
or it can be a movie we just do. You know, 4 films of this person, because not if somebody has 40 movies, Jesus Christ.
Yeah. Well, we can trim it down.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much for watching. We hope you enjoyed. We'll see you in the next one. Bye.
Do you want to try to do that intro one more time, maybe? 2. Or will that feel weird? Oh.
As soon as you turned around, I went like this and you turned around. I was just waiting. Yeah, let's do the intro if you want.